This guy barges into the grand hall and sentences his mother to be hanged. The reason? She sent an assassin to poison him, her own son. Luckily, he survived. But of course, the Countess isn't just going to sit there and deny the accusation. However, he has a surprise up his sleeve. He brought the assassin who tried to poison him and made her confess the horrible crime she committed. Of course, the Countess shamelessly denies it and asks for concrete proof. That's when the most trusted knight shows the forged suicide note they prepared and the Earth's memory scroll, meant to expose who gave the order. Now she knows that her plan is all messed up, and that Calyx isn't the one to mess with. What she doesn't know is that this isn't the same guy as before, because he is a loser nerd with nothing remarkable going on in his life, except for the fact that he spends hours wasting away in front of a computer screen, playing games, since obviously no one wants to be friends with him. Trying to reduce how trash his life is, he starts streaming video games since he is so good, and he encounters a supposedly difficult game called Hero's Destiny, which was sent to him by a mysterious developer. Since he dreams of being a hero, which he is not in reality, he opts into the hard game with the determination to clear it. With his in-game name, Game Master, he starts taking on the hard missions. But before he knows it, a decade of his life has gone by while he was busy trying to clear the game. However, after 10 years of being trash, he finally clears the game. He gets a congratulatory message telling him that he has now joined the ranks of the gods. It was after clearing the game that he finally realized that his life had no purpose. Suddenly, he gets a notification from the game telling him that he can go on another adventure, which will take him to the continent of Ellen without the possibility of returning without clearing the game. Excited, he clicks yes, but suddenly everything goes dark. Our guy is puzzled when this stern-looking man calls him Calyx, and he asks the man who he is. The man, on the other hand, is surprised that Calyx is asking him who he is, since the healer didn't tell him that the potion he used has any amnesia side effects. Realizing that Calyx is actually ignorant, the man introduces himself as Russell. This leaves our guy wondering what is going on because the language Russell is speaking is clearly not Japanese, and it doesn't even appear that he is in Japan anymore. Surprisingly, he can understand Russell, but the main issue is that his chest has been burning since he woke up. Calyx holds his chest tight in pain, rolling to his side in pain, and Russell apologizes for rushing Calyx. However, he lets him know that the pain he is feeling is a side effect of the potion he used, assuring him that it is going to subside later. Since recovery is going to take some time, Russell tells Calyx that he is going to leave and will come back to check on him in the morning. After Russell's departure, Calyx is left pondering his thoughts. When he finally gets a bit of strength, he stands up to look around. As expected, he makes his way to the mirror to check himself out, and just as he figured, he realizes that he is not in his body, leaving him with the burning question of who the hell he is. While he is busy wriggling in frustration, a status screen pops up in front of him, which displays his information. His name is Calyx Shiken, and he is a 15-year-old noble. As for his condition, he is currently recovering from a stab wound to his chest. His approval rating is an abysmal level of 14%, while his combat prowess is also low. When Calyx sees this, it finally dawns on him that he is in the game world of Hero's Destiny, and the option to move to the Ellen continent was real. Just as he is about to freak out, he manages to calm himself so he can think about his current situation. He touches his chest, and this hurts him so much that he falls on his knees. This leaves him wondering why he is in so much pain, and surprisingly, the pain is not even causing him to wake up. Calyx starts to realize that he is in reality and not some dream world. He finally decides to get used to his new name, Calyx, and he starts saying it repeatedly so his dull brain doesn't forget. Moments later, he realizes that he can see the status screen just by thinking about it, which obviously makes it a feature only he can see. Calyx is excited by this, as he figures out that the first thing he needs to do is gather information. At the same time, he clearly knows that if he lets his guard down, he is going to die in this world. With the little information on the status screen, he figures out that he is Calyx Shiken of the Shiken County, which means he is a part of the Count's direct family. Calyx is still trying to understand more about the situation when he hears a knock on the door. Calyx panics because he doesn't even know what to say. He is also scared that if anyone finds out that he is not the original Calyx, he might just lose his head. However, he manages to calm himself, and he asks whoever is at the door what they want. A maid's voice echoes from the door, telling him that it is time for his medicine. Calyx then tells the maid to enter, and she immediately kneels in front of Calyx, telling him to drink the medicine while it's still warm. Hit by how sudden everything is, Calyx foolishly asks for her name, but he quickly swallows it when he realizes that this will obviously give him away as an imposter. Calyx then thinks about the status screen, and it pops up right on the maid's head, displaying her information. Calyx realizes that the girl is Lila, and she is a 23-year-old who has an affiliation with Viscount Kosheran's territory. As for her combat ability, she is on the 3rd level, but Calyx ignores everything else when it dawns on him that Lila is not affiliated with the Shiken family, but with Viscount Kosheran. In addition to this, she might not be able to use mana, but she is trained like an elite Special Forces soldier, which means she is one of the best in what she does. What is baffling is the fact that she is just a maid. Calyx wonders why a maid from another household is bringing him medicine to drink when he is just recovering. Without thinking twice, Calyx figures out that drinking the medicine is a no-no. Calyx then tells Lila to leave the medicine on his table, but with a smile on her face, she insists that he take the medicine. Calyx takes the medicine cup and realizes that Lila is trying to force him to take the medicine. Unwilling to take it, Calyx fakes a pain in his chest and throws the cup away with the intention of spilling the contents. To Calyx's dismay, Lila goes after the cup, and she is able to save it with the contents still intact. Calyx cannot believe what just happened right in front of him. He also manages to hide his expression because he knows that the moment Lila sees him, she will figure out that he spilled the medicine on purpose. While Lila is telling him that the medicine is safe, Calyx is thinking about the worst-case scenario. Since he already knows that the drink contains poison, Calyx has no intention of drinking it, and he starts thinking of what to do in this perilous situation. While holding his chest as if he is in pain, Lila moves over to comfort him. Calix immediately assumes that he has managed to convince her. Calix also uses this opportunity to look more into the Kosharin household that she is affiliated with. Calix figures out that he is the son of the Count's first wife, who is unfortunately now deceased. It turns out that he has a brother from the Count's second wife, who is 16 years old. This is when he finally realizes that the second wife's name is Kosharin, which means Lila is a trained assassin disguised as a maid who was sent by his stepmother. Calix's death obviously means her son will have no one to oppose his right to the throne. Deep down, Calix is fascinated by all of these, since he just arrived in this world, and he is already figuring out such a deep level of treason. Calix finally sits back up, assuring Lila that he is good. He then goes on the offensive, asking Lila how his grandmother is faring. Lila is shocked when this question hits her, but she manages to calm herself, and she tells Calix that the Countess was saddened when she heard that Calix attempted to send himself to the afterlife. Lila lets Calix know that she was sent to make sure something like this never happens again. It finally dawns on Calix that the previous owner of the body had self-termination tendencies. And judging by the pain he is feeling and the information on the status screen, he figures out that the dude pushed a knife into his own chest. Calix then continues playing along, telling Lila that she understands everything and won't bother his stepmother again. Lila also replies, telling Calix that the woman will be relieved to hear this. Calix then tells Lila that she is free to leave, but Lila has no intention of leaving because Calix hasn't taken his medicine yet. This is when it dawns on Calix that Lila has no intention of leaving unless he drinks the medicine. Calix figures out that he is in trouble because he obviously can't refuse Lila, since she is an assassin. Even though he is a 30-plus old dude, he is stuck in a fragile teenage body. Calix starts thinking of what to do and screaming comes to his mind, but he figures out that if he does this, Lila might just cut him down immediately. Calix starts to wonder if the only choice he has is to drink the poison, but at the same time he is left wondering why Lila would resort to poison instead of just stabbing him and getting it over with. In the end, Calix figures out that Lila is doing this to avoid drawing attention to herself, which means the poison is supposed to make it look like he sent himself to his ancestors. Apparently, he also knows the poison as the slow creeping death. Calix knows one thing from his years of playing Hero's Destiny. This is the fact that one should always expect the worst, and in this situation, he clearly knows that there is no way Lila is not going to force the poison down his throat. Calix immediately figures out that the game is not about to just let him have his way. Calix has no choice but to take the cup and empty its contents into his belly. After he is done drinking it, he immediately starts thinking of how he can get out of the mess. Just then, he remembers Russell talking about a top-tier potion that he gave him, and he immediately tells Lila to step outside and call Russell for him. Lila asks him why, and Calix yells at her, asking her if he has to explain himself to a freaking maid. Lila apologizes for this, and Calix screams at her, telling her to do what he asked immediately. After Lila's departure, Calix stands up with the intention of finding the potion that Russell used on him, since he doesn't appear to be a man who would hurt him. The first thing he does is push his fingers inside his mouth to induce vomiting, but this doesn't work. He concludes that the only way out is to find the potion because even though the game is tough, he figures out that there is always an answer. Calix starts trashing the room, trying to find the potion, but he hits a dead end everywhere he looks. Suddenly, the poison takes over his body and he crashes to the ground in pain. His eyes started getting heavier, telling him that he is about to die, which leaves him wondering what will happen if he actually dies. The question remains if he is going to restart from the beginning or actually die for real. Suddenly, he notices a bottle sitting in the far corner, and this immediately draws his attention. In pain, Calix manages to crawl to where the jar is, wondering what it is. He opens it up, and the stench smell from inside almost chokes him out. When he finally figures out what it is, he realizes that it is spoiled goat milk. Calix remembers from his time playing the game that yogurt was the antidote to the slow, creeping death. But he wonders if the spoiled goat milk can be considered yogurt too. Realizing that he has nothing more than a minute to live, Calix figures out that he has no choice but to consume the milk. He is also determined to live so he can get back at Lila, who did him dirty. By the time he finishes drinking the milk, his vision goes dark, and he passes out. Later on, he slowly opens his eyes to Russell standing over him, just like before. Calix believes that he has just hit a reset, but Russell is confused, and he asks him what he means by this. However, Russell is not bothered with all of that as he screams at Calix, asking him why he messed up his room. He points to all of the mess Calix has made in the room, and he urges him to have some level of decency. Russell also asks him why he was lying on the floor and wouldn't wake up, no matter how much he tried. Russell was already scared that he almost called for a healer when Calix finally woke up. While Russell is busy yelling at him, Calix is just lying there, wishing he never experienced the horrible feeling of death that he experienced moments ago. Calix vows that no matter what happens, he needs to make sure that he survives. And to be safe, he decides to check Russell's status. From the status screen, Calix could see that the dude is 58 years old, and he is currently holding the position of the Count until the succession issue blows over. It turns out that he is also pretty skilled when it comes to power, with a B rank in military status. Apparently, Russell is just a stand-in because Calix's father died without choosing an heir. Since the dude appears to be a strict person, Calix wonders if he can trust him. In addition to this, he even saved his life with a top-tier potion. Calix finally calls Russell's name before explaining everything that happened to him. After hearing what Calix has to say, Russell expresses his disappointment that there is no evidence to support his claim. This is when it dawns on Calix that Russell is not an impartial person. Basically, he was only following the rules, which is why he saved him. Russell tells Calix that he sees him and his brother Grunbein as equals, which is why he is obliged to serve them fairly. Calix is pissed to hear this, and he asks Russell if what he is saying is that he should continue taking the medicine that was sent by his rival. Russell casually asks Calix if he has lost some of his memory because the household is currently in serious financial trouble, leaving them on a tight budget. Russell says it is actually a blessing that Lila is helping with the family business. He asks Calix if he doesn't remember all of these, or if he is just pretending that he doesn't. Calix ignores him and starts thinking of how to get evidence against Lila, who poisoned him. Calix then tells Russell to forget about what he said, but lets him know that he has one simple request to make. When Russell hears this, he concludes that Calix is acting all different from how he knows him. 4 hours later, Lila is seen jumping across the roof like Batman dressed in a hood. She notices that security has been tightened, leaving her to improvise. She is able to sneak into Calix's room via a manhole, and she is surprised that there are no guards in the room. She looks around and sees the shape of a body under the blanket on Calix's bed, giving her the impression that the dude is dead. She concludes that Calix died without suffering, since she used a special poison to take him out. She whips out a note from her pocket and places it on the table. She then looks for Calix's seal to stamp the note. After doing this, she figures out that the only thing left is to make it back safely. Suddenly, she hears a voice behind her, telling her not to make a move, and before she can even react, a sword is already around her neck. Lila recognizes the voice, and she tries to play it cool, telling Russell that it is already too late because Calix is already dead, and the family is left with Grunbein. While she is busy trying to convince Russell of what he should do, Calix's voice echoes through the room, saying everything was just as he expected. Lila almost faints in shock when she turns around to see Calix hale and healthy and even smiling at her. Calix says he is aware that poisoning is rampant in local families. He then picks up the note that Lila left on his table, saying there will be trouble if it gets out. Realizing that she is in trouble, Lila tries to fight her way out, but Russell easily blocks her attack. Russell then shows her who's the boss by grabbing her hand and squeezing it so hard that she screams out in pain. Russell doesn't stop there as he mercilessly punches her in the back to inflict even more severe injuries. Calix is stunned to finally see the overwhelming difference between the 3 class stages. After Russell is done restraining her, Calix reminds Lila that whoever tries to kill a noble gets executed, and this even applies to a noble. Initially, there was no evidence, but the note Layla just brought is enough evidence. And as for witnesses, Calix points to Lila, letting her know that she is one. While Calix is busy taunting her, she suddenly crashes to the ground, leaving Calix to ask Russell what just happened. Russell then tells him that the girl just fainted. Russell tests out her mana hole, and with this, he figures out that Lila doesn't have the capability to use mana breathing techniques. Russell mentions that Lila is at the level of an elite soldier at best, which means that there is no need for high-speed mana restraints. Russell is surprised that there was no reaction from Calix when he said this, leaving him to wonder if Calix already knew this. He remembers that he felt something off when he was told to lie low, and this all adds up to Calix's unusual behavior. This leaves Russell wondering just how much Calix knows. Calix then tells Russell to bind Lila up because he still has a lot that he wants to ask her. Russell does as told, and he ties Lila to a chair. The arm that Russell had held her is completely swollen like a balloon with blood popping out of the arm. When Lila finally wakes up, she sees Calix standing in front of her. Before she can even finish booting up, Calix starts to talk about how long it takes for the creeping death poison to take effect. He mentions that it is a poison that is ideal for self-termination since the individual dies without feeling pain. Since Calix had once attempted to take himself out, no one would have batted an eye if actually died from the poison. Calix then tells Lila that she would have succeeded if she used a fast-acting poison and even had the resolve to die with him. Calix then grabs Lila by the mouth, asking her why she didn't want to die. Basically, what Calix sees is the fact that Lila doesn't have the loyalty to dedicate her life to Grunbein's mother, Stella. Lila remains mute during all of these, and Calix calls on Russell, telling him to make Lila talk. Russell walks up to Lila and grabs her mouth, forcing it open. Calix suddenly brings out a dark pill that has a weird aura around it. With her mouth open, Calix throws the pill into her mouth, and the smell alone almost chokes her out. As if this is not enough, Calix pours water in her mouth to make sure she swallows the pill. Russell also helps with this, as he shuts her mouth to prevent her from spilling anything out. After they force the pill down her throat, Lila screams at Calix, asking him what it is he just made her drink. Calix casually replies that what she just drank is poison, and he asks her if she knows about the poison called Siddis Puppet. When Lila hears this, she screams out, saying it is impossible for Calix to have gotten his hands on the poison because it is hard for nobles to find it. Calix then replies that as long as one has gold coins, they can get whatever they want. Calix tells Lila that there is also a key ingredient in the poison, which is radish. Saying this leaves a puzzling expression on both Lila's and Russell's faces. Lila finally speaks up, saying she can't believe what Calix just told her. Calix ignores her protest and tells her that he is going to release her, but she has to report to her master that the assassination was successful. Lila is surprised that Calix believes she is going to follow his orders, and Calix asks her if she is ready to die. Calix lets her know that the poison she just swallowed has over 3,000 antidotes, depending on how it was formulated. Calix mentions that the antidote she is going to need is right in his head, and if she doesn't want to die, she should just follow his instructions. Calix asks her for her decision, and she rudely replies that she is on board, while demanding that Russell untie her. Calix is not satisfied with her rude tone, since he holds her life in his hands. Lila immediately changes up her tone, begging Calix to untie her. Calix ignores her, and she continues begging to be shown mercy because her system is upside down, causing her to want to take a dump. Deep down, Calix is happy because the spoiled goat milk he fed her is working. Calix then tells Russell to untie the ropes, but Russell is skeptical, since the girl almost killed him a few moments ago. Calix tells Russell that Lila is still an important witness, which is why they need to treat her with basic human dignity. Russell is confused by Calix using the word dignity, but Lila's scream, telling him to untie her, jolts him back to his senses. Moments later, Lila has been freed, and Calyx tells her to report to Stella that the assassination was successful. After she is gone, Calyx figures out that they need someone who can manipulate the Knight's order if they are to perfectly deceive Stella. Calyx is thinking about this when Russell calls out his name, and Calyx figures out that the dude has a ton of questions he wants to ask. Just as expected, Russell asks him where he acquired all the knowledge that he knows. Calyx asks Russell if he would believe him if he said he read them in a book. However, Russell lets him know that he doesn't believe this, since publishing such a book will only mean a death sentence. In addition, there is no way in hell that a banned book like this is lying around the castle. Since Russell is not going to believe him if he says he is from a different world, Calyx decides to use another method. Calyx asks Russell if he remembers the dagger he stabbed himself with. Russell says yes, but he is confused as to why Calyx is bringing this up now. Calyx then cooks up a lie, saying the dagger is a family heirloom passed down from his mother's side. He mentions that the dagger is said to have mysterious power, and by stabbing himself with it, he was able to obtain this power. However, Russell's reaction to his BS story shows Calyx that he doesn't believe him. Calyx continues by saying it was pretty weird to have found out that the only way to unlock the dagger's power is to push it into one's chest. Russell mentions that if the dagger were such an epic item to have, it would have been more popular. Calyx puts more effort into the lie, asking Russell if he is familiar with Claire's dagger. Russell is shocked to hear that the dagger is Claire's dagger. Russell's reaction this time around tells Calyx that he now has Russell exactly where he wants him. Russell starts complimenting Calyx's immense knowledge about things, but little does he know that Calyx hasn't even seen the Claire's dagger before. Russell then moves closer to Calyx, asking him if there is anyone else who knows about this, and Calyx tells him that he is the first person to hear about it. Calyx then asks Russell if he believes Lila's story that his father, who was a high-class knight, died from a mere monster attack. Surprisingly, all the knights guarding him also died. Calyx wants to know if Russell believes such a trash story, and Russell immediately figures out that Calyx wants his support. Russell knows that he is not supposed to take a side, but he figures out that when it comes to his boss's death, there are suspicious circumstances surrounding it. Although there is no hard evidence, he is trying his best not to involve himself in politics, since he is a principled soldier. Russell is about to speak his mind when Calyx screams out in pain, demanding to know why his father had to die. He then lets off an evil smile, asking Russell how they plan to enact revenge on the person who killed the house's lord once they find out who it is. Calyx continues by saying his father was murdered, and the Kasharan family was behind everything, which means if Grunbein becomes the head of the house, all their hopes of getting revenge are gone. At the same time, he doesn't think it is right for them to give up just because the situation is tough. Calyx then asks Russell if it is good conduct for him to follow the lead of a family that plotted his boss's assassination. Calyx's words hit Russell so deeply that he is forced to fall to his knees, swearing his loyalty to Calyx in the process. Calyx is about to start riding the wave of victory when Russell tells him not to think he actually forgot his beliefs because he is only putting them aside in the meantime. Calyx doesn't really care about this because he is happy that the strongest warrior and the most powerful figure in the Count's territory has become his ally. Calyx figures out that he is able to shift Russell's mentality by promising him vengeance. Calyx then tells Russell to lift his head because there is no need to pledge sword loyalty to him since he has no proper knightly title. Russell then reveals his vow, telling Calyx that he is going to make sure he grows strong. Calyx is glad to hear this, but he figures out that he has to quickly change the subject before Russell suggests that they begin special training. Since Stella made the mistake of trying to poison him and even leaving behind evidence and witnesses, Calyx believes that he has everything he needs to destroy Stella's faction. Just thinking about this causes Calyx to smile because this is basically the prologue to his vengeance. Russell then asks Calyx what he is supposed to do in all of these, and Calyx explains the plan to him. Later on, Stella gathers the house officials in the council room, and she wears a bright smile, since she knows what they don't. Some of the officials are confused as to why Stella is sitting on the throne. Just then, Stella tells the officials that Calyx tried to off himself the night before with the deadly poison. When the officials hear this, they conclude that Calyx is dead meat. One then tells Stella that Calyx's death has automatically rendered their faction useless. Another jumps in, saying they have to build proper connections. One foolishly asks who is going to be the next count, and his colleague lets him know that this is already decided. This dumb dude still believes that Stella is going to continue ruling, and all while they are debating this, Calyx is in his room, preparing for a nice surprise. He asks Russell if he is ready, and Russell assures him that he is going to follow him to the end. Russell is already dressed in his knightly armor, and he has his long sword with him. Stella is still busy enjoying her moment when Calyx walks into the room, sending a wave of shock and fear down her spine. To make it worse, Russell is behind Calyx, and just by entering the room, they command an overwhelming aura. Stella is forced to start asking how this happened, and even the other officials are confused too. They are also surprised that Russell is behind Calyx. Calyx then walks up to Stella, telling her that the throne she is sitting on doesn't suit her. Stella tries to act cool, asking Calyx how he is feeling. Calyx decides to play the long game with her, and he lets off a bright smile, telling her that he actually drank poison, but he managed to survive. Calyx tells Stella that she was too hasty with her plans, but Stella yells at him, telling him to stop making misleading statements. Stella tells Calyx that it is very wrong of him to paint her as a murderer, even though he never accepted her as his mother. Stella gets on his feet and slams the table, telling Calyx that she is not going to let this slide. She mentions that this is the Grand Hall, and Calyx has to take responsibility for his actions. Calyx smiles when he hears this, telling Stella that even in the midst of being exposed, she remains composed. Deep down, Stella is worried because she has no idea what Calyx is plotting. On the outside, she acts cool, asking Calyx what he is talking about. Calyx ignores her and claps his hands, which is a signal to bring in Lila so that they can hear what she has to say. When Stella sees this, she almost faints, praying that the girl in front of her is not Lila. Calyx then asks Lila what her name is, and she truthfully answers, leaving Stella sweating all over, while also wondering why Lila is there in the first place. Lila continues by saying she is a first-rank agent of the Koshirin's family Shadow Corps Special Operations Unit. Calyx asks her what she means by the Shadow Corps, and she explains that it is a special unit that gathers orphans with combat talent, thus subjecting them to extreme training at the Gorda Highlands camp. She mentions that only the most outstanding children who survive are selected and dispatched to various locations with false identities. Calyx then asks her what her false identity was in the Sheikhan Count's territory. Lila comes clean, saying she was posing as Stella's maid. When she says this, Stella almost runs mad out of anger, but Calyx is not about to stop with the questions. He asks Lila if Stella knows her true identity, and Lila says yes. Stella can no longer take it, and she screams out, saying it is all a conspiracy because Lila has been working for her for 5 years, and Calyx is suddenly claiming that she is a spy. Even the officials believe that Calyx is saying trash, but one of them knows that they are done for because Calyx has a witness this time around. One of the officials, the financial supervisor Gidros, screams at Russell while asking him if he is seriously going to believe the words of a lowly maid. Russell replies that Lila is not a lowly maid, but a criminal who was caught in the act. Russell reminds the whole room that Lila herself just admitted that she is a spy from the Koshirin family. Gidros hears this and realizes that he has nothing to say to counter what Russell just said. Another council member screams at Gidros, telling him to stop his protest because the criminal is currently speaking and they should listen to her. Gidros has no choice but to back off, while staring at Stella, who is totally confused about what to do. Calyx continues with his questions, asking Lila what mission was given to her as a maid. Lila mentions that once a month, she reports the information she gathered, and Calyx asks her what type of information she is talking about. Lila mentions that her major mission was focused on the financial ledgers created by Gidros concerning the territory's income and expenses. In addition to this, she also provided the schedule and travel routes of the late Count, Korin. As if this is not enough, she is also tasked with the political movements within the vassal's inner circle. Even Russell is pissed when he hears everything Lila is counting out. Calyx then asks her for the most recent mission she carried out, and she confesses that she tricked Calyx into drinking the deadly poison, slow creeping death. After this, she mentions that she entered Calyx's room to plant a self-termination note to stage his death to make it seem like he offed himself. Calyx doesn't stop there, and he asks her about the result of this mission. Lila mentions that she actually succeeded in poisoning Calyx, but when she later entered Calyx's room, she was caught by Russell. Stella can no longer take it, and she screams at Lila, telling her to shut her mouth. She tries to jump over the table to attack Lila, but she is held back by her son, Grunbein, and another official. Stella then demands to know if there is any evidence for what Lila just said. Unknown to her, she just played right into Calyx's hands. Calyx then calls on Russell to show them the evidence. Russell immediately whips out a forged self-termination note of Calyx that Lila planned to plant in the room. Russell mentions that he was the one who caught Lila trying to plant the note. He also brings out a scroll called the Earth's Memory, and he mentions that they must be aware of what the scroll does. Apparently, the scroll is enchanted with magic that reveals the wicked intentions of those who touch it through visions. Russell lets them know that the magic will show who gave orders to Lila, which will expose the truth for them all to hear. When Gidros sees this, he starts to panic, while wondering how they can prevent the evidence from leaking out, even if they have to silence everyone in the room. The tension in the room gets more tense as the officials are left wondering what is going to happen next. Calyx then summons the knights who have been standing outside to enter the room. The knights walk in and stand behind the officials, putting more fear into their bodies. One of them screams at the knights, telling them that they have no jurisdiction in the room because the protection of the hall belongs to the guards. Stella, on the other hand, is already scared to death, and Gidros asks Russell what he is trying to achieve. Russell mentions that he has already reviewed the contents of the scroll and they are shocking. Since he would like to avoid commotion, he had no choice but to summon the knights. One of the officials screams at Russell, telling him that he is basically leading a coup, which is why he led the knights into the Grand Hall. All while this is happening, Grunbein, who is a dumb fatso, is looking up to his mother for help. Stella, on the other hand, realizes that she might be done for because the knights are always neutral, but them acting this way means they already have undeniable proof. She concludes that they have more cards to play, since the knights are already backing Calyx. Calyx then smiles, asking Russell to tell him about the punishment for a noble who tries to assassinate their own blood. Russell simply answers that the punishment is death by hanging, according to the kingdom's laws. Just from hearing this, Stella is already picturing herself at the gallows, and she immediately grabs her son, saying Grunbein has no knowledge of everything that happened. Stella's pride immediately falls down as she starts begging Calyx to believe her, even though she is not his mother. Calyx smiles as usual while asking Lila if Stella is telling the truth about Grunbein not knowing about the whole mission. Lila crashes everything, revealing that when she got the mission from Stella, Grunbein was there. This basically seals Stella's fate, and Calyx knows it. Stella screams out in frustration, saying Lila's last claim is a lie. Apparently, it was actually a lie, but Calyx doesn't really care because they are the real cowards who have tried to kill him. With the son and mother now exactly where he wants them, Calyx smiles because his plan is finally coming together. Seeing how everything is playing out, Grunbein walks forward, and when his mother sees this, she screams out, trying to stop him. However, Grunbein walks forward and bows in front of Calyx, shocking all of the officials. They try to call out his action, but Grunbein ignores them, and he tells Calyx that he is going to accept any kind of punishment, but he wants him to spare his mother. Stella realizes that things are not going the right way, and she screams at her son, telling him to return to his seat. Some of the officials believe that Calyx is taking things too far. They are also impressed that Grunbein went this far to protect his mother. When Calix realizes that the situation in the room has changed, he realizes that he's being made out to be the villain. He wonders if this was Grunbean and his mother's plan all along. However, Calix knows how to handle everything, and he crouches over to his brother, telling him that he actually knows how to take care of his mother, which leaves him no choice. He tells Grunbean that if he admits his guilt, he is going to reduce his punishment. He assures Grunbean that if he confesses, he is going to plead with Russell to take away the death penalty. However, he lets him know that his words cannot be undone, so he should be careful. Grunbean realizes that things are going dire, and he tells Calix that he has no intention of confessing to what didn't happen. Stella also cuts in, telling Grunbean not to do anything unnecessary, while screaming at Calix for giving orders to his older brother. One of the officials laughed out loud when they heard this, reminding Stella that she tried to kill Calix, and she is still concerned about who is older or younger. Even Gidros cannot believe that Stella just ruined everything when the wind was already shifting in their favor. Just then, Calix tells two of the knights to arrest Stella. Stella thinks it's a joke until the knights push her to the table and gag her mouth to prevent her from speaking. When Grunbean sees this, the little pride he is still holding in immediately crashes. Calix then asks him if he confesses to the crime of attempting to kill him. Grunbean has no choice but to say yes, and Calix is not surprised because he was already expecting this. Calix then reveals that Grunbean's admission to his crime has made him decide not to use the memory of the earth, which could tarnish the family's honor. He also adds that Grunbean confessed before any evidence was revealed, which means his sentence is going to be reduced. However, Calix tells Grunbean that he has to close his mana hall to show that he is not going to make further appeals. Grunbean hears this and panics because he knows what this means. Basically, in this world, the only way to become a knight, which is part of the ruling class, was to use mana to enhance the body. Because of this, closing the mana hall in this world is more or less known as the social death penalty. When Grunbean hears this, he turns to his mother, wishing she could just tell him what to do. Stella tries talking, but the gag in her mouth is preventing her from doing so. Grunbean is worried that the only way to prevent his mother's crime from being exposed and to shift the death penalty is to close his mana hall. Stella can see how troubled Grunbean is about his decision, and she starts screaming. But her words are not audible thanks to the gag in her mouth. Stella knows for sure that shutting down the mana hole is the same as a death penalty for a noble. But Grunbean cannot think deeply, just like his mother. He then tells Calix that he is going to do what he wants, since promises must be kept at all costs. Russell then gives Grunbean the scroll to bite down on it while preparing to seal his mana hole. Tears roll down Stella's face because she knows that once the mana hole is closed, even the Grandmaster cannot restore it, which means Grunbean's future will not remain the same. However, Grunbean is already halfway done, since he is not a psychic and cannot hear his mother's thoughts. Within minutes, Grunbean's large mana hole vanishes and closes right in front of everyone present in the room. An expression of despair covers his mother's face because she knows what this means. On the other hand, Grunbean doesn't really feel any pain or sort, and he figures out that he made the best decision to have helped his mother the only way he could. Meanwhile, Stella knows that Grunbean might be her biological son, but he is too inexperienced and naive. Grunbean then turns to his mother, telling her not to be too discouraged because it was his dream to become an artist. Fueled by rage, Stella breaks the gag in her mouth and curses Calix and his generations, telling him that she is going to tear him apart. Calix, on the other hand, knows what he just did, because if one can't use mana, no matter how hard they train, they will never pass the level of a Class 3 knight. This basically means Grunbean can never grow past Lila's current level. However, Calix is riddled with the guilt that he just took away the future of a child who is still in middle school. However, he trashes this thought because he believes that it is just a character in a game, and nothing serious. Russell notices that Calix is acting strangely, leaving him to wonder what is happening with the kid. Calix finally pulls himself together because they have gone down the road already, and there is no turning back. Calix then tells Russell that all they have left is to continue with the whole trial of a thing. Russell then informs everyone that until the investigation into those involved in the assassination is complete, Stella and Grunbean are forbidden from any external contact. Apparently, they're going to be imprisoned in the annex. Once the judgment is passed, Grunbean and Stella are escorted out of the room. After their departure, Russell continues with the exposure business, revealing that Gidros has been accused of leaking confidential documents. Because of this, he is stripped of his position and will be detained for further investigation. Russell screams at the knights to drag Gidros out, and they do as told, while Gidros begs, claiming that he is not part of the bad faction. Gidros tries to stop the knights from doing their job, but one of them punches him in the stomach to knock him out. Calix is impressed when he sees this, but at this point, the rest of the officials are already shaking in their seats because they have seen how their counterpart is handled. At the same time, they wonder why Calix requires confirmation from someone like Russell. However, this only tells them that the entire Order of Knights has aligned with Calix, which means the whole order dispute has already been settled. It soon dawns on them that Calix is sending a warning to them via Russell's action. Russell then turns to the security chief, telling him that he has been suspended from his duties and placed under strict confinement. In addition, Russell urges him to stop making unnecessary misunderstandings by interacting with others. Knowing well that this is a fair punishment, the dude doesn't try to appeal his case. Just then, the chief administrator Garrett stands up, saying everything that has happened is because of his mismanagement of the house. Garrett then reveals that he is resigning, but Calix knows it is going to be a big loss if Garrett leaves because he is well regarded by his teammates. As if Russell knows what Calix is thinking, he tells Garrett that his resignation request has been denied. Russell then gives Garrett a list of those who are involved in the whole issue. Russell tells Garrett that once he goes through them, he should order the suspension and confinement of their duties. In addition, he tells Garrett not to allow this process to interfere with the expansion of staff members. Moments later, Calix tells Russell and Garrett that all but the 4 financial officers are subject to investigation because it is necessary to send financial officers to the Bureau of Finance. Garrett then urges Calix to give the culprits a lighter sentence because all the high-ranking nobles will just run away. However, Calix is not entirely in support of this because he wants them to buff up the finance department with qualified individuals that he can trust. Calix then asks Garrett if he is trying to say it is fine for the investigation to be put aside out of fear of disrupting the regular operations. Garrett is shocked to hear this question, and Calix smiles, asking Garrett if the officials will be grateful if he shows them leniency. This question hits Garrett pretty hard, and he tries telling Calix the officials only made a mistake in their alignment. Just then, Calix tells the man that he is not changing his mind, and this is when Garrett realizes that Calix is no longer the naive boy that all of them could control. The other officials soon realize that they are doomed because Russell and Garrett are now on Calix's side. When Calix sees the worry on their face, he smiles evilly because of the countdown to the power struggle. Before finally making up his mind, Calix starts checking out their stats. Garrett appears to be totally organized because his administrative and financial skill is top-notch. After checking out the stats, Calix lets off an evil smile because he has compiled everything that he needs to know about the officials. Even though Garrett said it would take time, Calix doesn't think it will, since he can easily read the officials like a book. With this, he is confident that all opposing factions will be eliminated, and this includes those who have ambiguous ambitions. Calix is aiming to use only those who survive the loyalty test. The officials notice the smile on his face, and fear creeps into their bodies because they know that they are dead if Calix decides that they are not worthy. This immediately pushes the officials to start lobbying, trying to tell Calix that they are all good guys. Calix makes use of this very well, telling the fellows to calm down, since there is plenty of time on their hands. After the stressful day, Calix finally retires to his room, and he crashes to his bed from severe tiredness. He remembers his life in Japan, and how he was nobody that no one cared about. This was why he started playing the game with the hopes of clearing it so that he could finally become special. After he cleared the game, he made a wish that he would just be reborn on the continent of Ellen, since his life is now very ordinary. Suddenly it dawns on Calix that the wish he made that very day might have just come to pass without him realizing it. When he started the game, he was told that he was born with a small, insignificant soul, and if he could survive the turbulent times to become a hero, granting him a seat among the gods, any wish he wanted would be granted. Calix screams off his bed because the game must have granted his silent wish. As he lies down to sleep, he wonders if he will get to make another wish if he clears this current reality too. Because of this, Calix vows to clear the game world. The next morning, Calix wakes up and stands in front of the window to take in the early sun. He is left with the question of what he should start with. And even though he is familiar with the Earl's territory, he has never heard of the Shikan territory. Calix decides to bring up the map to check where he currently is. The system then tells him that he has a history of conquering the Ellen continent, and he has received a bonus for this. Basically, his bonus is that all map markers are displayed, and Calix blushes really hard because this has just been upgraded to a treasure map. Everything is on display, including the ruins, dungeons, terrains, and features in the game. Calix realizes that this is the clear bonus that no one knows about because no one actually made it to the end of the game. To make it sweet, it even includes all of the information that Calix didn't know before. Calix lies back with the assurance that this is going to be easy, but he suddenly remembers that he doesn't remember what year it is. He checks out the date and realizes that it is the Imperial year 289, but this is weird, since Hero's destiny started in the Imperial year 294. This basically means he doesn't know about this territory, and he wonders if this territory disappeared within 5 years. Calix starts freaking out, and even though he doesn't know what might cause it, he believes that poor finances, just like Russell had indicated, might have been a part of it. Calix wonders if not being able to afford a maid also contributed to the fact that he almost got killed. He decides to check out the financial status, and to his horror, he finds something awful, causing him to even hold his head in his hands. Seeing how poor their finances are, he starts to wonder if he should just run away with the rest of the money. But he quickly trashes the idea, since he can't run away with the land. Calix figures out that he can earn money again, but the land can only be inherited by his family, so it would be a waste to abandon the land he worked hard to gain. Calix decides that he is just going to be digging through all the financial records of the estate. He realizes that the taxes obtained from farmland aren't entirely different from those of other territories. In fact, the national defense budget only temporarily increased in the past year. Calix doesn't see any issue here, but his concern moves to the estate bonds. In no time, Calix is already complaining of tiredness, since going through documents is pretty boring. Calix figures out that the first issue they are going up against is the fact that the trade with the Madrosa Desert Kingdom beyond the highlands has been cut off. Even though it is expected that there will be a reduction in customs duties from the interruption of trade between nations, Calix still can't understand how they were able to borrow such a huge amount of money. Basically, the interest on 1 year's debt is more than the taxes that they have collected in a year. He realizes that the more he looks, the more statistics he is going to get, and the best thing he can do at the moment is get information. Suddenly it dawns on him that Gidros is currently locked up in the underground prison. Without wasting time, Calix gets ready, and he heads to the underground prison with the intention of squeezing out information from Gidros. He arrives at the cell door where he finds a guard, who is surprised that he came to the prison. Calix then tells the guard to take him to Gidros' cell. Calix almost chokes from the bad stench, indicating that the sewage system has not been attended to in a while. On their way to the dude's cell, the guard mentions his surprise that Calix actually came to the prison. Calix ignores whatever he is saying because he knows that he is one of the chief security men who submits to power. The guard soon notices that Calix is not saying anything, and he starts getting worried. Calix then piles on the misery by asking the guard if it is not the right thing to pardon those who are innocent among those who were captured. The guard quickly agrees with him, saying he is right about what he said. Calix doesn't stop there, and he tells the guard that if a criminal who shouldn't be set free is set free, they should be captured and reinvestigated. He then tells the dude that he is going to leave this mission to him, and the guard salutes Calyx, assuring him that he is up to the task. Calyx cannot believe that the dude easily betrayed the security chief that he was just loyal to, which means Calyx is now his new strong leader. Calyx is not worried about this, since he plans to use the dude to the best of his ability. Calyx also urges the warden to be mindful of his formalities because he is not a lord yet. The dude apologizes for this, but Calyx just urges him to take him to the cell. As they approach Gidros' cell, Calyx hears him talking about how he can't eat the disgusting food served in the cell, with the notion that he is going to be out of there very soon. Calyx shocks him by showing up out of nowhere, asking him if he has an escape plan cooked up already. Gidros then turns the tables around, telling Calyx that he has been waiting for him, since it appears that he owes him one. Calyx is shocked to hear this, and he asks the dude what he is talking about. Calyx tells Gidros that he is going to make sure he gets hanged the right way since his time of execution is near already. Gidros then mentions that he might look frail, but he has been working as the financial officer of the estate for over 20 years. He also mentions that he actually understands why Calyx took his time to come and visit him. His expressions and words vex Calyx, who reminds him that he is the former financial officer. Gidros then continues by saying he is pretty sure Calyx wants to know about the massive debt of the estate, but this only adds to Calyx's anger. He realizes that Gidros doesn't know his place yet, and he turns to the warden asking him if there is a torture expert in the prisons. The warden nervously replies that there is, and Calyx demands that he bring the dude to him. The warden is ultimately confused as he asks Calyx if he wants him to bring the torture expert immediately, and Calyx screams at him, demanding to know if he looks like a joker. The warden realizes the seriousness in Calyx's tone and he dashes off to bring the torture expert. Calyx immediately figures out that Gidros is the real power behind the family, and this is why he thought he could smooth talk him. On the other hand, Gidros realizes that things are not going his way, and he has started crapping his pants. Calyx teases Gidros, telling him that someone like him obviously does not have enough endurance, but he would like him to do his best. He lets him know that if he is impressed by his resilience, he might just change his sentence to a slow, creeping death instead of hanging him. Seeing the evil smile on Calyx's face, Gidros realizes that he is in trouble because the dude is pretty serious. Gidros begins begging, telling Calyx to spare his life because he has valuable information. He mentions that he has a huge opportunity that will make them loads of profit. Calyx concludes that Gidros is only trying to waste his time, but at the same time, he is curious to hear what he has to say. Gidros then reveals that the entire debt of the family is owed to a merchant called Gerard Misras. Gidros mentions that Gerard manages the secret vault of the Kasharin's family. Basically, the Kasharin family used Gerard to divert the mining taxes that were supposed to go to the royal family. Calyx is not impressed by the information, and he asks Gidros what this means. Gidros reveals that revealing this act of treason to the royal family would stop them from repaying the debt. Calyx then tells Gidros that it is possible for Gerard to sell the rights to the debt at a low price before getting arrested. Calyx lets him know that he might even sell it to the Kasharin family. Gidros starts to stutter because he didn't even think of this in the first place. Just then, the warden shows up with the terrifying torture expert, who is the best they have in the territory. Calyx is happy to hear this, and he makes a fist bump to show how excited he is. Gidros, on the other hand, starts screaming, begging Calyx to have mercy on him, while revealing that the slush funds of the Kasharin family alone should exceed at least 1 million gold. The moment he says this, he catches Calyx's attention, but this is not enough to convince Calyx, and he just looks away. Realizing that Calyx is about to leave him in the hands of the scary torture expert, Gidros screams out his lungs, telling Calyx that he knows where Gerard's secret vault is located. Calyx still ignores him and leaves the torture expert to enter the cell. It is at this point that Gidros tells Calyx that he knows where the vault is located, because he has been working as a financial officer for many years. Calyx finally decides to hear him out, and he tells him to speak his mind. Calyx is interested in knowing how he figured out the secret location of the vault. Gidros is stunned by this question, and since he cannot answer directly, Calyx suggests that they get him talking by cutting off one of his fingers. Gidros panics and assures Calyx that he is going to speak. He reveals that he knows the location of the vault because he once tried to steal from it, but he failed. Calyx asks him if he went himself, and he reveals that he actually paid some thieves to steal gold from the vault. Calyx demands to know how much he paid the thieves, and Gidros reveals that he paid them a terrifying price of 3,000 gold coins. Calyx hears this and almost loses all of his brain cells in disbelief. When Gidros sees Calyx's reaction, he starts to panic because he believes that it is all over. Calyx starts laughing, and even the warden concludes that Calyx is so pissed that his anger has already turned to laughter. Calyx then mentions that 3,000 gold is half of the territory's yearly tax revenue, which brings him to the question of where Gidros obtained the money from. Calyx doesn't even give Gidros the chance to speak before concluding that he embezzled the money from the family's treasury. Gidros cannot deny this, but tells Calyx that he had no choice, and he definitely would have succeeded in his plan if the key to the secret vault hadn't been a magical crystal ball. When Calyx hears the mention of a crystal ball, he demands to know everything that is there to know. Gidros then reveals that he got the information that duplicating the crystal ball would cost him 2,500 gold coins. Calyx then tells the dude that he has been scammed, shocking him. Calyx lets Gidros know that there is every possibility that Gerard and the thieves were working together. Gidros doesn't want to believe this, saying he personally confirmed the entrance to the secret vault with his own eyes. In fact, he claims that he saw Gerard opening the door using the magical crystal ball. Calyx then asks him where the vault is, and he reveals that it is in the Gorda Highlands. However, he says he doesn't know the exact location because he was blindfolded. Calyx then takes a moment to think about this, and when he has managed to figure out where the Gorda Highland is on the map, he decides that he is going to investigate further. He also remembers Lila talking about how the training camp for the Special Forces is located in the Gorda Highlands. Once he figures out his next plan of action, he tells the warden that it is time they leave. Gidros is shocked to see Calyx leaving without saying anything, and he screams out his name, but Calyx ignores him. Once they step outside, Calyx looks at the warden disgustingly because he knows that he must have taken a bribe from the 3,000 gold that Gidros actually embezzled. Since he can't just let the warden off without punishing him, he decides that he is going to give Gidros one more push. Calyx then suddenly calls the warden's name, Shua, talking about the 3,000 gold that Gidros embezzled. He asks Shua if he is aware of this, and Shua nervously says yes. In his mind, Shua is praying that Calyx doesn't figure out that he collected money from Gidros. Calyx then crashes his mind as he mentions that he overheard something from Gidros when he sent the warden to get the torture expert. Calyx talks about how he is a generous man, but says there is so much he can overlook. Before Calyx can say anything else, Shua falls to the ground and starts begging Calyx. In his mind, he believes that Gidros has snitched on him, and he is pretty pissed about it. Shua continues begging, saying he is not going to do something like this again. But by the time he raises his head, Calyx has already disappeared. Shua is shocked, but he decides that he is going to take his anger out on Gidros, the snitch. Unknown to him, Calyx is hiding behind a well and he is smiling evilly because he has managed to turn Shua against Gidros. Suddenly, a dude with an overwhelming presence appears beside Calyx, shocking him. Calyx stares deeply at the dude, who appears to be a knight of the Blue Lion Order given his attire. Calyx then asks the dude what he wants, and the knight reveals that he is Kraut Salim. Kraut mentions that he has been ordered by Russell to accompany Calyx. Calyx then takes a moment to look into his stats. He realizes that Kraut is 26 years old and he is an A-ranked in the military stats. Calyx is impressed by his abilities, leaving him to wonder if there was a character like him in Hero's Destiny. However, he doesn't seem to remember his name, leaving Calyx to wonder if Kraut died early on in the game. Because of how high his stats are, Calyx figures out that he can be among the top 100 strongest in the future. Suddenly, it dawns on him that the dude might be this scary dude known as the Messenger of Death. He was known to be a demon who eliminates enemies without even thinking twice, and even the Black Prince, who is his lord, is said to have never seen his face. However, Calyx trashes the thought because he doesn't want to believe that Kraut is the Messenger of Death, because the Messenger of Death was described as thin and gloomy. Basically, Kraut is muscular and jovial, which doesn't show any sign that he is the Messenger of Death. Since he doesn't have considerable info on it, he decides to just ignore whatever it is that he is thinking. Calyx can see that, based on Kraut's potential alone, he is A rank, which means it is profitable to keep him around. Calyx is totally lost in thought until Kraut calls out his name several times to jolt him back to life. Calyx then asks Kraut why he was calling him, and he reveals that Gerard has come to see him. The moment Calyx hears his name, he figures out that Gerard is the dude whom the family owes all of their debt to. Since Gerard has come by himself, Calyx believes that things are getting more interesting. Calyx immediately whisks off, telling Kraut that it is time for them to leave. It takes a moment before Kraut catches on, and Calyx just concludes that an idiot like this cannot be the Messenger of Death. Kraut manages to catch up so he can lead, while Calyx walks behind him. Kraut then leads Calyx to the room where Gerard is waiting for him. Gerard quickly welcomes Calyx, introducing himself while claiming that he is in charge of a small trading company. Calyx replies that he's heard of his trading company, and even though it is not a large company, it is a respected one. With a bright fake smile on his face, Calyx tells Gerard that talented merchants are always available. Gerard humbly bows to Calyx, talking about how the dude has flattered him with his words. Calyx then asks Gerard why he has come to seek an audience with him, since he holds no official position or authority. Calyx tells Gerard that it would have been better if he had spoken to Russell, since it is a business matter. Gerard laughs out loud when he hears this, saying he knows very well that the territory belongs to Calyx, even though Russell is the one currently managing it. Gerard adds that there is no one in the territory who would dare defy Calyx's decisions. Calyx remains humble, saying he is just one of two heirs and Gerard should not overestimate him. Gerard smiles, telling Calyx that he is a bit humble because even though it has not been officially announced, he has already heard that the succession struggle is over. Calyx is impressed by this, since the issue has not been made public yet. Gerard apologizes to Calyx in case he has pissed him off, but he lets him know that this makes him a capable merchant because access to information is why he is still in business. Deep down, Gerard is already worried because Calyx is not talking to him like the naive and foolish boy he is supposed to be. He wonders if Calyx has been hiding his true self all these while because he looks pretty cynical and sharp. He doesn't want to believe that Calyx has been deceiving everyone from the start. However, he is pleased that the rumors about Calyx's beauty are true. Gerard turns out to be a freaking creep as he is already fantasizing over Calyx's beauty. Calyx senses this, and he gets off his seat telling Gerard that he is not there to waste time, and if he doesn't have any tangible business he wants to talk about, he is just going to take his leave. Gerard quickly bows his head, apologizing to Calyx because he knows that all of his plans will go down the drain if Calyx leaves. Gerard then mentions that he was just blown away by how beautiful he is, and Calyx cannot believe that he just got complimented by a full-grown buffalo. Calyx then decides to sit down again, so he can hear what the dude has to say. Gerard then mentions that he is there to speak about a massive debt left behind by his late father. Calyx starts picking his nose while telling Gerard that this is the first time he will hear of such news. Calyx tells Gerard that the financial officer is currently detained on suspicion of criminal activities. Calyx casually flicks off the dirt he picked from his nose, and Kraut cannot believe that Calyx is playing around with such filth. Gerard already knew something like this would happen, but he is prepared. He tells Calyx that it has been 5 years, which is why he was not aware of this. Deep down, Gerard cannot wait to witness the despair on Calyx's beautiful face as he drops the bombshell on him. Gerard then reveals that according to the contract that was signed, it was stated that after 3 years from the loan date, repayment of the principal and interest can be demanded at any time. While he is saying all of these, Gerard is teeming with joy inside, but he is trying his best to keep it in. Gerard continues by revealing that 2 weeks from that day, they are required to pay 60,000 gold coins. Kraut hears this and suffers from a brain freeze immediately. On the other hand, Calix couldn't care less, and he is even surprised that Kraut is acting all crazy about it. Gerard sees how calm Calix is, and he believes that he is just trying his best to stay cool. Kraut, on the other hand, is trying to restart his brain so he can understand just how much 60,000 gold is. Calix finally speaks up, asking Gerard if he can't extend the deadline a bit. This hits Gerard suddenly, and he takes a moment to reply, telling Calix that he can't extend the deadline. He mentions that since Korn's death, the creditworthiness of the territory has significantly dropped. He mentions that he actually wanted to request payment a year ago, but he decided to wait in good faith. However, he believes that it is time for Calix, the next ruler, to return the courtesy. Deep down, Calix is left in a tight spot, thinking of what to do, since Gerard is telling him that there is no room to extend the deadline when there are only 2 weeks left for the repayment. Calix finally speaks up, telling Gerard that it won't be hard for the territory to find someone who can loan them the money. Gerard smiles while clapping for Calix, saying he is pleased with the assurance. Deep down, Gerard is mocking Calix for being too naive about the affairs of things. He is pretty sure that 60,000 gold is not a sum that someone without connections can just obtain easily. Gerard then tells Calix that he is going to return soon enough with a loan agreement that has the territory's seal on it. In his mind, he is confident that there is no one out there who would lend someone as clueless as Calix 60,000 gold. Gerard is already confident that the territory is his. Once they are done talking, Gerard pays his respects and tells Calix that it is time for him to leave. Deep down, he is excited to see Calix's face when he starts begging for mercy. He is even thinking of selling Calix off on the slave market, since he has a pretty face, but not until he is done having fun with him. As he is about to leave, Gerard wishes Calix luck on his quest to get the sum. After he is gone, Calix turns around to see Kraut still trying to understand just how big 60,000 gold is, and he tells him to stop distracting him. Kraut screams at Calix, asking him how he is able to stay so calm when the territory is about to be taken away completely. Calix, on the other hand, doesn't really care, since he is busy thinking about what Gidros said earlier. Judging by the information on the map, he believes that the ruin is where the secret vault is. Nonetheless, he figures out that he has to investigate further. Apparently, on the continent, the areas outside the castles are not the kind one can casually stroll through. In addition to this, Gorda Highlands is a highly dangerous area because it is filled with troublesome monsters that he would prefer to avoid. After stepping out of the room, Calix casually walks through the castle, leaving Kraut to ask him where he is going. Calix ignores him because he is busy thinking of his plan. He figures out that he needs someone who is knowledgeable about the Gorda Highlands, and this is Lila. Moments later, they arrive at where Lila is being held, and Calix tells the guard at the door that he and Kraut will be entering, so he doesn't need to worry. As they are about to enter, Kraut tells Calix that the room used to belong to Gidros. Upon entering, Calix is impressed by how neat and arranged everything is. Lila steps out, saying Gidros had nothing but expensive things. Calix lets off a big smile, telling Lila that she looks pretty good for a prisoner. Lila returns the gesture as she confidently tells Calix how good she is. Kraut almost whips out his sword to spank Lila for talking to Calix so freely. Once the tension between them dies down, Lila speaks up, saying Calix deceived her about the whole poison thing, and the fact that he is the only one who knows the antidote. Calix commends Lila, saying he is impressed that she actually figured it out faster than he expected her to. Lila then says she is pretty sure that Calix needs her, which is why he has come to see her. Lila lets Calix know that she has no intention of following his orders again. However, she makes a move on Calix, telling him that if they have a good time together, she might just reconsider her stand. She even adds that Calix would have to satisfy her very well. This further annoys Kraut, but Calix stops him before he whips out his sword against the lady. Calix then tells Lila that he is there to give her a chance at survival. Lila demands to know what Calix means by this, and Calix reveals that even if he releases her right now, she is going to be killed the moment she leaves the castle. Lila is confused by this, and Calix decides to explain further. He reminds her that the Sheikhan family is now in a bad place with the Kosherin family, and this is thanks to the fact that he turned Stella into a villainess, while sealing off Grunbein's mana hole in the process too. However, this was all made possible thanks to Lila's witness, and the moment Lila hears this, she freezes right where she is. Lila then tells Calix that he is supposed to rescue her and make her recant her testimony, since he knows that the family is after her life. Calix tells Lila that even if she does this, Grunbein's mana hole will never return to normal, which means the Kosherin's plot to take over Sheikhan's territory has been totally crushed. Calix tells Lila that nobles usually do not let those who hinder their plans live, and Lila has fallen into this category. Lila is left stunned when she hears this because even though she has always heard people dying in service to nobles, she never believed something like that would happen to her too. She grins her teeth in frustration, while asking the universe why she did this to her. Lila then angrily grabs a lampstand and lunges at Calix, while screaming at him to die. Before she can get to Calix, Kraut steps in and kicks her in the stomach, sending her to the ground. He points his sword at her in anger, while calling her a filthy assassin for trying to harm Calix. Calix then calms Kraut down, assuring him that he appreciates his protection, but he urges him not to belittle Lila, since she is the reason he became the next lord. Kraut then apologizes for his overzealousness, but Calix assures him that there is nothing to be sorry about. Calix walks up to Lila while talking about how people tend to hate the one who opens their eyes to the truth more than the one who pushed them into despair. Calix asks Lila why she thinks this is, and Calix answers the question himself, saying it is the easier way. Calix crouches beside Lila, who just wanted to harm him, and this shocks Kraut to his bones. Even Lila is surprised that Calix is sitting beside her with no fear. Calix then tells Lila that it is always good for one to pour out their emotions. Calix then tells Lila that he has already seen that she is not the type to give up easily, given the fact that she is pretty determined. Lila confirms this, saying she is not going to die because she can't even afford to. Calix is pleased to hear this, as he tells Lila that her determination to live will make her useful in the long run. Lila is confused by this, and Calix tells her that if she helps him with his job, he is going to protect her from the pursuers in the meantime. Calix also tells Lila that he is going to take care of her family if she has one. Lila doesn't take this as a courtesy, as she screams out, asking Calix if he is trying to threaten her family because her family doesn't even have anything to do with her business. Calix gets back on his feet and lets out a loud laugh, telling Lila not to get the wrong idea because he is not even going to care if she gets killed. He lets her know that assassins like her are everywhere. This calls Lila back to reality because Calix is saying the truth, since he can easily get his hands on as many assassins as he likes. However, Lila doesn't want to conform to this, and she asks Calix why he is not going for someone else, since there are a lot of them outside. Lila is confident that Calix has a reason for going through all the trouble to come to her holding room to persuade her. Calix reveals that he is there because he is trying to save time on finding someone else, and also because of what she told him. Lila takes a moment to think about it, and she realizes that Calix is actually right because she has been dragged into operations repeatedly to track down and eliminate traitors to the organization. She figures out that at this point, she doesn't have a choice, even though she doesn't like Calix. Since she is determined to survive no matter what, she tells Calix that she is on board with him. Lila mentions that the Kasharin family and the Shikin family have already crossed a line that they can't go back from. She is pretty sure that one of them is going to be crushed in the end, and since she is going to benefit more if the Kasharin family is crushed, she has decided to side with Calix. Calix lets off a huge smile while telling Lila that she's finally starting to think straight. Lila tells Calix that she wants him to treat her like a mercenary under a mutually beneficial contract because she can't stand being ordered around for anything unrelated to the mission. Calix cannot believe the balls on her, and even Kraut is losing his cool. He screams at Lila for talking to Calix like they are partners. Lila mockingly raises her hand, telling Kraut that she is going to be polite to her employer, since it is pretty obvious that Calix is her sponsor. Lila adds more salt to the injury by teasing Kraut, telling him that it would be bad if he roughs up his new ally, since he is one who values morals. The tension between the two spikes immediately, as if they are a fighting couple, but Calix diffuses the tension by reminding Lila that she mentioned something the other day. Calix reminds her about the campsite which she mentioned. Since it is in the Golda Highlands, which Lila is familiar with, he needs her for it. Lila is confused about this, and Calix screams at Kraut, telling him that he needs a map detailing the entire kingdom and the area surrounding the Kasharin territory. He actually needs this detailed map to show them, since he is the only one who can access the window map. Kraut then reveals that there is a large map in the military council room, and Calix immediately suggests that they head to the military room. Kraut happily agrees to this, but he suddenly realizes that Calix is staying behind, which is weird. Calix tells him to go ahead while he follows, and this surprises Kraut, who asks Calix if he doesn't know the way. Calix replies that he does, but he just wants Kraut to lead the way. Unknown to them, Calix actually doesn't know his way around, and Kraut still insists that Calix lead the way, since knights are supposed to be behind their lord. However, Calix screams at him, telling him to go on ahead. Lila just stands behind, watching the two fool themselves. Moments later, they arrive at the military council room, and the setting of the room completely blows Calix's mind. Kraut reveals that the room contains the highest level of military secrets on the Allen continent. Calix then finds the map, and he is able to pinpoint the Golda Highlands on the map. He asks Kraut what he knows about the Highlands, and Kraut mentions that it is a fairly well-known area because it is a region where the Kasharin family and the Arabin family are disputing over territorial issues. Apparently, there are high-quality copper mines, but Kraut heard that the development has been delayed due to the conflict. Calix then asks Kraut if Erebon is on their side, and Kraut confirms this. Calix demands to know if the map is accurate and when the area was last surveyed. Kraut comes clean, saying he doesn't have any information about this. Lila mentions that the map is a bit outdated, but she doesn't think there should be any major errors. Lila believes that it would be fine if they just made a few changes from recent times. Calix is surprised to hear this, and he asks her if she can navigate just by looking at the map. Lila confirms this, saying she has no issue doing this, since it is an area that she has been playing around in since she was a child. Lila then asks Calix why he is interested in Golda Highlands, and Calix reveals that there is an ancient ruin that he plans to explore. Lila is surprised to hear this, because there shouldn't be anything of the sort in the area. Calix manages to convince her, reminding her that the adults were always telling them that the place is off limits when they were younger, and this gets Lila thinking. Lila doesn't want to believe that the place the adults usually tell them not to visit actually exists, and Calix asks Lila if she knows when the Kasharin family started training their secret units. Lila admits that she doesn't understand why Calix is asking her this, but since she is a 6th-term graduate and has been stationed on site for 5 years, she can estimate that it's been about 15 years. Calix then asks when the territorial dispute between the Kasharin family and the Arabin family became known. Kraut answers this, saying it was around the same time too, which was 15 years ago. Lila gets even more curious, and she asks Kraut if he has figured something out, but he lets her know that his head is as blank as ever. Lila casually looks away with a weird face, and with this arises their usual couples fight. Calix breaks their fight when he mentions that training an army requires a tremendous amount of money, which is why it is difficult to suddenly scale up the size of the troops unless there is a pretty good reason for it. Lila asks Calix what he means by this, and Kraut cuts in, saying this means the Kasharin family must have come into a large sum of money. Kraut still uses this avenue to call Lila an idiot, and Lila replies, telling Kraut that she wasn't asking him. Calix mentions that Kraut was right with his answer because he believes that the Kasharin family found a new money source around this time. Calyx is convinced that they use this money to secretly train their soldiers. And after they are done with training, they probably deploy their units in various secret operations. A good example of this is Lila herself. Lila gets more curious as she asks Calyx what exactly the money source is and how it is related to the ruins. Calyx then reveals that copper mines always emerge alongside silver mines, and it is also common for copper ore to contain silver. Kraut is shocked to hear this, and he asks Calyx if what he is trying to say is that the Kasharan family is secretly mining silver because this is a serious crime. Calyx confirms this and tells them to imagine them discovering a silver vein on their own land. However, it is well known that gold and silver mines are considered royal property wherever they are found. Even with this, Calyx doesn't think any noble is going to report it. Kraut then asks Calyx about the ruins, and he replies that he knows exactly what the ruins are. Kraut excitedly asks him about the ruins, and he mentions that it is the perfect place to hide something. Lila is confused about the whole thing, and she asks Calyx how everything he has said relates to them. Lila wants to know if Calyx is planning on starting a war to seize the funding because she is pretty sure that the Sheikhan family doesn't have the resources for a battle like this. Kraut knows the situation is sad, but he has no choice but to agree with her. Lila then mentions that even though the mines are illegal, if they seize it through war and the other party reports it, it is completely over. Lila then suggests that they report it first, but Calyx lets them know that they are not going to gain anything from this. He mentions that the territory is on the verge of bankruptcy, which is why they need the money. Kraut asks Calyx what his plan is, and Calyx mentions that the money they have been making in the mines will definitely be kept there. Since it is illegal funds, they won't be able to complain if it gets stolen. Lila and Kraut finally understand where Calyx is heading to, and they are fully on board. Later that night, Calyx prepares to leave the castle, and Russell is surprised that Calyx is okay with an inexperienced Kraut escorting him to the dangerous Golda Highlands. Russell tells Calyx that there is a proper order to things, and it would be better if this is followed instead of rushing into danger and acting hastily, which will only lead to more problems. Russell urges Calyx to reconsider, and Calyx admits that it would be easier if Russell actually stayed with him. However, Calyx believes that it is also important for young talents like Kraut to grow quickly so that the household can gradually get closer to its shared goals. Kraut blushes really hard when he realizes that Calyx believes in him. Calyx then adds that it is risky for both of them to leave the territory in such perilous times. He lets Russell know that the risk is significant, and Russell agrees with him. Russell apologizes for his shallow thinking while urging him to stay safe on his adventure. With a scary, stern face, Russell turns to Kraut, telling him not to let any harm come to Calyx. Kraut, with a playful face, assures Russell that he has everything under control. Russell is forced to spank the dude on the head so he can take the whole thing seriously. Russell then addresses those who are going on the adventure, reminding them that Calyx's wounds are still fresh, but he didn't care about this as he plans to go on this journey for the territory's sake. Because of the sacrifice Calyx is making for the territory, Russell tells the knights to make sure that they follow faithfully. The soldiers all acknowledge Russell's order, but Calyx knows fully well that there is no knight or soldier who will wish for a lord who is so weak that he attempts to self-delete himself. Calyx is not annoyed that they don't trust him, as he believes that it is his work to raise their loyalty level. Once everything is ready, Kraut lowers a rope bridge into a well located in the castle. Kraut is the first to go down with a lamp in his mouth. Calyx follows him, and Kraut makes sure to keep his eyes on Calyx, while urging him to be careful. Once they reach the ground, Kraut tells Calyx that the underground waterway is going to lead them outside the castle. However, he lets Calyx know that it is pretty far, but Calyx doesn't care about the distance. Using lamps, the two navigate their way through the dark and muddy tunnel. Soon afterward, they arrive at the exit, and Kraut grabs Calyx's hand to lift him back to the surface. Calyx looks around and realizes that they are in some sort of weird, dilapidated building. Calyx asks Kraut where they are, and he explains that it is an abandoned water mill that hasn't been used in ages. Kraut opens the door for Calyx to use, and Calyx is blown away when he sees that the rest of the party is already waiting for them. He admits that Kraut is well prepared, and Kraut smiles, while telling him to get on the horse. Calyx screams at the dude to stop calling him Lord when he knows fully well that they are heading into hostile territory. Calyx tells Kraut to start calling him Young Master, and the dude reluctantly agrees to this. Calyx looks around and realizes that every member of the party is dressed like a regular person to portray the look that they are normal dudes going on an adventure. Calyx then calls Kraut, asking him if he has gotten everything he has ready. Kraut says yes, but he is not impressed that he has to wear a smelly cloth. Calyx tells him that if he doesn't want the outfit, he is free to switch to the porter's outfit, while he plays the role of a newlywed with Lila. Kraut quickly agrees to wear the cloth, since he is not ready for Calyx to sit next to the annoying Lila. It turns out that Lila is also escorting them on the mission, but she is wearing a hood over her face to conceal her identity in the meantime. However, Kraut mentioning Lila's name and her profession gets the rest of the party curious, and Calyx cannot believe just how dumb Kraut actually is. However, Kraut is not sorry for what he said because he didn't think he lied about Lila being a lowly assassin. Kraut hesitantly walks up to Lila so that they can play their roles as newlyweds, but even Lila can't stand Kraut. She basically tells him to move because he is in the way. Calyx cannot believe that the two are still acting this way. He knows that if they get along well, they are going to be unstoppable, but if they don't, they are going to form factions and start going against each other. To make it worse, one might die in the end or even leave their lord's side. Calyx starts to wonder if Hero's destiny is not a program, but something created by a god out there to mirror the real world. Calyx starts thinking of how he can help Lila, since she is a woman, but his thoughts are interrupted by Kraut, who tells him that everything is now ready. Calyx is glad to hear this, and he tells the men that they need to get as far from the castle as they can before sunrise. With this, the party rides out in the dark of the night. They only get to camp for some hours before heading out again. They pass through villages and other rural markets on their way, and Calyx enjoys every moment of the journey. The next night, Kraut tells Calix that the village they passed during the day is the last rural village. Calix then tells Kraut to inform everyone to take off their disguises and start preparing for real combat, starting the next morning. The following morning, Calix addresses the party, telling them that the real work is just about to begin. Once everyone is dressed in their combat uniforms, Calix makes the order for them to move out. From here forward, the party maintains a military formation as they navigate the forest. Moments later, the scouts they sent ahead return. One of the scouts tells Kraut that there is a group of forest Sasquatches ahead. Basically, Sasquatches are large, hairy, human-like creatures that emerged from the race of ape-man beings. This gets Kraut worried, and he asks the scout about the size of the nest. The scout replies that there are about 5 of them. Calix then taps Kraut, telling him to lift him into the trees because he wants to see with his own eyes. Kraut does as told, and he grabs Calix, carrying him onto a tree branch. Once they are high enough, they are able to locate the monsters' camp in the distance. Seeing how organized the monsters are, Calix concludes that they cannot be underestimated, and he asks Kraut what their plan is. Kraut tells Calix that the first stage of the plan is to block the monster's retreat with flaming arrows, but the moment Calix hears this, he screams at Kraut, asking him if he is crazy. Calix tells Kraut his own plan, but Kraut tells Calix that the lives of their subordinates are at stake. While they are discussing this, Lila is listening from under the tree. Deep down, Calix is confident that there is no one on the continent who knows more about monsters than he does. However, he has no way to convince Kraut to follow his plan. Calix then says he is going to ignore the fire plan while he comes up with another critical plan himself. Although he is not sure if the rest of the squad will agree with him. Kraut then ignores Calix, and he walks over to tell the knights what his plan is, while Calix stays behind, grumbling in silence. Lila witnesses everything where she is, but she remains mute. When Calix finally sees the plan, he almost passes out in shock because he can't believe that the plan is to basically leave everything up to each other's individual abilities. However, Calix has no way to convince them unless he can prove his own abilities and establish that he knows what he is doing. Lila notices how burdened Calix is, and moments later, Kraut tells the team to get ready for their assault. Just then, Lila shows up, telling Calix that she has something to say. Calix asks her what she wants to say, and Lila mentions that the plan is going to fail. She says with their current plan, the entire group will almost be wiped out. However, she is sure that Calix will want to save them, even if it costs him his own life. Calix agrees to everything Lila is saying, and Lila is surprised that he is silent. Calix replies that he is not being silent, but he is trying to find a way to overcome the crisis and maintain control over his subordinates. Lila then tells Calix that she has an idea, and Calix suggests she cough it up. Lila reveals that Sasquatches have a strong attachment to their young, and once the battle starts, they're going to prioritize protecting their young above everything else. He mentions that whether the battle situation is favorable or not, the females will escape with the young, while the males will stay behind to buy time. However, once they have managed to hide their young ones, they are going to bring in the heat at full force. Deep down, Calix knows everything Lila is saying, but he is pretty sure that it is not going to be easy. Calix then asks Lila what her idea is, and Lila is shocked that Calix is even ready to listen to her. Lila then says there is something she would like to confirm before she says anything else. She wants to confirm if their goal is to pass through and not exterminate the Sasquatches. Calix confirms this, saying all they need to do is pass through. Since this is the case, Lila tells Calix that there is a method. She mentions that they need to make the Sasquatches believe that their hiding place is not safe. Lila says there are currently 5 monsters blocking where they are supposed to pass, and the moment Kraut makes his stupid charge towards them, she suggests that they organize another unit to make a commotion around the hiding places of the females and young. Even though the whole thing is temporary, she believes that all of the Sasquatches will have no choice but to retreat to their hiding places. Once the gap is created, she is convinced that the main force should be able to pass through safely. In his mind, Calix is a bit impressed because he once thought of this strategy. Since this is the plan, Calix asks Lila who is going to do it. He wants to know who is going to find the hiding place and attack them. Calix tells Lila that the Sasquatches will be mad and they are going to come after them, enraged in an attempt to save their young. Calix declares that this is an utmost dangerous mission, but Lila shuts him up by volunteering for the dangerous role. Calix is shocked to hear this, and Lila lets him know that she planned to handle the dangerous part from the very start. Calix is shocked to hear this, and he asks Lila if she has a siren's potion with her. Lila is shocked, forcing her to ask Calix how he could possibly know this. Calix says it is pretty simple because there is no way Lila would take on a mission that would obviously endanger her without a backup plan. Lila mentions that she needs the herb to deceive the Sasquatches, who have a better sense of smell than dogs. Lila is totally blown away by everything Calix has said, and she reveals that she has been observing Calix for a while, and it appears that her impression has really changed. In fact, she is forced to believe that he is a completely different person. Before Lila can say more, Calix starts coughing to shift her attention away from this. Once he has succeeded in doing that, he tells her that if the plan succeeds, it is going to be a good plan after all. Lila then assures Calix that he has nothing to worry about because the whole place has been like a playground for her since she was 8 years old. Calix then asks Lila why she is going out of her way to help him, and she reveals that she is going to be in danger if the Sheikhan family falls. Calix smiles because Lila is right with what she just said. Once they have agreed on this, Calix tells Lila that he has one thing to ask her before she leaves. Layla asks what it is, and he points into the distance, telling her that when dealing with Sasquatches, she should always assume that there are at least 2 more than the number she can see in front of her. Calix then reveals that there is a saying that those who went hunting will come back and attack the group from behind, which is exactly how the Sasquatches do their thing. He points to some interesting areas and asks her what she thinks of them. Lila picks one and says she is confident that it is one of them, since it is a goblin settlement, which the Sasquatches like to raid. Calix is impressed, and he thanks Lila for the useful information because with this, it doesn't seem like they are going to run into any big trouble. Deep down, Calyx knows that it is impossible to stop the monsters from the western side alongside the ones in hiding. They basically lack the manpower, and convincing his subordinates would be really difficult. Once they have come to a conclusion, Calyx tells Lila that he has a few requests to ask her. Meanwhile, Kraut is in the distance, and he is wondering what the two are talking about so silently. After Calyx is done telling Lila his plan, she blushes really hard, admitting that it is an interesting plan. Just then, Lila tells Calyx to stop moving, and when he does, Lila touches his cheeks. She looks so hot while doing so, and Calyx turns red like a tomato with half of his brain cells frying instantly to feed the snake under. Before Calyx can get any super idea, Lila lets him know that there was something on his face, which she helped him get off. Even with the explanation, Calyx still finds it hard to hide his red face, leaving Lila to wonder what is wrong with the dude. Kraut soon shows up to ruin everything, and he sees how red Calyx's face is, but he tries to hide it, saying it was nothing. Calyx then tells Kraut that he needs to prepare Lila's equipment because she will be carrying out a mission he asked her to. Calyx tells Kraut not to be surprised if Lila suddenly vanishes along the way. Kraut gets curious, demanding to know what the mission is because he doesn't trust Lila just yet. Since he doesn't trust Lila yet, Calyx tells Kraut to trust his judgment instead, since they are all in the same boat. Kraut has no choice but to back off, telling Calyx that he is going to understand just this once. However, Lila lets Kraut know that there is no need for him to get the equipment, because she is going to get it herself. Moments later, Lila is done changing into her combat uniform, and all the men watching almost lose their senses because of how straight and sexy she is. Even Kraut couldn't hide his emotions as he turned red like a tomato. After she is done changing into her outfit, she whips out a bowl containing the Siren's potion. She starts applying it on her body, leaving the group to wonder if she is trying to fool the Sasquatch by applying the scent all over her body. Even Kraut almost passes out from how concentrated the potion's stench is. He admits that Lila is pretty brave to have applied that to her body. Once she is done applying the potion, she inspects her sword to make sure that everything is intact. She knows that all eyes are on her, but she refuses to care because all that is on her mind is her mission. Lila then walks up to Calyx, asking him if it is time they start the mission, and he says yes. He lets her know that she is free to take a few soldiers with her if she wants to. However, Lila says there is no need for this because she is pretty sure that the soldiers are not going to listen to what she has to say. Calyx decides to trust her judgment and let her do her thing the way she wants it. Lila then leaps into the tree and vanishes, and Calyx tells the rest of the group that it is time for them to move too. Moments later, they encounter a strong wind, which is blowing toward the monster's village, to Calyx's dismay. Calyx panics when he sees this because Lila went in the opposite direction. Not long after this, the Sasquatches catch on to their scent thanks to the strong wind. Not long after this, they run into the Sasquatches, and Kraut makes the first move. He leaps toward the monster, aiming to cut it down at once, but he realizes too late that his strike is shallow. Calyx cannot believe that Kraut tried to cut down a Sasquatch with a slash when he is supposed to stab it in its weak spot. Since Kraut's attack didn't do anything, the Sasquatch goes on the attack, leaping toward Kraut with a punch. However, Kraut is able to block the attack, but this pushes him back, releasing a massive shockwave. Calyx is blown away by the real-life battle happening in front of him. He is excited because it is completely different from the battles he has seen on the computer. The Sasquatch then lets off a loud roar, which immediately calls the attention of his peers. Everyone on the team immediately figures out that they are screwed, and even Calyx starts regretting why they didn't just attack with fire like Kraut suggested. Instead of cowering in the face of fear, Kraut urges his knights to charge in. Calyx is surprised that Kraut is just charging in headless, but before he can run ahead to call him back, he is blocked by two of his guard knights, Albu and Thomas. The two tell Calyx not to stray from their side, and Calyx agrees to this. On the forefront, Kraut goes after the monsters with a mana strike while telling Calyx not to stray from their side. He delivers a powerful strike that shatters everything in its path, leaving Calyx to fear for Kraut. When the dust clears, Kraut looks up to see that he has managed to take down the Sasquatch. He then turns around to smile at Calyx, telling him that he managed to defeat the monster. Calyx cannot believe that Kraut is seriously standing there, acting all cool when his teammates still need help. By the time Kraut turns around, he realizes that his teammates are under immense pressure from the rest of the monster group. One of the knights gets knocked to the ground in the process, and just as he is about to be crushed by the Sasquatch, Kraut comes out of nowhere, kicking the monster in the face. By doing this, Kraut is able to create an opening for the knight to pick up his sword. Since they don't have the luxury of taking down the monsters one after the other, Kraut is really serious with the monster in front of him and relieves it of his arm. The monster screams in pain, but Kraut is more concerned about the overwhelming number of monsters available to fight them. While fighting the monsters, Kraut realizes that they are in a big mess because even the old ones are stronger than he believed. Nonetheless, Kraut keeps his rampage going as he tears into the monsters with his sword. He slides under one of the monsters and cuts off its leg in an attempt to immobilize it, leaving the monster screaming out in pain. Suddenly, it dawns on Kraut that there is something really wrong because when the scouts gave their report, there were 8 of them. However, one of them is unaccounted for, leaving Kraut to worry. Suddenly, a giant and scary Sasquatch appears in the distance. To make it worse, Kraut realizes that the monster is aiming for Calyx. Kraut freaks out as he screams at everyone present on the field to get to Calyx. Being the first line of defense, Albu tells Kraut to step back as he prepares to engage the attacking monster. From behind, Kraut unleashes a powerful mana blast at the giant Sasquatch. This creates a blinding light the moment it hits the target. When everything calms down a bit, they are all left wondering if they managed to kill the monster. Suddenly, the dust clears off, and what emerges from the dust is the Sasquatch's giant hands. Before Albu can react, the Sasquatch grabs him and flings him into the distance, right to Calyx's dismay. Calyx turns around to see his subordinate trashing the ground with his body. Even though Thomas just witnessed what happened to his counterpart, he is still standing strong to protect Calyx. Just then, Kraut shows up to engage the Sasquatch. Enraged, he unleashes a powerful mana blast to hit the Sasquatch. On the other hand, Calyx is on his knees trying to understand the situation. He then tells Thomas to leave him so that he can help take down the annoying monster. Calyx lets him know that if this keeps up, they are just going to get wiped out in the end. Thomas tells Calyx that he can't leave him, believing that if they hold out a little longer, everything will turn out great. Calyx screams at Thomas, telling him that even if they hold out, there is no one coming to save them. Calyx then grabs Thomas's arm, letting him know that if the soldiers fall, he will have to face 2 Sasquatches by himself. Calyx opens his eyes to the fact that he is just going to be in more danger if this happens. Thomas is reluctant to listen to Calyx, because the last instruction Kraut told him is never to leave Calyx's side. Realizing that Thomas is not going to listen to him the simple way, Calyx screams at him, asking him if he is trying to defy his lord's command. When Thomas hears this, he realizes that he is a knight, and it is a knight's duty to follow their lord's command. Thomas finally agrees to do what Calyx wants, since he is ready to fight for his lord too. Once Thomas goes to fight the monster, Calyx runs off to find Albu. Upon arriving at where Albu is, Calyx is horrified to see that he is missing one arm and his body is pretty bloodied. Calyx rushes over to check on him while screaming at him to stay alive. Calyx figures out that the first thing he should do is stop the bleeding and also take off Albu's clothes. Once he is done with this, he pours a low-level recovery potion into his mouth. Calyx monitors Albu's condition and realizes that he has managed to get him past the worst stage. He figures out that his stomach is swelling, which is a case of severe internal bleeding. It dawns on Calyx that the low-grade potion won't do, and he has to find a healer as soon as he can. If he can't find a healer, he should find a mid-grade potion to use at least. Calyx then grabs a sword, telling Albu to stay strong, assuring him that he is going to be back. As he runs off, Albu slightly opens his eyes to see how Calyx is struggling. Moments later, Calyx finds himself at the goblin settlement, and he realizes that Lila was right. However, he is trapped behind a tree because there are Sasquatches there, since it is their hunting ground. One of them enjoys his goblin meal so much that it spills out. This splashes on Calyx's face where he is hiding out, almost causing him to choke out from the terrible smell. Calyx wants to make his move, but he is scared that he might die. At the same time, he keeps motivating himself, saying he is going to make it out alive because the plan is perfect, and Lila must have set the trap. Even though he is no longer in front of a monitor and things are as real as they get, Calyx is thinking about saving Albu. With saving Albu overriding his fear, he steps out from where he is and draws the attention of the monsters. He screams at the red Sasquatch, telling it that it has reached the end of his day. Before the red Sasquatch can make a move, Calyx pulls the rope beside him, and this unleashes a bunch of wooden spears that impale the Sasquatch from behind, ultimately killing it. The other Sasquatch sees this and gets pretty mad. It comes after Calyx, and he initially freezes in fear, but he eventually moves out of the way just as the monster is about to punch him into the ground. Calyx makes it to where the next trap is, and he pulls the rope to activate the trap. By pulling the rope, a net appears above and traps the Sasquatch underneath. With the Sasquatch trapped and restrained, Calyx is able to look closer, and he realizes that the net is actually made from Arachne's vine. He figures out that attaching the siren's potion to the tip of the horn will render the monster totally immobile. Even though Lila used the potion to mask her odor, it is actually a strong anesthetic. Calyx does as he plans, and to his surprise, it works out. Calyx then whips out his sword and he pushes it into the monster's skull. This is the first time he's going to get the feeling of his sword hitting the bone. As he pulls out the sword, blood spills everywhere, and Calyx admits that the whole thing is disgusting. Calyx stands above the red Sasquatch to make sure it is dead, while expressing his disappointment that he actually had to kill. Even though he doesn't like it, he has figured out that he doesn't have a choice but to do it. Calyx pushes his sword into the monster's head to finally end it. Calyx is still trying to catch his breath when an armed goblin appears behind him. Before he knows it, the goblin lunges at him with the intention of taking him out with surprise. Just as he is about to get hit, Albu jumps out of nowhere, using his body as a shield once again. Albu gets cut instead, and by the time Calyx finally pulls himself together, Albu has been deeply cut by the goblin's knife. Enraged, Calyx goes after the goblin, and he frantically swings his sword at the monster. However, the goblin dodges the strike and launches a counterattack that almost cuts Calyx in the tummy. Fortunately for him, he gets lucky, and he even admits that he almost lost his bowels. He realizes that he was saved because the goblin's arms were short. Calyx is disappointed that his current body is too weak, which is why he even finds it pretty hard to swing a sword. Even though his body is weak, he knows he still has the reach over the goblin. Even if the goblin's arms and his sword are combined, it is just about 60 centimeters. However, if they combine the length of Calyx's sword and his arm, it is double the goblin's length. Calyx figures out that he has a chance as long as the goblin doesn't get close to him. Suddenly, the goblin lunges at him, but Calyx manages to pick up his sword to frantically swing it. This cuts the goblin on the ear, but things look grim for Calyx, as the goblin's sword aims for his shoulder. Just like before, he gets lucky by crashing to the ground, causing the goblin to miss the strike. Calyx was already scared that he was going to lose the entirety of his shoulder. Calyx realizes that he has no time to think since the goblin is coming at him again. Calyx swings horizontally at the goblin, aiming to cut down the goblin, but the goblin dodges. It aims for Calyx's head from the bottom up, but Calyx kicks it in the arm, disarming it. Once the goblin's sword is gone, it is left vulnerable, and Calyx takes the chance to push his sword into the monster's sword with everything he has. Calyx puts so much force into the attack that he pushes the goblin to a wall and impales it there. With this, Calyx defeats the goblin, and he crashes to his knees in shock. It finally dawns on him that everything that has been happening doesn't feel like a game because he has felt everything. In fact, he thought he was a dead man already. Just then, information pops up on the status window. The system tells him that he has defeated 2 D-class monsters, and because he defeated a strong enemy, there will be additional rewards for him. However, because he used poison and traps, the rewards will be reduced. He also gets the notification that he defeated an F-class monster. Because he won his first battle in a grand manner, Calyx is informed that he has been promoted to level 11 from level 8. The reward for this is the inventory unlock, and while he is busy staring at the status window, Kraut shows up. Kraut is still asking Calyx if he is fine until he sees the monsters he has defeated on the ground. Kraut immediately rushes over to inspect Calyx's body to make sure that he is fine. Calyx assures Kraut that he is fine, and he asks him about the situation of things at his own end. Kraut reveals that after they killed the 2 strongest members of the Sasquatch family, the rest retreated immediately, and he attributes this to luck. However, Calyx knows that it is not luck, because this basically means Lila's plan was a huge success. Suddenly, it dawns on Calyx that he can't find Albu, and he demands to know where he is. Kraut then points in the direction where Albu is lying, and Calyx's face is immediately overtaken with horror. Even though Calyx wasn't with the delusion that everyone is going to make it out, he is still shattered that Albu had to die. While crying over Albu's death, Kraut and the rest of the knights stand behind him watching him tear up. Calyx blames himself for what happened, but Kraut tries to tell him that it is not his fault because Albu died an honorable death. Suddenly, Calyx screams at Kraut, telling him that he's been ridiculous because there is no such thing as an honorable death. With tears in his eyes, Calyx tells Kraut that every death is the same. In Kraut's mind, he understands how Calyx is feeling because this is the first time of him losing a comrade. Just then, Calyx looks up to see the knights arranging more bodies. Totally distraught, he asks Kraut about the situation on his side. Kraut reveals that they registered 3 dead and 1 injured. Kraut mentions that considering how tough the situation was, it is basically light damage. In Calyx's mind, he blames himself for everything, because if he had forced the knights to follow his plan, no one would have died. He even survived thanks to the traps Lila had previously set. He also survived thanks to Albu sacrificing himself to shield him. Calyx cannot take in the pain, and he screams out in distraught, shocking the knights. Calyx then asks Kraut what they are supposed to do with the bodies of those who died in battle. Kraut mentions that they usually retrieve the bodies and take them back. Calyx then tells Kraut to make sure that this is done. After receiving the order from Calyx, Kraut turns around to the knights to relay the information. But to his shock, all of them are busy crying. They can't believe that Calyx is actually crying because of them. And because of this, all of them silently vow to protect Calyx with their lives. Kraut is shocked to see that the knights now have different expressions on their faces, which means Calyx might have finally won over their hearts. Soon afterward, Kraut informs Calyx that the bodies have been treated with preservation potions, and the preparations for the departure are complete. Kraut tells him that what they are now waiting for is his signal. Calyx also notices that the way the knights are looking at him has changed. Calyx is riddled with guilt, but he figures out that he must remain strong so that the soldiers can have hope for the future. Calyx then addresses the knights, telling them that they all did well in the battle against the monsters. He lets them know that from that point on, they are going to be marching on to their destination as fast as they can. Calyx tells those who are healthy to take care of the wounded because it is their duty not to abandon their comrades. With a thunderous voice, the soldiers acknowledge his order. An hour earlier, Lila had run into a Sasquatch that launched a surprise attack at her. She almost gets crushed, but she manages to escape. She is surprised that the monster was able to notice her. Lila then swings into action as she attaches her weapon to a tree to get herself into a tree. She continues navigating through the trees, but just when she thinks she has escaped, the Sasquatch appears right above her. However, Lila is not worried because this was a trap after all. The Sasquatch runs into a string that Lila had placed there, and this cuts it on the neck. Surprisingly, this is not enough to take out the monster as it grabs the tree, which the string is attached to, shocking Lila. The monster lunges at Lila, but she is able to dodge the attack. She leaps behind the monster and wraps a tight string around its neck, causing it to scream out in pain. This time around, more strings are attached to the monster's neck, and since the string is thin, the monster is not able to grab the string. Lila is confident that everything is settled until the monster starts trying to pull down the whole tree, holding down the string. This is when it dawns on Lila that she has to inject the siren's potion directly into the monster's bloodstream. Since the monster is just about to break free, Lila gets the feeling that she needs to hurry. She rushes toward the Sasquatch, and she slides right under its arm before leaping into the air to stick the syringe into the monster's back. The Sasquatch screams in pain, leaving Lila to wonder if her plan is going to work. However, she figures out that she has no choice but to trust the process. Moments later, Lila's greatest fear comes to pass as the Sasquatch breaks the tree holding the strings together. Just before it can go on a rampage, the effects of the potion kick in and knock the monster out. Lila heaves a sigh of relief when she sees this because she never expected the whole thing to work. This makes her admit that Calyx is ahead of her in poison, but at the same time, she is surprised that Calyx suddenly changed overnight. She has been observing Calyx for years now, but it appears that he is now a totally different person. At the same time, Lila believes that it is just exactly what she needs because her revenge mission is finally drawing closer. Now in the present hour, Calyx notices that the soldiers are exhausted, and he tells Kraut that it would be better if they took a short break. Kraut agrees with him, and moments later, Calyx shows up with potions for the wounded. He distributes the potions to them, shocking them that a lowly soldier like them could get access to one. Calyx urges them to drink the potion so that they can recover. Kraut then shows up asking Calyx what he's doing. Calyx already knows that the dude is going to cause him trouble. Just as expected, Kraut starts to berate Calyx, telling him that the potion might be a low-grade one, but it is still expensive. Kraut mentions that Russell specially made it for Calyx. Kraut adds that the 10 bottles are half of the Count's household reserve. Calix finally speaks back, asking Kraut if what he is trying to say is that he should just stand by and watch. Calix wants to know if Kraut is saying he should turn a blind eye to the injured while they suffer. Kraut is stunned by Calix's question, and he tries to say this is not what he meant. Calix can see the distress on Kraut's face, and he urges him not to worry. He assures him that after the expedition, he will get to drink as many low-grade potions as he wants. Suddenly, some of the knights stand in front of Calix to pay their respects. Kraut realizes that the knights finally figured out that they have found the knight that they want to serve, which is why they are now dedicating themselves to his cause. Calix notices how red-faced Kraut is, and he screams at him to get everything ready. Meanwhile, Calix is also red-faced, but he is trying to treat it as if it were not so serious. When it is time for them to leave, Calix checks the status screen and realizes that his approval rating has increased from 14% to 18%. This leaves a smile on his face as they continue their expedition. Soon afterward, Calix tells the group to stop in the middle of nowhere, telling them that they have reached their destination. Kraut is surprised and confused while asking Calix if they have gotten to the vault. Kraut mentions that he doesn't see any guard forces in the area, asking if the guards have abandoned the area after all these years. Calix doesn't answer his concerns and just asks him if he has heard anything from Lila, but he says no. Upon hearing this, Calix tells Kraut that they are going to be setting up camp exactly where they are. Kraut is further confused when he hears this, and Calix confirms this, saying the tent will be exactly where he is standing. Once they are done setting up camp, Calix brings out the map and points to where he believes the vault is located. Kraut is forced to ask Calix if they are not standing exactly where the vault is, and Calix says no, revealing that the vault is still a little further from the camp. Kraut screams at Calix, saying it is not a little far because if the map he is looking at is correct, it is going to take them at least 1 week to get there. Kraut reminds Calix that up until that moment, the soldiers had endured the superhuman match with nothing but their sheer willpower. Kraut lets Calix know that any further attempt to push them to march for another week will be disastrous. All while Kraut is ranting, Calix ignores him and just keeps quiet. Thomas agrees with Kraut, telling Calix that they can't stay in the location for long because the enemy might just find them there. Calix finally speaks up, and he tells them to listen. He tells them that he only pointed to the exact location of the secret vault, but he never told them that they were going there. Kraut is shocked to hear this, and he screams at Calix, reminding him that the expedition is supposed to be an attempt to steal the enemy's vault. Calix tells him that he is right, and he walks into the corner of the room. Calix mentions that they are going to enter the secret vault via the entrance that is sitting exactly where he is. Kraut believes that Calix has lost his mind, but Calix ignores him and uses his foot to clear the sand where he is standing. This ultimately reveals a square-shaped budge in the ground. Out of nowhere, a giant rock emerges from the ground requiring a passcode. Calix inputs the passcode, and to everyone's surprise, an underground entrance opens in another corner. Kraut and the others almost lose their minds, while Calix remains cool. Calix is about to step in, but Kraut grabs him, saying it might be dangerous, so they are going to take the lead instead. Calix tells Kraut that he is free to do whatever he wants, but he is pretty sure that nothing is going to happen. Kraut then asks Calix where he got the information about the dungeon from, since it looks like he knows a lot about the dungeon. Calix smiles, telling Kraut that he obtained it from a reliable source. Calix knows that Kraut will find it hard to believe him, since all he has shown so far is nothing but incompetence and weakness. Kraut is still trying to tell Calix that this is not what he meant when Thomas cuts in, telling Calix that he believes him. He mentions that if a leader values the lowest tanking soldier from the bottom of his heart, he can categorically say the leader has a just cause. The moment Thomas declares his loyalty, the rest of the group also starts to express how they genuinely feel about Calix. They assure him that they are ready to die for him as long as the cause is worth it. Calix is blown away by all their kind gestures, forcing him to remind them that he is still the same weak kid who can't use mana. He is surprised that they are willing to entrust their lives to him, and Thomas lets him know that strength doesn't end with the physical because he believes in what morality teaches. With a smile on his face, Thomas lets Calix know that strength comes from within. Calix turns to Kraut to see him crying, and Kraut admits that he is so moved by everything he's heard. Kraut tells them that he is proud of them, and Calix tells the team that they need to hurry up because there are people out there waiting for them. With this, Kraut and the knights step into the underground passageway first, and Calix takes a look at the outside first, hoping that Lila is doing fine. Meanwhile, Lila is still out there, dealing with the Sasquatches. After fetching blood from a dead Sasquatch, she uses this to light a fire to draw in every Sasquatch in the area. However, she is facing a big problem, and this is the fact that her assassin colleagues have shown up, but Lila is not hesitant to deal with them. Moments later, one of the assassins finished writing up their report about what they found. Since there are no human bodies in the area, they figure out that the Sasquatches were repelled, and given the circumstances, there is only one house in the area that has what it takes to push back a Sasquatch. After they are done with the report, they start thinking of reporting it to Ksharin. But unknown to them, Lila is watching from the shadows. Lila notices that the assassin is sealing the pouches containing the letter, which is a method scouts use to seal their reports. Lila then dips her finger into her mouth, and she places it forward to get the direction of where the wind is blowing. Once she obtains this information, she pours the Sasquatch blood she has in the bottle on one of the trees. Meanwhile, the Sasquatches are still by the fire set by Lila when they catch the scent of their dead relative. This immediately riles them up, and they start moving in the direction of where the scent came from. Just as expected, the monsters surprise the scouts and wipe them out with the exception of one. The last one manages to escape to the trees, and as they plan to make their retreat, Lila's sword appears from behind and plunges into their chest. They cough up blood while trying to turn around to see who stabbed them, but Lila just pushes them off the tree. The last surviving scout crashes to the ground with a thud, completely dead. Lila manages to retrieve the letter that the scouts have prepared, and she realizes that she has to get to Calyx as fast as she can. She is also worried about what to do with the bodies. She is confused whether to leave them there for the monsters to deal with or to clean them up. Lila chooses to let the monsters deal with the bodies, and as she dashes off, a Sasquatch shows up to consume the scout's body. On the other hand, Calyx tells his subordinates that they have nothing to be afraid of because the person who built the tunnel was a wizard, with the hope of quietly conducting research until his death. Since it is basically his retirement home, Calyx doesn't think there are going to be traps there. Nonetheless, Kraut believes that it doesn't take anything for them to be careful. Calyx then touches the wall, explaining to his squad that the wall was dug from the ground, which was created by melting stone and earth, and then solidifying it. Since there is not a single beam in sight, he concludes that a high-level spell was used. Basically, they are dealing with at least a level 8 Archmage, and if he had truly set a trap, everyone present in the tunnel would be dead before they even knew it. Moments later, they arrive at a large space, which opens up ahead in the small passage they were initially using. Kraut then tells Thomas to guard Calyx, while the rest of the team splits into 2 groups to comprehensively search the surroundings. Calyx then tells Kraut that if he finds any high-level potion, he is required to give it to the wounded. Kraut acknowledges this, and urges his men to begin with the search, while Calyx comfortably sits on the throne. Thomas then walks up to him, asking him how Kosharin was able to discover these ruins. Calyx replies that it might be by chance or that someone provided him with the information. Because they also got their hands on a magic crystal ball, Thomas starts to believe that it is not an ordinary situation. Calyx also agrees that even though the protective magic in the tunnel has weakened over time, he is pretty sure that it is not something a mere Viscount's mage will be able to easily break. Calyx becomes curious, and he asks Thomas who the lord over Viscount Servio is. Thomas replies that it is Marquis Antonio, and when Calyx hears this, he realizes that it is imperative that they prepare very well. Moments later, Kraut shows up, telling Calyx that he seems to be right about the whole area being devoid of traps. In addition, he has brought the intermediate level potions that they found while searching. When Calyx sees this, he tells the knights to take the potions to the wounded with immediate effect. In Kraut's mind, he is not entirely pleased that they are losing such expensive items. Even Calyx understands how he feels, but Calyx knows that they can't just sit around and watch their comrades die when they have enough potions to spare. Calyx then asks Kraut if there is anything they found, and he reveals that they found gemstones and crystals, which are used as magical experiment materials, along with herbs. Kraut adds that there were also a few enchanted artifacts, such as accessories with auxiliary magic, but none were valuable. In his mind, Calyx believes that there is going to be an important artifact somewhere, which is going to be displayed in the status window. Just then, Calyx catches wind of where he is supposed to go, but Kraut stops him, telling him to refrain from acting alone because they don't know if there are still dangers lying around. Calyx has no choice but to back off, since there is no way Kraut is going to listen to him. Calyx then walks to the wall and starts massaging, expecting to find a switch for the secret door. Kraut is initially confused as to what Calyx is doing, but when the secret door finally opens, Kraut's mind is blown away. To their surprise, the secret room is a surveillance room, where they get to monitor everything going on in the ruins. Even though he is excited about the whole thing, Kraut says something feels awfully strange about it, and Calyx asks him what he means by this. Kraut mentions that he has searched everywhere, but he has never seen a room like the one they are staring at on one of the screens. When Calyx sees this, he tells Kraut that this is a false ruin. Kraut is confused by this, and Calyx explains that in ancient times it was common for tombs or wizards' laboratories to build fake facilities nearby to throw off intruders or thieves. Calyx mentions that most people are lured away by anything that looks valuable. Kraut's face then lights up in excitement, saying they have finally found the Kosharin's family vault. Calyx confirms this, saying this is exactly where they are heading. Kraut asks Calyx if what he is saying is that they can steal the secret funds without going to the secret vault, and Calyx says yes. Even though the only place he has seen it is the game screen, Calyx has an idea of what to do. He walks over to the crystal ball located in the room and touches it. Apparently, to get it working, one must strongly visualize the function one desires in one's mind. Kraut sees the magic ball glowing, and he talks about how Calyx has been handling the complex artifacts with skill, which is a sign that he has talent for magic. Suddenly, they hear a sound outside, and Kraut rushes to check it, only to find out that there is a new door that leads to the false ruins. Calyx then says all they have to do now is to go into the false ruins, bring the silver Gerard has hidden, and carry it to the main floor. However, Calyx calls Kraut to the room to show him how to properly use the surveillance room. Calyx mentions that after thoroughly examining the false ruins, there is a door that they have never seen before, which is obviously the entrance to the silver mine. Calyx cannot believe that the entrance is inside the false ruins, and Kraut finally understands how they have been able to mine the silver without the royal family finding out about it. After checking through, Calyx says there is no sign of people anywhere, which means they only mine at specific times. Kraut then talks about how he is not ready to forgive the atrocities being committed because he is pretty sure that they are killing the miners, since there have been no rumors all these while. Calyx agrees with him and says they must make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Calyx tells Kraut that they need to disable the key to the crystal ball in Gerard's hands. Calyx then uses the control center to change the security codes and settings so that Gerard won't be able to enter again. However, Calyx is not about to just let everything go without adding a bit of fun. Calyx then tells Kraut to join the rest of the knights to move the silver to the main room. He tells Kraut not to forget to place the scroll that they have prepared once he is done packing the silver. Just then, Calyx notices that Kraut is hesitant to leave, and Calyx asks him what the issue is. He reminds him that they have already checked everywhere for danger, so he has nothing to worry about. Kraut then tells Calyx that he is going to finish the mission and return as fast as he can. After Kraut's departure, Calyx messes around a little more before making his way to a secret compartment in the room. Inside this compartment, he finds a bracelet, which he was familiar with inside the game. However, seeing it in real life feels like a whole new experience. Apparently, the bracelet is called the Bracelet of Priest Alchemy, the Great. If one sustains fatal injuries, one will be protected by a defense barrier for 2 hours. However, if the user takes another strong blow, it will shatter the barrier. In addition, not receiving proper treatment on time also means death. Once the bracelet is activated, it has a cooldown period of a week, and after 3 activations, it completely stops working. Calyx believes that the artifact is perfect for someone like him, who has low combat power, because it is basically like having 3 lives. Calyx then puts on the bracelet, and just then, he notices writing in the secret compartment. Calyx tries reading it, but to his surprise, it is written in a language that he doesn't even fully understand. He manages to pronounce a word there, which is Hecatoria, and Calyx remembers that he heard this before when he was playing the game. Suddenly, it dawned on him that Hecatoria was the goddess who taught humans how to use magic. Calyx remembers that there was never a scene like this in the game, leaving him to wonder if this is coming to life because he is there. He then proceeds to touch the writing, and this activates a weird signal that throws Calyx into a dark space. Calyx starts to panic as he falls through the dark space until he reaches what appears to be a giant eye with flames around it. Calyx is surprised when he sees this because it looks like something divine, which he has heard about before. Since this is the case, Calyx is left wondering if the flames he is staring at are gods. However, the word no suddenly kicks into his head, causing him immense pain. Suddenly, he gets to see a vision of Hecatoria getting punished by her colleagues. Apparently, Hecatoria was a god, but she wishes to be human. Since she is stubborn and won't change her mind, the leader of the god faction grants her wish, which comes with severe pain. Hecatoria screams as if her skin is being peeled off, and even Calyx, who is feeling everything in his head, could sense the pain, which causes him to scream in pain because he can't take it anymore. After the degrading process is done, the gods tell Hecatoria that she has now fallen to the level of a demigod, and they let her know that from that moment on, she is going to become the object of hatred and contempt. They assure her that even the humans that she loved so much will hate her, and this will eventually drive her into a miserable life. The gods openly tell her that they can't wait to see how she is going to turn out in the end. After seeing this, Calyx is taken out of the vision, and just then, the status screen pops up in front of him, displaying an authority level skill. Calyx freaks out when he sees this, because the system tells him that he has obtained a fragment of Hecatoria's first authority. He has also been given the goddess's feather dagger, which temporarily unleashes latent potential to deal damage to nearby enemies. However, this damage will be proportional to the user's level, and to make it better, the attack is unavoidable. Calyx cannot believe what he just witnessed because skills are usually graded from the lowest, which is F rank, to S rank. However, there are exceptions like unique, but authority is totally on a whole other level. This is a power that only those ranked as class 10 or higher, known as demigods, can use. It is basically the core of one's identity, and developing one's own authority is the only way to reach class 10. Calyx then looks closer to see that there is still something else. The system informs him that by absorbing an authority fragment, his soul rank has increased. His current level has increased from 11 to 18, which is a big jump. Seeing all of these, Calyx easily figures out that Hecatoria was the one who sent him to this world. Apparently, the only skill capable of wounding a god is an authority level skill, and he has just been given one. This basically means he is expected to take revenge on the other gods on Hecatoria's behalf. As usual, Calyx laughs out loud like a maniac because he might have just found out what the final objective of the game is. Even though Calyx doesn't like it when he is manipulated, he doesn't mind this time around because he is hell-bent on clearing the game no matter what. Just then, Kraut shows up, and Calyx asks him if he has managed to transport everything. Kraut decides to answer by showing Calyx, and Calyx is blown away when he sees the number of boxes lying around. Kraut mentions that there were 6 crates filled with gold coins, and with their estimate, this should be about 30,000 coins in total. Calyx is blown away by this, and he admits that it is more than he expected. Kraut then points to the silver, saying there are 420 crates of it, which have an estimated value of over 100,000 gold coins. Kraut then expresses his concern over how they are supposed to transport the treasure, since it won't be easy. Deep down, Calyx is not worried because no matter how much the treasure is, it won't pose a problem because he has just obtained the inventory option. Calyx then decides that he is going to test it out with the crates first. While Kraut is busy panicking over the treasures, Calyx simply tells him to gather everything in one place. Once it is done, Calyx tells Kraut to inform everyone to prepare for the return trip. In his mind, Kraut is left wondering what Calyx plans to do with the heavy crates. At the same time, Calyx knows that Kraut won't understand if he explains to him, so he has to find a cover. When Kraut finally returns to tell him that everyone is ready and what they are going to do with the crates, Calyx tells him that he doesn't have to worry because he just obtained a subspace bracelet in the ruins. Calyx then shows Kraut the defensive bracelet he acquired earlier, assuring Kraut that it is going to have plenty of space to store all the crates because it is a top-tier artifact. Kraut ultimately believes this, and before he starts screaming about it, Calyx urges him to keep it down because he would rather keep it a secret. Kraut agrees with him, saying if the artifact is that valuable, it would be better if fewer people knew about it. He then offers to keep watch outside, and once he is gone, all Calyx has to do is focus on the object. The moment he does this, a status window appears, and the moment he thinks about inventory, the space appears. He picks up a silver bar and stores it in the inventory. Surprisingly, it works just like in the game. The moment one enters, Calyx proceeds to put everything inside, and he is able to stack everything inside. Calyx heaves a sigh of relief because with this, he has nothing to worry about. Calyx then climbs back to the surface to meet his men, and they all welcome him with a smile on their faces. Kraut tells Calyx that everything is ready for their departure, but Calyx asks Kraut if Lila has arrived yet. Kraut says no, saying Lila has probably betrayed them and runs away. He talks about how he never trusted Lila from the start, but this finally gets Calyx to speak, asking Kraut if he thinks the Sasquatch retreat was a mere coincidence. When Kraut finally hears how Lila volunteered to attack the Sasquatch hideout all by herself, he is blown away because this is obviously a dangerous mission. Kraut admits that he never rated Lila highly, but at the same time he doesn't want her to die the way she did. Calyx mentions that he wanted to use a different method, but he reminds Kraut that he was the one who dismissed his suggestion as an adventure. Deep down, Kraut is distraught because at the time, he judged it dangerous to try an unverified method. But in the end, Calyx was right. Since Lila hasn't returned yet, Calyx is confident that something has happened to her. He mentions that it was thanks to Lila that they were able to avoid excessive tragedies, but it is now their turn to help her. Calyx throws this to the knights, asking them if they feel the same. The knights are stunned, and they remain silent, but Kraut quickly reads the situation, and he screams out, saying they are going to do whatever their lord commands. The rest of the group follows suit, agreeing with Kraut that they need to help Lila. The knights are now fully ready to do their duties and help Calyx out. Calyx then tells Kraut to select the members who will form the rescue squad, while the rest wait in the basement for them. Deep down, Calyx is worried about Lila because he doesn't know if she fell to the Sasquatch boss from before, or if she was tracked down by her former colleagues. However, Calyx is convinced that it is definitely the Sasquatch because her former colleagues don't even know that they are in the area. In addition to this, Lila had already erased all traces, so there is no way she was careless to have gotten caught. The main issue bothering Calyx at this point is how they are going to find Lila. Once everyone is gathered, Calyx tells Kraut that they will be heading to the Sasquatch boss to take revenge on them. Kraut is shocked to hear this, and Calyx gives him some herbs, telling him to boil them in oil so that they can coat their weapons with it. Kraut asks Calyx what the herb is, and Calyx scornfully tells him to do what he says, asking Kraut if he still has complaints. Soon afterward, they arrive at the den, which supposedly houses the females and children. Calyx figures out that the males are busy chasing Lila, who caused chaos in their hideout, or they are even busy hunting for food. Calyx then tells the knights to start with the females because the males will definitely rush back. Kraut then figures out that Calyx wants them to track the Sasquatch males chasing Lila by their tracks. However, Kraut is worried since the Sasquatch monsters are not easy enemies to deal with, and Calyx tells him to watch and see just how powerful the poison dripping on their sword is. Kraut and his men then make their move against the female group. As the fight ensues, Calyx realizes that the male population is already tracking back. He tells Thomas to hide because they just need the tracks. Once all of the males have entered the cave, Calyx tells Thomas that it is time to move. Using the fresh footprints left behind by the male Sasquatches, Calyx and Thomas are able to follow a clear path. To make the whole thing fast, Thomas carries Calyx on his back and dashes into the distance. Thomas then asks Calyx if he likes Lila, since she is quite beautiful to say the least. Calyx dodges the question, telling Thomas to focus on the mission because they are not there to talk about Lila. Thomas then mentions that he never imagined Lila would volunteer for such a dangerous mission. Calyx agrees with Thomas, saying Lila must have realized that they needed her. Apparently, the first continent-wide event in the game is the invasion of the Jaibaru Kingdom, and the faction that plays a big role during this time is the Mountain Rangers. Calyx had thought they were just volunteer soldiers, but at this point it turns out that they are a faction Servio was intentionally cultivating. Meanwhile, Kraut and his men have taken down the Sasquatches, recording a resounding victory over them, thanks to their poisoned weapons. Just before they get carried away by their victory, Kraut tells his men that it is time for them to go meet Calyx. With this, they all rush out towards Calyx's position, while Kraut finally declares just how much respect he has for Calyx. Because of this, he prays that Calyx is safe wherever he is, but unknown to them, Lila is currently at death's door. Not long after this, Calyx and Thomas find Lila, who is lying down, bloodied by two wolves, ready to pounce on her. Thomas swings into action immediately, going after the wolves to cut them down in rage. Calyx, on the other hand, kneels beside Lila in fear, hoping that she still has life in her. Calyx checks out her wounds and realizes that they are deeper than he thought. However, he plans to pour a mid-level potion on her skin, and if it works, that means she can still be saved. Calyx pours the potion on her, and it gives off a positive result. Calyx heaves a sigh of relief when he sees this, and he figures out that the next thing he needs to do is to make Lila drink the potion so she can start recovering. Thomas soon returns, telling him that he has taken care of the monsters. Calyx thanks him for the help and urges him to help him turn Lila over. Calyx then feeds her the potion, and in no time, her skin starts returning to normal. Shortly afterward, Kraut and the rest of the gang also show up, and Calyx lets off a huge smile because they arrived just in time. A week later, at Shikin's castle, Calyx is seen training by jogging around the training ground multiple times. He remembers that his current level is 18, and since the average combat level of a healthy adult male is around level 20, he figures out that level 18 is not bad for a 15-year-old. Kraut and Russell are watching him train, and Russell admits that Calyx has improved despite the fact that his training period is still short. Russell mentions that Calyx is blessed with a good physique, and Kraut agrees with this, saying Calyx is completely different from before the ruins exploration. Kraut wonders if Calyx is secretly taking something, but Calyx can hear them, and he knows that it is just the start of his level-up journey. Kraut asks Russell when they are supposed to start Calyx's swordsmanship training, and Russell urges him not to rush, saying the first priority is for Calyx's body to recover. Moments later, Calyx joins them, and Kraut is surprised that Calyx is already done training. Calyx reveals that he has some business at the Magic Tower, leaving Kraut confused as to what the dude wants at the Magic Tower. Calyx walks off, saying he has to wash up, but tells Kraut to prepare for their visit to the tower branch. After Calix's departure, Russell teases Kraut, telling him that he now appears to trust Calix's judgment. Kraut confesses that he doesn't know everything about Calix just yet, but he is sure of one thing, which is the fact that Calix is exceptionally talented. Kraut adds that Calix also cares for his subordinates and the people in his domain, which is why he is not going to allow unnecessary doubts hold him back. Russell mentions that his plan was to initially look after Calix, but at the moment, he is struggling to keep up with his thoughts and actions. However, Kraut believes that Calix still needs a master for guidance because Calix's authority is lacking. Russell then mentions that it cannot be helped, since Calix is only 15 and he lacks an official title. Because of this, Russell is convinced that Calix needs to complete the coming-of-age ceremony to advance to Class 4 as soon as possible. Kraut totally believes in Calix, saying that with how steadily Calix is progressing, he shouldn't take too long to reach Class 4. Russell says after Corin's death, he was worried that the territory would fall into chaos, but he never thought that someone suitable as Calix would appear to take control of the situation. Russell ends his statement by saying the son of a lion is also a lion. Later on, Calix and Kraut arrive at the Magic Tower, which is located in the Shikan territory. The moment the attendant opens the door to welcome them in, she is blown away to see a beautiful boy and a handsome, muscular man at the door. She shamelessly tells Calix that she doesn't know who he is, but because he is beautiful, he will always be welcomed. The attendant then gives them a good place to sit, while she goes ahead to make tea. She places nice teacups in front of them, and heats up the tea kettle instantly. The moment Calix sees this, he figures out that the lady is a Class 5 mage, but the question is why someone as talented as she is stuck in a rundown branch of the Magic Tower. Using the system, Calix checks out her information, and he realizes that she is Roseanne Dreamwalker, a 32-year-old lady, who is a Class 5 mage just as Calix predicted. Calix shows his shock, and Roseanne asks him why he is acting so excited. Calix mentions that he is surprised that someone as talented as her is stuck in a rural area. He adds that Roseanne is also charming, and when Russell hears this, he wonders if Calix is interested in the old lady. Calix tells Roseanne that he is pretty sure that if she can heat a teapot in an instant, it is evidence of her amazing skill. Calix continues by saying it is hard for someone in their early 20s to attain that level of skill unless they are a disciple of the Tower Master. Roseanne hears this and almost blows apart in excitement, but lets Calix know that she is not in her 20s anymore. Roseanne mentions that she might look a bit youthful, but it is totally wrong that she is in her 20s because she is well over 30. Calix continues teasing her, asking her if she has any beauty secrets because she doesn't look 30. Roseanne then replies that she doesn't do anything serious because all she does is make sure she sleeps well and also washes her face with pure water. Calix then commends her, saying her beauty must be natural if this is all she does. Before Roseanne falls for further charming talks, she asks Calix to tell her what brings him to the Magic Tower. Calix then tells Roseanne that he is there to buy an explosion scroll, and when Roseanne hears this, she immediately deems Calix a valuable customer. Calix mentions that he is buying 30 scrolls, and Roseanne reveals that this will cost him 600 gold coins. However, she tells Calix that she is going to make a special discount for him, being a handsome boy. Instead of paying 600 gold coins, she tells him to pay 500 gold coins instead. Calix is surprised and happy to hear this because he realizes that having a pretty face is a +1. However, he asks Roseanne if this isn't going to cause too much trouble for her, and she says yes. She reveals that even if the Magic Tower looks trashy, the authority of a branch manager is the same everywhere. Calix then tells Roseanne that he has one more request, and Roseanne tells him to go ahead. Calix says it is a bit difficult to say, but he lets Roseanne know that he would like to borrow some reserve funds. This catches her attention, and she asks Calix how much he is looking to borrow. Calix then reveals he wants to borrow 60,000 gold, and the moment she hears this, she spills out her drink in shock. Roseanne mentions that she can't touch the reserve fund the way she wants, and Calix assures her that he is aware of this fact. However, he lets her know that in exchange for the money he is planning to borrow, he is going to leave gold and silver coins with her as collateral. Although he assures her that he is still borrowing the money, he is definitely going to pay interest on it. Even though it is for a short period, Calix lets Roseanne know that it is still a proper loan. Calix doesn't want to pay Gerard's debt with the same silver and gold that he stole because he would definitely find out that he is the thief. Calix knows pretty well that only the Magic Tower can lend him the huge sum of 60,000 gold, and he has to make sure he buys it there no matter what. Just then, Roseanne replies, saying the request is too harsh, and this hits Calix really hard, as he wonders if his favorability wasn't enough. Calix is still gritting his teeth in frustration when Roseanne tells him that there is one way forward. She tells Calix that the branch doesn't get central oversight like the other branches. Thanks to this, Roseanne suggests that they keep the whole issue between them. She lets Calix know that they are not going to run into any problem as long as he pays the loan back within 6 months. However, she lets him know that if 6 months pass without him being able to pay, they are going to sell the gold and silver they are holding as collateral. When Calix hears this, he smiles because his plan just went the way he wanted it. He knew that magicians are always hungry for research funds, and in addition to this, he is pretty sure that Roseanne is desperate to get her hands on the interest. Calix then bows to Roseanne, telling her that he is good with this. Deep down, Calix is exhilarated that his debt with Gerard is finally settled. Later on, Gerard gets the notification that one of the patrols inspecting the area around the secret vault has disappeared, and he demands that someone bring him the map. The moment he takes a closer look at the map, he realizes that something is totally wrong, and he screams at the security to organize a group because they are heading to the Highlands immediately. Upon their arrival at the Highlands, they run into a big, scary golem, leaving the security in panic mode. The leader of the unit tries to calm his men, saying the golem might be huge, but the movements are slow. He tells the team to engage the golem from a safe distance, but the first group that gets close is totally crushed by the scary golem. The group behind almost passed out in fear because the golem just took out night class warriors like they were nothing. The rampage continues as the golem continues trampling on the warriors. No matter what tactics they try to employ, they get trashed and dragged around like tissue. The entire field is left with bodies, but Gerard doesn't even care as his men are being massacred. The leader of the unit continues motivating his men, telling them that they can win since golems don't form naturally, which means a class 5 mage is in the area. The leader of the unit tries to tell Gerard that they need to reorganize their plan, but Gerard says no. He tells them that no matter what happens, they need to find a way to send the Marquise's tribute in 3 days. Gerard screams at the warriors, telling them to clear the path within 24 hours or die in the forest. Back home, Calix is pretty sure that Gerard and his men would have gotten his gift by now. While they are talking, Lila is watching from the door, wondering if Roseanne is interested in Calix because of how she is acting around him. Moments later, Kraut shows up with Lila behind him, and she has a grumpy look on her face. Kraut tells Calix that they have put all the luggage in the magic tower, and Calix thanks him for his hard work. Calix then tells Lila and Kraut to wait outside for a moment while he hands Roseanne a box. Outside, Lila asks Kraut why Calix is comfortable with Roseanne. Kraut then says he doesn't know, and this is because he is trying his best not to say anything unnecessary, but Lila can clearly see that the dude is full of shit. Back in the magic tower, the box Calix gave to Roseanne contains a bracelet, and she excitedly accepts the gift. Calix tells Roseanne that it is a token of gratitude for her efforts in preparing the funds. Roseanne then reminds Calix never to speak of their deal because if the matter is processed officially, they are going to have to prepare a mountain of paperwork. She adds that there is no guarantee that permission will be granted. Deep down, Calix knows that this is a freaking excuse because Roseanne doesn't want the interest to be taken by the central tower. However, Calix doesn't mind as he is ready to play along. Roseanne then tells Calix that she is happy with their deal, telling him that deals like this are always welcome. Thanks to Calix coming to buy the scrolls, they have been able to make more sales. Roseanne then asks Calix where he used the scrolls, and Calix immediately figures out that the girl is trying to extract information from him. Since she wants to know if he is going to war, Calix tells her that he is not planning to do anything related to such. Calix mentions that he only replenished what they used in the mining excavation. This further shocks Roseanne because she can't believe that they used such expensive items just to dig a hole. She asks Calix if he found a gold mine, and Calix realizes that it is time that they end the conversation. He tells Roseanne that they are going to see each other more often from that moment forward, and Roseanne assures him that she is looking forward to this. It turns out that they have been able to obtain 6 bonds that are worth 100 gold each. Calix is relieved that with this, he is going to be able to settle the territory's debt. However, the only thing that remains is to see how Gerard is going to react when he realizes that the secret funds have been stolen. It turns out that Calix is aiming to punish Servio for what he did to him in his past life. Even with everything he has done so far, Calix doesn't think he has even started with the revenge plan yet. Back in the Highlands, the warriors finally get the upper hand against the golem. They are able to pull it down before shattering its core, which is powering the golem. By doing this, they are also able to completely destroy the golem. However, this came at a huge cost because they have lost a lot of personnel already. The unit leader tells Gerard that even though they were able to defeat all of the golems, 60% of the squad is already dead. However, Gerard doesn't care about all of these and he screams at his subordinates to open the gates quickly. Upon making it to the gates, Gerard is given the crystal ball, which is needed to open the gates. To his dismay, the system displays an error message saying the user is not authorized. The ruins then inform Gerard that it has deployed a countermeasure, which will activate in 180 seconds. However, Gerard continues trying, but he keeps getting the error message. Gerard starts freaking out, and one of his subordinates tells him that it is important they get to safety first because the countdown has reached 59 already. The warriors then quickly move Gerard to a safe place, and the moment the time reaches 0, the ruins begin the interception program. Apparently, the countermeasure program is going to summon all monsters in the vicinity, and when Gerard and his men see this, they freak out again. Back at home, Calix asks Lila what she thinks happens to those who betray Servio. He also wants to know if Servio overlooks the mistakes of his subordinates, but Lila says no, revealing that Servio is a freaking perfectionist. Lila mentions that Servio doesn't tolerate failure, and since Servio will be looking to kill Gerard when he finds out that the slush funds have been stolen, Gerard will try everything he knows to survive. Because he is trying to survive, Lila says Gerard won't think twice before betraying Servio. When Calix hears this, he immediately starts thinking of something sinister, and Lila realizes that the young master is already planning something in his head again. Deep down, Calix believes that something is missing, but he doesn't know what it is yet. Back in the Highlands, Gerard's men were able to wipe out the monsters after a hard-fought battle, but they lost the majority of their forces. Gerard doesn't really care as he tells the squad leader that he should go ahead and create another shadow force since the current one has been wiped out. Gerard then tells his men to open the door, and by opening it, he wants them to blow it open with the explosion scroll. As instructed, the door is blasted open, and once it is open, Gerard tells his subordinates that they need to investigate the vault. Deep down, he is afraid that the worst has happened. Just as he feared, they find no silver inside the vault, and Gerard freaks out, telling the men to make sure that they find the silver. One of them rushes over to a scroll lying around to inspect it, and the moment he opens the scroll, he opens his death. An explosion occurs from the scroll, rocking the entire vault. When the dust clears, Gerard realizes that the mine has collapsed and everyone inside has been buried. This is when Gerard realizes that everything is over because Servio is definitely going to kill them. Realizing how dire the situation is, Gerard decides that it is time to activate his secret emergency plan. He turns to one of the surviving workers and suddenly, he tells him that what is about to happen is not his fault. Before the dude knows it, Gerard's right man pushes a dagger through the dude's back. As the dude slowly loses his life, Gerard crouches in front of him, telling him that he has to die because the whole thing has to remain a secret. Once all the workers are dead, all those left are Gerard and his right-hand man. Gerard tells his subordinate that the next thing he needs to do is to follow the emergency plan. Later on, Gerard reports to Servio's villa and he cooks up a story for him. After this, Gerard goes on his knees, bowing face down to Servio, apologizing for what happened. However, Servio says he doesn't care about his apology because results are the only thing he wants. Servio asks Gerard about the silver he was saving for his future plans. Gerard then mentions that everything that happened was thanks to Tomb Raiders. He believes that they were just exploring and accidentally ran into the silver. However, he believes that it would take time to dig through the mountain of earth in the vault. Gerard lies to Servio, telling him that most of the silver coins are buried under the rubble. Servio immediately cuts him short when he mentions most, but not all of the silver. Gerard quickly corrects himself, telling Servio that he has nothing to worry about because there is not much a few Tomb Raiders can carry through the narrow underground passages. He tells Servio that he has already put a bounty out, and in addition, there are other plans in motion too. Gerard lets Servio know that they are definitely going to ambush the perpetrators. Gerard is convinced that the silver coins are not something that can easily be taken out, and he is sure that the perpetrators will come back. Servio agrees with him, saying the perpetrators will not be able to resist the large sum of silver, which is why they are Tomb Raiders in the first place. However, he wants them to be captured once they return. Gerard assures Servio that he understands the plan, and he thanks him for being reasonable, but before he can even finish this, Servio whips out a whip, telling Gerard that he needs to be punished. Gerard still believes that he has a way out until a whip lands right on his back. Gerard groans in pain, while praying that he endures everything because he definitely cannot escape the hell he has found himself in. Servio is also mad that the shadow forces that he has invested in have almost been wiped out because of Gerard. With every offense he remembers, Servio lands a whip hit on Gerard's back, tearing into his flesh. Servio then tells Gerard that he is going to withdraw from the shadow forces, and if he needs his help, he will only move once he gets his permission. Knowing fully well that he is backed into a corner, Gerard assures Servio that he understands everything he is saying. After he is done beating Gerard, he lets him know that the problem they now have is how they are going to pay Marquis Antonio's tribute money. Servio then tells Gerard to inform the Shikan Kingdom that they are going to begin the formal seizure process. Servio doesn't mind if they offer a small amount because he believes that they can use this to cover whatever shortfall they have in tribute money. However, Servio lets him know that if this doesn't cover the tribute money, Gerard will have no choice but to sell the assets of his commercial group to make it up. Gerard politely agrees with Servio, but deep down, he is raging because the commercial group was all his sweat and blood. Servio then tells Gerard that he is free to leave, but lets him know that he has not forgiven him because he has to find his silver no matter what, and if he can't, he obviously knows that death follows. After leaving Servio's office, his right-hand man hurries up to meet him and tend to him. He gives him a potion to drink, and then he places a cloth on his back to hide his wounds. Since he is in pain, he asks his subordinate where his pleasure boy is, and the dude tells him that he already got rid of the poor boy the night before when he decided that the boy was no longer useful. Since the boy is gone, Gerard asks his right-hand man if they have another replacement. The dude reveals that they have been able to get their hands on a boy from the desert, and he has emerald eyes and blonde hair, just like Calyx, whom Gerard is fantasizing over. Since the new boy is from the desert, he assumes that he is going to be dark-skinned, and he doesn't like people like this. But he figures out that he doesn't have a choice at that point, so he has to make do with what he has. Gerard then asks the dude about their preparations, and he reveals that everything they need will be ready within 3 days. He reveals that the enforcers are not going to make it easy, leaving him to ask if they are going to be able to escape safely. Gerard reminds him that half of the Shadow Squad is either dead or injured, and the rest have scattered, searching for supposed vault robbers. With the forces stretched thin, Gerard believes that this is the best chance that they have. In addition, he is convinced that this is the best time for him to go to Shikan's estate and take anything valuable. Gerard laughs, saying the more funds that they have, the easier it is for them to rebuild after escaping. However, his right-hand man is worried that the whole thing might not be as easy as it seems. Days later, Kraut shows up in Calyx's office to tell him that Gerard is there, and with the look of things, it appears that he is there for the debt. Russell is surprised because Calyx had already predicted this. Russell then tells Kraut to escort Calyx to see Gerard, and Kraut is surprised that Russell isn't coming with them. Russell reveals that Calyx is more than capable of handling the territory as it stands, and he is not prepared to let his interference undermine Calyx's authority. Russell lets Kraut know that all he has to do is support Calyx's decisions. Moments later, Calyx heads to the reception where Gerard is waiting. Gerard tries to act all familiar with Calyx, but Calyx lets him know that he is not up for all that. Calyx suggests that Gerard get to the point because his rude attitude is already testing his patience. Since he wants him to get to the point, Gerard tells Calyx that the official seizure process has begun because it has been determined that Shaken's territory can't repay the 60,000 gold. Gerard confidently says that they are going to be confiscating everything valuable as collateral. Calyx asks Gerard what will happen if he refuses, and Gerard says he will have to appoint a senior officer to ensure that Calyx can't escape. Gerard proudly says he is going to request surveillance, and his rude attitude gets on Kraut's nerves, so he almost pounces on the dude. However, Gerard urges Kraut not to resort to violence because he is free to use whatever means he likes to recover the debt, assuring Kraut that violence will only make the situation worse. Calyx then uses Gerard's words against him, saying if his judgment is that vital, this means that there is room to delay repayment under certain conditions. Gerard gladly tells Calyx that he is ready to bend a bit if he can show some level of sincerity. This is when it dawns on Calyx that paying the debt is even putting him at a loss. At the same time, he wonders why Gerard is demanding repayment before the deadline, which means he needs money. Calix lets off a big smile when he realizes that Gerard and his group must have lost their slush funds, which is why they are pushing his family into defaulting on the debt. Calix then tells Gerard that he has managed to gather the money, and because of this, he doesn't think there is any need for him to go out of his way to show him sincerity. This hits Gerard with a surprise, and he asks Calix how he is able to come into such a large amount of money. Calix mocks him, telling him to stop acting so surprised. Calix then shows him the bearer bonds, which show that he has the money. When Russell sees the bonds, he is able to confirm that they are real, leaving him to start wondering how Calix was able to gather 60,000 gold in such a short space of time. Suddenly, it dawns on Gerard that he is going to have a better chance at escaping with the bonds instead of silver and gold, since they are much lighter. Gerard is still thinking about this when Kraut places a silver bar on the table to further shock Gerard. Calix then confidently tells Gerard that he has 32 silver bars like this in about 420 boxes. When Gerard hears this, he realizes that Calix is basically telling him that he stole the silver bars. Fear grips Gerard because he doesn't know if Calix is threatening to report him to Servio. At the same time, Gerard is worried that Calix might have figured out that he is planning to steal the repayment money and run away with it. The whole reality of things dawned on Gerard because he knew that Servio was definitely going to kill him if he found out about his plan. Calix confirms his fear when he tells him the bad things that will happen to him when the rumor spreads that he escaped with Servio's slush funds. Gerard remains silent because Calix is slowly pushing him into a bad spot. Calix then tells Gerard that he has just two choices. The first option is to reveal the stolen funds and face punishment, or betray Servio and run away. Gerard totally loses the strength to speak, and when Calix realizes that he has pushed him into a corner, he decides that it is time he gives him a little hope. Calix tells Gerard that he can help him survive if he chooses to run, telling Gerard that he is about to give him a rare chance. Gerard then tells Calix that escaping from the territory is not enough, and Calix assures him that he can prepare a solid backing for him so that no one can touch him. Gerard believes that Calix is offering to shield him, but Calix lets him know that he is not strong enough to protect him against the powerful man that he has angered. However, he assures Gerard that he can provide a stronger backing for him, and Gerard is surprised that Calix is willing to give him this backing. Calix assures him that he can, but there is a price for him to pay. Calix places a document in front of him, telling him to sign the document first, and after this, he is going to show him how to survive. Gerard realizes that the document is a receipt that the Earldom of Shiken has repaid the money it borrowed from his company in full, and is backed by the bearer bonds issued by the royal family. When Gerard sees this, he lets out a loud laugh, saying Calix is truly terrifying because he has been fooling everyone all these while. However, he assures Calix that he doesn't mind signing the document because deep down, he has concluded that Calix is not someone he should make an enemy of. After signing the document, Gerard asks Calix what he is supposed to do, and Calix tells him that the next place he will be heading is the capital. After leaving Calix's office, Gerard and his right-hand man pay their respects before riding away in their carriage. Kraut then asks Calix if he had predicted all of this and prepared countermeasures beforehand. Calix denies this but tells Kraut that they need some support. Apparently, Calix is planning to use the king's first son, Gale, as his support stand, since he is basically the most influential person he can get his hands on. Kraut then asks Calix if he is sure about this because this means they will be giving up the little support that they have, but Calix lets Kraut know that their support hasn't decreased. In fact, Calix believes that they got a good deal for 60,000 gold because the deal is worth more than just money. Calix knows that Kraut won't understand this just yet, but assures him that he will understand everything later. Later on, Servio is in his room when his chief of staff rushes into the room, telling him that he has something important to report. Servio casually asks him what it is, and the dude reveals that all of the key executives of the merchant company have vanished into thin air. He adds that the main assets of the merchant company are accounted for in the books, but they have sold everything. The dude has not even finished his report when another assistant rushes into the room, revealing that the merchant company headquarters has been taken over by debt collectors. As if this is not enough, the majority of the shadow forces have vanished. Apparently, the instructors at the facility have disappeared, and those who didn't were found dead that very morning. Servio refuses to say anything, throwing the room into tension. Unknown to them, Servio is taking out his frustration on the book he is reading. The general of the shadow forces then comes in, saying everyone who has escaped has made their way into Shiken's territory. The dude mentions that they have sent people into the territory, but Gerard is nowhere to be found. Even the general says he tried following Gerard's trail, but he couldn't catch up to him, and this is thanks to the strained relations that they have with Shiken territory. When Servio hears this, he starts to wonder why Gerard would run to the Shiken territory. He is pretty sure that Gerard is not that foolish to think he can escape if he stays in Shiken territory. Suddenly, Servio lets out a loud laugh, admitting that he has been outplayed. Servio then tells his chief of staff to send someone to the vault to make sure that the silver is still intact. The chief of staff is confused by this, and he tells Servio that the report he got was that the mine collapsed and everything is currently buried under. Servio tells the chief of staff to confirm everything with his own eyes, and Servio orders the squad leader to recall the trackers from Shiken territory. He lets him know that they are going to be in trouble if the spy's identity is discovered, since Gerard is most likely far away as they speak. Since they are withdrawing the trackers, Servio tells him to send a boat to monitor the River Aran, and if no one shows up after 2 weeks, they are free to return. He is pretty sure that he will get the chance to settle his scores with Gerard one day, as long as he stays in the kingdom. After telling the squad leader what to do, he turns to the chief steward, telling him to prepare to meet Marquis Antonio. Not long after this, Servio shows up at Antonio's castle, and he is disappointed that someone as high as Servio messed up. Antonio then mentions that since the assassination attempt failed, things have been going pretty badly for them. Even with this, Servio believes that it was their best chance to eliminate Corin because he was already close to Class 7, and if someone likes him side with the king, it will upset the balance between the new royalists and the aristocrats. Antonio casually tells Servio that there is no way to turn back what has been done, even though they now regret it. Antonio then asks Servio if they should declare war against Calix, since he was the one who allowed Gerard to escape their grasp. Servio suggests that they use a diplomatic approach instead. Antonio asks him what he means by this, and he reveals that the last time he checked, the Shikan family hadn't replaced their representative to the Council of Nobles yet. This makes it good for them because the representative, Orcel Tigrim, is working for them. Servio believes that they can just use the dude before they appoint a replacement, and Antonio demands to hear the details about this. Deep down, Antonio would also prefer that they avoid war because it is too costly. Meanwhile, Calix is telling Kraut that he is pretty sure Servio will use diplomatic means instead of war. He is pretty sure that Servio now knows that they are the ones who helped Gerard escape, and instead of a physical war, they are going to resort to diplomacy. Kraut is surprised to hear this, and he asks Calix if he knows the diplomatic approach that they are going to use. Calix explains that nobles always have representatives who represent them outside of their territory. This is the exact reason the Council of Nobles actually exists, and Kraut asks if they should send a representative there. Calix gets curious, and he asks Kraut who their own representative is. Kraut reveals that it is Orcel, and this is when it dawns on Kraut that Orcel is Stella's closest aide. Kraut is freaking out, but he is surprised to see that Calix is pretty chill about it. Kraut, knowing who Calix is, figures out that he already has a plan for this. Calix then tells Kraut that it is better to leave some openings for their enemies. Calix reveals that doing everything perfectly will force the enemies to desperately search for a weakness. Elsewhere at the royal capital, Elsinia. This is a capital that has a history spanning about 500 years, which is the capital of the Rort Kingdom. This is a large city that is home to about 250,000 people. It is also home to the wise king, Clivio Carcao, and at that moment, Clivio is holding the morning session, which is to deliberate on the succession process in the Shikan territory. Clivio tells the nobles present in the meeting that Corin's loss was truly painful. However, he is interested in knowing who will inherit the territory. He then asks if the territory's representative is present, and Orcel stands up to inform the king that he is in the room. The king then demands to know the situation of things, and Orcel tells the king that the territory is currently facing a great calamity. The king demands to know what he means by this, and Orcel claims that Calix has seized power using military force. Orcel says Calix falsely accused Stella of assassination so he could imprison her. In addition to this, he has also sealed his half-brother's mana hole. The king is surprised to hear this, since what he heard about Calix is that he is a madman. Orcel mentions the fact that Calix attempted to end himself, and because of this, there is a case of mental or physical issues at play. When the king hears this, he can't believe that Orcel is seriously playing with his intelligence, since he has been at the game for over 30 years. The king already knows that Corin's death is suspicious, and after his death, the Shikan territory would have been overtaken by Servio, who is a member of the aristocratic faction. Since Calix has been able to block Servio from doing this, the king secretly admires Calix. The king then mentions that the local knights must have supported Calix, which is why he was able to seize power. Since this is the case, the king asks Orcel if he is trying to say the knights are all following the commands of a madman. This question leaves Orcel in a tight spot, and Antonio is forced to come in, telling the king that it is unfair to have accused someone of assassination without granting them a fair trial. Antonio adds that Calix, sealing his brother's mana hole, is a serious abuse of power. The king then asks Antonio what he is suggesting, and Antonio screams out, telling the king to summon Calix to the capital. Antonio believes that the House of Lords have to evaluate Calix's physical and mental health. When the king hears this, he stares at Antonio in disgust because he knows that the House of Lords cannot be trusted. The king then tells Antonio that he is going to agree to summon Calix to the capital, but he wants the investigation to be conducted by the Palace Administration Department. Antonio is shocked to hear this, and the king tells him that the House of Lords is free to send a representative to witness the trial. Realizing that the king has outsmarted him in that area, Antonio tells the king that he has made a wise decision. After the morning session is over, Servio and Antonio meet, and they both agree that they have run into a big problem because the king appears to be protecting Calix. Antonio is pretty sure that the king is pissed that the Shikan territory is under their influence. However, Servio doesn't see this as a big issue, and Antonio asks him if he has any ideas. Servio then tells Antonio to become the king's father-in-law. Antonio is shocked to hear this, and he asks Servio if he is suggesting that he marry his daughter to the king, who is on death's door. Servio then tells Antonio that the king he is referring to is not the one currently on the throne. Servio lets Antonio know that he is talking about the future. Antonio smiles when he finally catches on to what Servio is trying to tell him. Some days later, Kraut rushes into Calix's office to tell him that he has been told to report to the palace administration as soon as possible. He tells him that the administration is trying to confirm that there is no damage to his soul after he tried to delete himself. Calix laughs out loud when he realizes that they are stooping so low to investigate him if he has gone crazy because he tried to send himself to the ancestors. Calix then tells Kraut that they don't have to rush to answer the call. He tells Kraut to inform Russell to come up with an excuse. Thomas is shocked to hear this, as he asks Calix if he is trying to defy the king's orders. Calix then tells Thomas that he is not expected to just jump on a horse and start heading to the capital. Calix lets them know that Servio would have known about the summons, and there is every possibility that he is eagerly waiting for him to go. It is pretty obvious that Servio wants him to go so that he can terminate him, while Grunbein becomes the head of the family. Thomas and Kraut almost crash out when they hear this, and they assure Calix that they are going to lay down their lives if it means protecting Calix. Calix lets the two know that they don't have to do this. since he has no plan to go anywhere. He then reminds them that they have already sent someone ahead to the capital to fight their battles for them. The two are initially confused about this, but it finally dawns on them that Calix is talking about Gerard. 2 weeks later, the king and the nobles hold another meeting, and Antonio raises the fact that Calix hasn't shown up even after he was summoned. Antonio tells the king that he is pretty sure that Calix is planning something. He claims that Calix is scared that judgment is upon him for closing his brother's mana hole. Since Antonio made all the claims, the king asks him what he wants them to do about Calix. Antonio cannot believe that the king just pushed the whole thing to him, which is not looking good, since he is the head of the aristocratic faction. Antonio reluctantly tells the king that he is going to visit the Shikan territory to investigate the matter. The king commends Antonio for his wise insights. Meanwhile, one of the royalists is worried that the king is aligning himself with his political rivals, leaving the new royalists behind. The king then suggests that they move on to the next topic, and when the butler checks the schedule for the day, he is shocked by what he sees. The dude mentions that the next topic on the list is the engagement of the 5th prince, and when one of the royalists, Duke Ottomor, hears this, he figures out that there is a big problem on their hands. Instead of the king being shocked and concerned about this, he actually smiles at Antonio, saying he has heard that his daughter is intelligent and beautiful. The king then asks Antonio what he thinks about his daughter's engagement to his 5th son, Ciel. Antonio quickly opens up, saying it is going to be a great honor if the prince is to marry into his family. At this point, the royalists are freaking out. Ottomor can no longer hold it, and he gets up from his seat, telling the king that it is customary for members of the royal family to select their fiancé from among the ladies in waiting, serving the king or his wife, the queen. Basically, these women have been chosen for their exceptional skills, which have been cultivated over years of interaction with noble families in various capacities. On the other hand, Antonio is dancing with joy because he is pretty sure that the royalists didn't even expect the big blow that they just suffered. The king then turns to Ottomor, asking him if he is saying Antonio's daughter is not worth marrying, and Ottomor reveals that the whole process doesn't adhere to the established practices and procedures they have always followed. The king then screams at Ottomor, saying royal marriages are decisions to be made by the king and the queen. The king lets the dude know that his decision is final, and the nobles have no say in it. Ottomor is left in shock because the king is not entirely wrong, but he just cannot understand the fact that he is pushing the royalists away, who have always been by his side. Basically, the royalists are supporting the 1st prince, but the 5th prince is the queen's biological son. With this, Ottomor believes that the king is trying to make his 5th son his successor. Ottomor concludes that the king has abandoned them, and the foundation of their faction has just been shattered. Just then, the 1st prince, Gale, enters the room, telling the king that there is something important that he has to tell him. The king then tells Gale that he doesn't remember calling him, so he should leave the room immediately. Gale refuses, saying the king has to hear what he has to say first. The king then asks him if he is seriously challenging his authority, but Gale tells him that he has no intention of defying him. The king then gets even angrier, telling Gale to get out because he is not going to allow him to interfere in Ciel's marriage. Gale finally understands why the king is trying to get rid of him, and he lets him know that there has been a misunderstanding. Gale reveals that he has no intention of involving himself in Ciel's marriage. Gale mentions that he is there to discuss something else entirely, and he is sure that everyone would want to hear it. The king then asks him what it is that he wants to say, and Gale reveals that the issue is about the Shikan territory. He brings out a letter, saying it is from Russell. The king is surprised to hear this, and he wonders why a matter that is already sealed is being dug up again. The king is reluctant, and Ottomor reminds him that there are still questions surrounding the Shikan territory. He adds that Calix has not yet obeyed the king's summons, and to put it into perspective, Antonio, who was appointed as the lead member in the committee, is Servio's master. Ottomor urges the king to try to recall whose mana hole was sealed. The moment Antonio hears this, he angrily gets out of his seat, screaming at Ottomor, asking him if he can no longer trust his words. Ottomor continues by saying it is not appropriate to appoint a stakeholder as an investigator because it would just make everything unfair. Antonio then asks Ottomor how they are supposed to trust Russell, who sent the letter, because he might have colluded with Calix. The moment Antonio mentions this, Ottomor silently celebrates because he has just dug a hole for him, which he fell into without even realizing it. Ottomor then turns to the king, reminding him that Russell is the former leader of the Blue Lions, and he is an honorable master of the sword known for his morality that never affects his view of justice. Ottomor adds that Russell was also given the Royal Order of Honor, which means Russell is the country's hero, and any report sent by him can be trusted. Ottomor finishes his word by reminding everyone that they are living in a knight's country, and the moment Antonio hears this, he realizes that he has been cornered. The king then tells Ottomor not to read too much meaning into what Antonio said because he is pretty sure he didn't mean that Russell is not a war hero. Antonio is also forced to speak up, saying the issue is not that he doesn't trust Russell, but at this point, Antonio is already biting himself, wondering why he mentioned Russell. The king then suggests that they check the contents of the letter before anything else because it is not too late to raise objections. The king tells Gale to read the letter out loud, and Gale does as instructed. In the letter, Russell mentions that there was an assassination attempt at the residence, and because Grunbein didn't want to be executed, he had to seal his mana hole himself. Russell adds that all the punishment was carried out in his name, since he is the representative of the territory. Russell also lets it be known that all of the knights are on board with his decision. After Gale is done reading the letter, Marquis Solvanir asks to verify the signature because he served alongside Russell in the Royal Guard, so he is familiar with his handwriting. Solvanir collects the letter to check it out carefully. Apparently, Solvanir is known as the Sword of the Kingdom, and he has great pride as a knight. Being the straightforward man that he is, Russell is one of the free true knights that he recognizes. After checking out the letter, Solvanir confirms the authenticity. Deep down, Solvenir is already pissed at Antonio for suspecting Russell. Even Antonio realizes that he is in deep shit because Solvenir has somehow joined the conversation, which means the scale has tipped completely. The whole plan was to shatter the royalist faction that had just lost its leader. But Gale's timely appearance ultimately became the focal point. With this, Antonio figures out that a new battle for succession has begun. Nonetheless, Antonio believes that it is imperative that they deal with the Shikan territory as fast as they can. Antonio finally speaks up, saying it is not his intention to question an honorable man like Russell. Antonio says they are supposed to conduct a proper investigation into the claim that Grunbean was involved in the assassination attempt instead of believing the words of a lowly assassin. Audemore then tells Antonio that they might be conducting an investigation, but leaving the position of the family head vacant is not an option. Antonio then mentions that Calix is 15 years old, and according to what he heard, Calix doesn't even have the skills to become a knight. Antonio then says Calix should at least be a master of the sword before being given the title. Audemore laughs loudly when he hears this. He reminds Antonio that Calix is just 15 years old, and even Antonio himself just attained the rank of a swordmaster recently. Antonio agrees that Calix becoming a swordmaster might be taking it too far, but it would be a bit fair if he rises to the level of a user before being granted the noble title so that he can prove his future potential. When Audemore hears this, he becomes worried because Calix is currently 15 years old, and it is going to take him at least 4 years to become a user. Even though Antonio might not start a war before then, he is going to focus on the marriage process, which is bad either way. The king finally makes his declaration, saying the Noble Assembly is going to establish a special investigation team to continue looking into the assassination attempt. He lets them know that disciplinary actions will be taken if any conclusive evidence is found. However, he lets them know that this process is only going to last until Calix becomes a user. He mentions that if Calix is able to reach Class 4 as wanted, the investigation team will immediately be disbanded so that the succession will proceed. The king asks if anyone objects to this, and since Antonio is pleased, he is the first to commend the king for his wise decision. Deep down, he is relieved that Calix has no way of reaching Class 4, since he is talentless, and he is confident that Audemore doesn't know this. Antonio is convinced that the king's decision is actually favorable to them, even though it looks fair on the outside. Antonio is exhilarated that he has gotten one over Audemore, while thinking of what to do to Calix and his troublesome house. Later that evening, Antonio tells his assistant to call for a strange and interesting dude, Lanciano. Apparently, Antonio is planning to handle everything with his own intelligence agency, Variegata. Moments later, Lanciano shows up and Antonio lets him know that he has a task for him. Antonio tells Lanciano that this is a task he must carry out without Servio's knowledge. Lanciano lets Antonio know that Servio is quite the perceptive one, and he might probably figure out that they are up to something. However, he believes that Servio won't know if they sneak their secret into a pile of documents. Antonio tells Lanciano to do whatever he wants as long as he is able to make Servio suffer. Antonio then suggests that Lanciano use one of the Dark Knights, as he liked the one he used the last time. Antonio lets off a bright smile, saying it would be better if they were able to get tasks done without getting their hands dirty. Elsewhere at Gale's castle, Gale is seen commending Gerard for his good work. He lets Gerard know that he showed up at the right time because he was able to unite the royalist faction the moment the king abandoned them. Gale admits that it is a pretty meticulous plan, and even Gerard secretly agrees with him. He is left wondering how Calix was able to come up with such a plan, but Gerard decides that he will be the one to take all the credit because he doesn't want Gale to take an interest in Calix. Gerard then tells Gale that he was able to predict this because he was familiar with the methods used. Gale lights up in excitement, saying it is true that Servio is Antonio's advisor, and in return, Gerard was an advisor to Servio. Gale mocks them, saying they are probably groaning in frustration as they speak, but Gerard urges Gale not to underestimate the two. Gerard mentions that even though they were able to deal a significant blow, the House Lords were able to achieve their goal because the engagement to the Fifth Prince still stands. Gale then asks Gerard if there is no way to stop the engagement, and Gerard replies that marriages are the will of the king, which is why there is little that they can do. Gerard tells Gale that he can't do more, and Gale lets him know that he doesn't need to stress it because he was just saying it out loud. Gerard then tells Gale that there is a possibility that the enemy will target Gale next, and Gale agrees with him. Gerard then continues riding the waves, trying to act all loyal and cool, by telling Gale that he has nothing to worry about because he has escaped the shadows and become the sun. Gerard tells Gale that he must strengthen ties with the nobles supporting the royal family, and he must give them the confidence to follow him. Gale likes Gerard's use of words, especially being called the sun, and he smiled really hard at this. Gale then asks Gerard what he thinks about adding the Shikan territory to their faction. Gerard is disgusted by this, but he has no choice but to reluctantly tell Gale that it is not a bad idea. Gerard then tells Gale that it would be bad if they gave the Shikan territory a lot of good things, since there is no need to feed the fish they have caught. When Gale hears this, he expresses his shock that Gerard is not in full support, even though he was the one who delivered Russell's letter. Gerard then says it is a matter of misunderstanding because he only delivered the letter in exchange for clearing a debt. Gerard believes that it is nothing more than a transaction, and the moment he says this, Gale's voice and expression immediately go cold. Fear grips Gerard because looking into Gale's eyes, it's as if he is staring at Calix. Gale then walks past Gerard, telling him that he will be heading to the Shikan territory, and he would like Gerard to prepare a support statement for him. Gerard is shocked that Gale is personally going to the territory, and Gale replies that he doesn't care if he is rejected, but this will rattle Seal's supporters. Gerard cannot believe that the prince is seriously heading to the Shikan territory when he was already planning on having Gale rely on him. However, he knows that he cannot stop him, and he tells Gale that he is free to choose whatever he wants. Some days later, Russell shows up in Calix's office, telling him that a report just came in saying Calix must become a Class 4 user as soon as possible. Calix smiles and tells the old man that he doesn't need to worry. This is because Calix has a secret plan in mind, which revolves around a dungeon. However, Russell yells at Calix, telling him that his wits are not going to make him stronger. Russell says taking a step one at a time is the fastest way, and he is ready to make sure that Calix becomes a Class 4 user as soon as possible. Before Calix can even protest, Russell has already grabbed him and he drags him to the training ground. He begins Calix's training immediately, without even giving him the time to adjust. His training method is so intense that even the knights are left shivering in their pants. Before Calix knows it, he has fallen face down, but Russell is not yet done with him. Calix concludes that at this rate, he is just going to die before he gets the chance to become stronger. The next morning, Calix is still in bed, suffering from yesterday's rigorous training, when Russell shows up telling Calix that it is time for training. Calix screams out in pain, telling Russell that he currently doesn't have the ability. With a swollen face, Calix lets Russell know that he is only going to get killed if this continues like this. Russell doesn't really care as he tells Calix that he doesn't need the ability to become a swordsmaster. Russell adds that anyone can reach class if they train diligently, and he uses himself as an example of this. Calix tries to change his mind, saying that too much training is not good for the body. He raises his shirt to show Russell how badly damaged his body is, revealing that he doesn't have what it takes to keep up with his training methods. Instead of pitying Calix, Russell lets him know that the injuries on his body can be healed with the lowest grade potion. Calix cuts in, saying he actually has to save money, but Russell reminds him that the territory's finances are currently on the boom, and this is thanks to Calix himself. Before Calix knows what is happening, a towering aura appears above his head, and Russell lets him know that it is time for training. With no way to resist, Calix is dragged to the training ground again. Russell engages with him in a sparring session, and even though he can see Russell's attacks, he still gets hit. Calix crashes to the ground, leaving him to stare into the beautiful day sky. It soon dawns on Calix that he has to find a way to get out of his current predicament. Suddenly, he remembers a peculiar lady needed for his plan. Basically, this lady is the most skilled person in the game when it comes to money. She is also Gale's strongest ally, but at this point, she and Gale haven't met yet. This is when Calix gets the bright idea to steal the girl away from Gale. Calix is putting his plan together when Russell drags him up, telling him that it is time for another round of training sessions. Calix then screams out his lungs, telling Russell that there is something he needs to know. Russell chills out and he tells Calix that if this is just another excuse for him to slack off, the training time will increase by 10. Calix then reminds Russell that they have 100,000 gold worth of silver bars, but they are currently not using them. Russell mentions that the silver is stolen, so there is little they can do about it. Calix lets Russell know that he is aware of this, which is why they need someone who can help launder the money. When Russell hears this, he initially assumes that Calix is trying to slack off, but quickly forgets about this, since Calix is not wrong. Russell then asks Calix if he has to do it at that very point in time. Calix lets Russell know that they are going to get an interest of 200,000 gold if they are able to lend the silver bar to someone. Calix tells Russell that every single day is a waste if they don't put it to work. However, Russell is clueless about what Calix is saying, so he doesn't really understand. Russell then asks Calix how long this is going to take, and Calix replies that it might take 3 months because he would have to go to the capital. When Russell hears this, he concludes that Calix is currently messing with him, but he tells Calix that even if he leaves, Kraut will continue with his daily training. Calix freaks out when he hears this, as he urges Russell not to go that far. However, Russell screams at Calix, saying it is a must that he does this. The following day, Calix hears from Kraut that Gale is coming to the territory. Calix asks Kraut why the prince is coming, and Kraut reveals that he heard about this in the vassal meeting that morning. Apparently, a full-scale succession battle has begun between Gale and Seal. Thanks to this, Kraut believes that Gale is coming to take over their territory. The moment Calix hears this, he tells Kraut that they need to pretend that they didn't hear about Gale's imminent arrival. With a worried look, Calix tells Kraut to get the horses, not the carriage, ready. Kraut is surprised to hear this, and he reminds Calix that he doesn't even know how to ride a horse just yet. Calix tells Kraut that he doesn't mind figuring it out on the way, but all he wants is for Kraut to get the horses ready. Calix then stands up to leave, saying he will be the first to head out while the knights join him later. Kraut is surprised that Calix is eager to leave, and he asks him if he isn't ready to see the prince, since he hasn't seen him before. Deep down, Calix admits that he has never seen Gale in person, but everyone who has played Hero's Destiny knows who Gale is. He is a pretty talented fellow who likes snatching up other talented guys like himself. Calix knows that Gale is going to force him to work for him if he meets him in the territory. It's either he gets worked to death or he dies in an accident, and there is no scenario where the two work out for him. Calix turns around and screams at Kraut to get things ready fast because he is going to leave him behind if he doesn't. Kraut immediately imagines Russell scolding him for losing Calix, and Kraut doesn't want this scenario to play out. He immediately urges Calix to wait for him. 2 hours later, Calix is seen pacing at the castle entrance, wondering why Kraut hasn't shown up even though he told him to be quick about it. Suddenly, he spots Lila packing luggage into the back of a carriage, and he asks her what it is that she is doing. Lila then reveals that her pursuers are no longer after her thanks to Calix's efforts. In addition, the Shadow Force has collapsed, which has resulted in many deserters like herself. Calix then asks her where she plans to go, and she confesses that she has no idea just yet. She mentions that she has always dreamt of being free, but now that she is free, she doesn't even know what to do with the freedom. Lila then mentions that she is going to go wherever she likes in the meantime. Calix then gives her a hint of where to go, telling her that if he had the chance, he would go to the Holy Empire of Granada. Lila is surprised to hear this, and she asks Calix if this empire really has artifacts and mana-bending techniques for women. Calix tells Lila that she is free not to believe him, but she has a choice to make. Lila then thanks Calix, saying that if there is a chance, she is willing to take it. She also tells Calix that she would love to meet him again. Calix agrees with her, and as she leaves, Calix realizes that it is a shame that he no longer needs her, since she is not a top talent nor someone with exceptional abilities. Calix looks at her as she rides away, thinking about what she said about them meeting again if there is a chance for it in the future. Calix then uses this opportunity to visit Albu's grave. Standing in front of the grave, Calix wonders if he was too calculating. He remembers Albu giving his life to save him, but he couldn't hold Lila back because the status window showed that she had a low level. At this point, Calix starts to wonder if he is thinking of them as just characters in the game. This gives him a wake-up call, and he decides that the next time he meets Lila, he's going to treat her more like a human. Just then, Calix hears Kraut calling out to him from behind. Calix joins them and orders that they get a move on. 3 days later, at the border of the Shikan territory, Russell is seen welcoming Gale's party to the territory. Later that night, Gale is treated to the best dishes. However, Russell still acts humbly, saying the food might taste bad because they are in a rural area. However, Gale lets Russell know that all he cares about are the great people and not the food. Russell thanks Gale for the compliment, and Gale reveals that he has noticed that Calix is not available. Russell then tells Gale that his messenger arrived a few days after Calix had left, so there was no way to get him back. Gale realizes that he is getting an unsatisfactory answer to why Calix left, but he is reluctant to ask again because if he does, it might appear as if he's pushing too hard. Gale stares at Russell disgustingly because he believes that he is the type who can't read the room. Gale then speaks up, telling Russell that he might have wanted to meet Calix, but this doesn't mean he didn't want to meet him too. Russell smiles and tells the prince that he is honored by this, but deep down, Gale is pissed. Later that night, Gale asks Russell if he is going to give him his full support. Gale reminds Russell that their relationship with Koshirin is pretty bad at the moment, and since he came to visit the territory, they must believe that they are allies. Gale adds that he was the one who personally delivered Russell's letter to the king. Russell bows to Gale to show his respect, and he thanks him for going out of his way to deliver the letter. Gale finally asks Russell how he met Gerard, and Russell is surprised that Gerard himself didn't tell Gale. Gale reveals that he only wanted to hear Russell's side of the story. Deep down, Gale is disappointed at how dull Russell is because he is acting as if he hasn't received a report from his subordinates. In addition, Gale is pissed that he can't get a read on Russell's true intentions. Russell then mentions that Calix was sick when he received the royal summons, which is why he sent a message that there is going to be a delay. However, this message didn't go through very well, and Gale asks him if there was an issue with the messenger. Russell claims that the messenger tripped over a stone and broke his ankle. Gale is so tired of the excuses, but he urges Russell to continue. Russell then says it was at this point that Gerard came to him with an offer, asking for help to run away from Servio. He claims that Gerard promised to forgive all their debts if they helped him. In fact, he offers to take care of the message that he planned to send to the royal capital. Russell then tells Gale that he never thought everything would lead to this. After hearing the story, Gale takes a deep breath and remains silent. Even Russell plays along and refuses to say anything. Deep down, Gale is trying to process the story, and he knows fully well that there is no controversy just yet. However, he is disappointed that Russell has no exceptional talents, even though he is a respected knight. Gale believes Russell's story that he only helped Gerard escape because he needed help. In addition, he doesn't think he needs to worry about Calix because from what he heard, he is just a sickly dude. Nonetheless, Gale is hell-bent on getting what he came there for. Gale then demands to know Russell's answer concerning what he asked him earlier. Gale asks Russell again if he is willing to support him. After thinking about it for a minute, Russell lets Gale know that the family is formally declaring their support for him. Gale is glad to hear this because this is exactly what he wants, but Russell lets him know that he has a request. Gale is surprised to hear this. Apparently, 3 days ago, before Calix left the territory, Calix had told Russell that there was every possibility that Gale would ask for his support. Calix tells Russell that it doesn't look good for them if they support Ciel, the 5th prince. Russell agrees with him, saying Antonio is Ciel's stepfather and guardian. However, Calix lets Russell know that they don't stand to gain much even if they support the 1st prince. Nonetheless, they have no choice. Calix then tells Russell that when he is declaring his support for Gale, he has to take a strong stance. Calix tells Russell that he has to request an exemption from the transit tax for the royal merchant guilds operating in their territory. Russell is surprised to hear this because they don't currently have any royal merchant guilds in the territory. Calix assures Russell that he is aware of this since they were disbanded due to financial difficulties. However, there is no way that they are going to leave it like that forever. Now that the entire country is divided into 2 factions, Calix says the 1st prince's influence won't extend to the 5th prince's faction. Calix says this is enough as long as it applies to only the regions under his influence. And as for the quantity, Calix suggests that they limit it to 1,000 magical artifacts per year, and even though he might act all high and mighty, he is pretty sure that Gale would accept without hesitation. Russell is surprised by the quantity, asking if it isn't a little because even without the transit tax, each territory still has to pay separate customs duties. Russell is curious about how effective this will be, but Calix doesn't have the time to explain himself, and he urges Russell to just make the request. Even though Russell has no idea what Calix is thinking, he is pretty sure that Calix has something he is planning. Now that Russell is standing in Gale's presence, Gale tells Russell to ask for whatever he wants, as he is ready to do it if it is within his power. Russell is surprised to hear this because it is just as Calix predicted. The following day, Calix is seen complaining about the rough journey, but Kraut urges him to stay strong because they will reach Poznu in about an hour. Calix complains about his butt, and how numb it is that he can't even feel it. Kraut then tells him that he is feeling this way because he has not been practicing horse riding. Calix urges Kraut not to blame him, and Kraut asks him who he is supposed to blame if not him. Calix screams at Kraut to shut his mouth and blame everyone else aside from him. Deep down, Calix is pissed at how weak the previous owner of the body is, and he wishes he could meet him just so he can punch him in the face. Kraut then asks Calix why they are going to Poznu because the original plan was to go to the capital. Calix replies that there was a change of plan because they might run into Gale on their way to the capital. Kraut is surprised to hear this, and he asks Calix why he is so afraid of the prince, but this gets Calix screaming out of his lungs. He asks Kraut if he avoids poop because he is scared of it, and this analogy shocks Kraut. He believes that no matter what, the prince being compared to a poop is way over the top. With everything Calix has said, Kraut assumes that he isn't running away. Calix mentions that the plan was to stop at Poznu on the way back from the capital, which means the order of things only changed. Calix lets Kraut know that he has no intention of running away, nor is he scared. Kraut cannot believe that Calix is getting worked up over something he could have easily explained, leaving him to conclude that Calix is just an adorable baby. On the other hand, Calix figures out that he will continue to get treated like a child if things continue this way. Calix realizes that the only way out is to reach Class 4 as soon as possible. However, he knows that Russell's method is going to take forever, which is why he actually came to Poznu. Calix knows that he will be able to obtain an S-rank skill if they manage to conquer the dungeon near Poznu. Apparently, dungeons that contain good rewards are rare, and with his current weak body, it would require a large expedition to clear a dungeon. However, if he does this, the nobles of the territory where the dungeon is located would not have it. This is where Poznu comes in because the city is different. It is basically a free city and there are no meddling nobles, which is why it is easy to hire mercenaries to form the perfect expedition team. Just then, Kraut informs Calix that Poznu is coming into view. Upon arriving at the city's entrance, they are requested to sign the visitor's form. Calix barely has any strength left in him, but he is glad that they have finally arrived in the city. At the inn, Calix commends the knights for working hard over the past couple of days, and he tells them that he would like to shake off the trip's fatigue before anything else. Calix asks them if any of them knows a place where they can have a good time, and when the knights hear this, their mood immediately changes for the better. With this, the knights drag Kraut and Calix to try to find a place where they can have fun. As they walk through the city, the knights are blown away by how nice everything looks, leaving them to wish that they had a place like this in their territory too. Just then, a strange child welcomes them, telling them that they have arrived at the best place to drink wine and other strong substances. The moment Calix sees the child, he lets off a short smile. Upon entering the cafe, the knights start having the best of times, but Kraut refuses to drink because he wants to keep an eye on Calix. The knights cannot believe just how much of a mood killer Kraut is, because he is always acting all serious. While everyone else is having fun, Calix tracks down the kid from earlier who welcomed them, and the moment Calix calls him, he nervously turns around as if Calix is about to swallow him. He asks Calix what he wants, and Calix walks up to him, asking him if there is another shop aside from this one. He lets Calix know that there is another shop, but he might get into trouble if he takes Calix there. Calix assures him that he has nothing to worry about because the soldiers are currently having fun. Calix lets him know that he will be taking only him and Kraut. The kid remains reluctant, and just then Calix brings out a gold coin and flicks it into the air, telling him that he is going to give him the gold if he agrees to take him. The kid is immediately drawn into the deal because of the love of gold. He tells Calix that he is up for it, but it would be better if the soldiers remain at the current shop. Calix agrees to this, but he calls Kraut to follow him. The kid leads them through the city, and Calix asks him if he has been in the city for long. He replies that he has been there for over 10 years, and Calix expresses his shock, saying he doesn't even look 10. The kid screams out when he hears this, saying he is 14 years old. As the walk continues, Calix asks him who the strongest person in the city is. He reveals that the strongest person is said to be Omar, who is the leader of the Steel Shield Mercenary Corps. However, Omar has never faced off against the other 3 major mercenary leaders, so his strength has never been confirmed. Calix further asks him about the 3 major mercenary groups, and the dude is shocked that Calix doesn't know this. Apparently, the 3 major groups are the Red Wolf, Black Wing, and Steel Shield. After this, Calix asks the kid how the autumn's monster wave went by. The kid replies that it wasn't that bad, since the tavern is quite full. However, the adults are worried that a supermoon might be coming, but Calix believes that the adults worry too much. Moments later, they arrive at a castle, and the kid says they have arrived at their destination. Just then, a stern-looking lady steps out, saying Calix has no reservation at the building, which means he is not welcome. When asked what his business is, Calix reveals that the kid was the one who guided him to the building. When the stern lady hears this, she screams at the kid, whose name turns out to be Urine. The lady then bows to Calix, urging him to leave because they are closed for the day. However, Calix refuses to make a move, leaving the lady to start wondering what Calix is looking at. It turns out that the lady is wearing a ring, but she doesn't want to believe that this is what Calix is staring at. Just then, Calix turns to the kid, telling him that he didn't guide him to a proper place, so he would have to refund his money. The kid argues with this, saying it is a lie because he actually brought Calix to exactly where he would like to be. The kid says he can sense that Calix is looking for information and not women. With a serious voice, he tells Calix that he can't return the gold coin. Just then, the stern lady screams out Urine's name and fear creeps through his body. Meanwhile, Calix is staring at Urine's status window, and it turns out that she is a lady, not a boy. Her name is Urina Celestina Agrapatna, and she is a fallen royalty who has an affiliation with the children of Eridona. For her stats, she is rated SS in finance, and her development is also A-ranked. Calix lets out a quiet smile because he has found the girl he is looking for. She is Celestina Urine, also known as the witch behind the curtain. Basically, the main reason she was heading to the capital in the first place was to meet the future top-tier merchant because he planned to invest the stolen secret funds with her. Out of pure luck, he has managed to run into her. Calyx then tells Yurine that since he can get information from where she brought him, he doesn't need to collect the gold coin back from her. Yurine is glad to hear this, and she celebrates her earnings. Suddenly, the stern lady calls Yurine to cross over to her, and by the time Calyx turns around, he is staring at ladies pointing crossbows at him. Kraut grabs his sword, and in anger, he asks them if they know who they are pointing arrows at. The lady then reveals that they are in a high-class salon, and it is rare for uninvited guests to refuse to leave. He mentions that some of the guests they have in the house have combat abilities even beyond that of knights, so they have no choice but to prepare strict measures like this one. However, she lets Kraut and Calyx know that if they leave, no harm will come to them. Calyx teases her for being rigid, and he lets her know that she is not going to get allies if she keeps chasing everyone who comes for a visit away. Yurine agrees with Calyx, telling the stern lady that she is already doing too much. Calyx then tells the lady that she might have external beauty that doesn't match her age, but it appears that Yurine, her young master, is wiser than her. Deep down, the lady knows how talented Yurine is, but she is scared that things will be bad if their true identity is revealed. The lady then decides to be a bit more civil, but she tells Calyx that he has to answer her question. She asks Calyx for his name, but Calyx tells her that she should already know this by now. Calyx suggests that she take off her ring and give it to Yurine, and the lady asks Calyx if he knows the significance of the ring. Calyx replies that it is pretty obvious because the royal crest of Agrippatna is openly engraved on it. Calyx's taunting works, and this causes the lady to lose her cool as she screams out Calyx's name, telling him that he is digging a deeper hole for himself. This gets Kraut mad because he wonders why the lady didn't acknowledge Calyx when she already knew who he was. Calyx then asks the lady if she has any idea what information he needs, and if there is anything she thinks he can offer in return. Deep down, the lady is backed into a corner because she can't answer this. She is worried because she assumed that only people who could figure out who they are from the ring's crest would be someone from the royal family, or an assassin who is after them. However, for the heir of a foreign family to figure it out immediately gets her absolutely worried. When Calyx sees that the girl can't answer the question, he realizes that she is confused, and he decides to throw the question to Yurine. Calyx lets Yurine know that the more complex the problem is, the simpler the answer. Yurine is impressed by this, and she tells Calyx that he never forgets what he sees. Apparently, the royal crest appears in many history books, and she is confident that Calyx must have seen it in one of them. Yurine then tells Calyx that the crest is just the symbol of a long-dead royal family, and nothing special. Her guardian cannot believe that she just made fun of the family, but she doesn't really care, and Calyx lets off a loud laugh. Calyx commends Yurine, telling her that she is wise, and Yurine returns the gesture. The lady is frustrated because nothing is going her way, and she finally agrees to speak inside. The lady leads them to a special room and asks them what they want to eat. Calyx looks around and figures out that the room has a generic setup to get someone to eat and sleep off. Calyx then teases the lady, saying it is a bit tense to be in a room with a woman alone. The lady replies that she has not decided whether she is going to let Calyx go back alive or not. She tells Yurine that he is supposed to try to convince her. Calyx, being his annoying self, tells the lady that the hospitality in the salon is lacking because she is supposed to serve them tea at least. Calyx then urges Kraut to take his seat because there is nothing to be afraid of. Apparently, in the game, Yurine was a member of the Children of Eridona, a shadowy group. She was the most powerful ally who financially supported the Black Prince, Gale. She was so good that no one could surpass her ability to make money. Because of how good she is, Calyx is looking to invest the stolen funds with her. Yurine basically understands that trust is the greatest asset for a merchant, but Calyx believes that Yurine is still pretty young. She is left wondering if she should leave Yurine till she grows or if he should raise her. Calyx then picks up the teacup and drinks the tea served to him. Yurine's guardian asks Yurine if he is not scared that the tea is poisoned, and Yurine tells the lady that she doesn't need to worry because if it is poisoned, he will definitely be aware. Calyx then suggests that they go back to the main topic. The lady reveals that she can't continue a conversation with Yurine unless she knows that their secret will be safe with him. Calyx shuts her up by revealing that he is going to invest 100,000 gold. The lady is too stunned to speak until Calyx asks if she is not going to steal his money and run away. The lady starts to stutter, but Yurine enters the room and admits that the money is too large to refuse. The lady is shocked to see Yurine enter the room because she is not supposed to be there. This time around, Yurine looks totally different with a beautiful dress on her body. She formally introduces herself, revealing that she might have been a royal lady, but she is currently a fugitive. Calyx and Kraut are both blown away at how different she looks just by changing her outfit. Calyx is stunned because Yurine was acting like a kid moments ago, but at the moment, she is just like a completely different person. Calyx then remembers that Yurine is actually 1 year younger than his current body, and he decides that he doesn't have to hold back. Kraut finds it hard to close his mouth because he thought Yurine was a cute boy. Calyx then teases Yurine, saying that being a princess doesn't guarantee the ability to make money. He lets Yurine know that she would have to explain properly if she wants his money. Yurine mentions that they have a network of fugitives under their watch, which means that they can get information quickly. She continues by saying the basics of business are to buy low and sell high. Calyx mentions that Yurine is trying to make money in the kingdom's distribution business, but he believes that it is going to be fierce competition. In addition, Calyx says that there is no guarantee that her rivals, the royal merchants, will play by the rules because they have powerful backers, which is why they can hold up customs at the borders. Calyx says they can even find an excuse to seize her goods, and Yurine lets Calyx know that there is no business that doesn't come with risks. She urges Calyx not to underestimate their organization because they can handle smuggling too. Calyx refuses this, saying the business has to be legal or else there is no point in it. Calyx mentions that the money he wants to invest has questionable origins, and the whole plan is to bring the business into the light. When Yurine hears this, she immediately figures out that it is stolen goods, but Calyx says no, revealing that it is more like compensation seized as emotional damages. Urine still maintains the fact that it is stolen money, and Calyx can no longer hold it in. He screams out, telling Urine that what he wants is for her to guarantee that she won't run away with his money. Deep down, Urine is excited that she managed to get to Calyx. Urine then tells Calyx that the answer is simple, and the only guarantee she can give is that she is going to be the hostage. Urine's guardian is shocked when she hears this because she doesn't expect Urine to surrender herself as a hostage. Urine then tells her guardian, who is her stepmother, that it's been 10 years since their people started wandering through foreign lands. She tells the lady that if this continues, the organization will collapse or turn into nothing more than a criminal group. She asks the lady if she understands where she is coming from, and even though her stepmom does, she is reluctant to speak out. Urine reminds her that the money at stake is 100,000 gold, which is a huge sum. Urine lets the lady know that she is more concerned about ensuring that her people live without hardship, rather than struggling to return to her former position. While the two are busy talking about this, Calyx cuts in, telling them to get over it, and this pisses off the lady. Calyx lets them know that he doesn't care about their past, and if Urine is interested in being treated like a princess, she should return to the Japur Union Kingdom. The lady is about to crash out when Urine cuts in, telling her that Calyx is right. Surprisingly, Urine whips out her knife and cuts her hair, saying from that moment onward, she is abandoning the Agrapatna name. Everyone in the room is shocked to see this, but Urine doesn't waste time before saying Calyx already knows the business he wants to pursue with the look of things. Calyx confirms this, revealing that he originally planned to leave everything to Urine, but he has decided that she is still too young for him to fully trust. Calyx tells her that until the trust is fully built, he will have to guide her. Urine argues with Calyx that he is not much older than she is. Deep down, Calyx knows that Urine is more mature than she looks, but at this point, he has no intention of treating her as an adult, because compared to his age on Earth, she's still a kid. Calyx tells Urine that he will be providing the money, and Urine will be running the business, so he doesn't really think the age gap has to be an issue. Urine agrees with him, and she asks Calyx to share his plan with her. Calyx tells Urine that they have to address their primary objective, and to do this, the first thing they need is information. Urine then tells her stepmother to provide Calyx with all the information that they have, especially about the 3 factions that control Poznu, and the current situation in the city. The lady bows her head, agreeing to do what Urine said. Calyx is surprised that the lady is agreeing with Urine so easily and even offering her respects because moments earlier, she was interacting with her as a real mother would. Calyx is impressed that the lady is able to separate her public and private lives. The lady then takes Calyx to the room containing all the information that they have. She urges Calyx to take his time to look through the books and scrolls. After settling in, Calyx concludes that it is time to get started. The next morning, Urine lazily lies on the couch thinking about how he plans to conquer the dungeon because this is the most important thing on his plate at the moment. Basically, there are 2 options on the table, and the first one is to go to the dungeon with the elite members that he brought along. The second option is to hire mercenaries, but doing this increases the risk of leaking secrets. This means the ideal option is to go with the elite team, but to do this, he will have to hire a mage. Apparently, having just one mage in a knight-based party doesn't just add one more fighter to the group, but a mage changes the party's entire tactical approach, thus multiplying its strength several times over. This is basically why mages are pretty valuable, and Calyx is pleased that there is a class 6 mage living in Poznu. This mage is Edalun Beltua, and he is also known as the Hermit of Life. Because of how important this mage is, Calyx figures out that he needs more information about him. Calyx rushes over to Urine's room, but the stern lady denies him access, telling him that Urine is currently in a lesson. The door is closed in his face, leaving him staring into nothingness. One of the maids tells Calyx to follow her, saying she has prepared tea and snacks for him in the garden. While waiting in the garden, the maid assures Calyx that she is going to bring Urine to him once she is done with her lesson. Apparently, the Sheikhan territory was just a mere barony until Korin. Korin Sheikhan rose to class 7 at a young age, but he died shortly after becoming a count. He basically died before he could even establish a solid foundation for the territory. Since he is not the official heir of the Sheikhan territory, he is worried that Edalun might not even decide to side with him. Nonetheless, he is willing to try and see what comes of it. He says this out loud, and Urine shows up at that exact moment, asking him what he is planning to try. Calyx is still trying to start slow when Urine screams at him, asking him when they plan to start the business, while also asking about the capital. Calyx urges her to calm down, revealing that they need proper preparations before launching the business that they have in mind. Calyx reveals that this process will probably take at least 6 months or even a year. Urine is surprised to hear this, and Calyx urges her not to get ahead of herself. To make Urine believe that he has the money, he shows her the balance certificate issued by the Mage Tower, which reveals that there are 30,000 gold coins deposited there. Urine checks it out and admits that it is authentic, but at the same time, she is worried that it is just $30,000. Calyx asks her if she is seriously trying to ask him to show the whole 100,000 where they are. Urine then replies that she has no issues with this because considering the value of the Sheikhan territory, such an amount should be enough. She then proceeds to call Calyx her big brother, and this shocks Calyx. Urine calmly explains that whoever invests a lot of money is automatically categorized as her big brother. Urine asks him if he has a problem with this, but Calyx figures out that this is just Urine's way of calling him a sucker. Urine then asks Calyx to tell her the main reason he called her over. Calyx goes straight to the point, asking Urine if she knows someone called Edalun, and she almost chokes on her saliva when she hears the name. Before Urine can even talk, the stern lady shows up, revealing that Edalun is a mage suspected of dark practices. Urine cuts in, saying Edalun isn't a dark magician, and the lady agrees with her. The lady then tells Calyx that she only wanted him to know in advance so that they can avoid unnecessary suspicions. She mentions that in their current world, even if they render someone in trouble their aid, they might get hit with unreasonable demands instead of being thanked. Without even being told, Calix knows a lot about Edelun, and he knows that he has a difficult personality, but he is not a bad person. Calix then tells the lady that if anything happens, he is willing to take responsibility, but he just wants to know where Edelun is. The lady then tells Calix that she is not going to forget his words. The lady reveals that if Calix goes through the northern gate of Posnu, there is a communal cemetery facing the village mountains, and beside it is a small hut. She reveals that the man living in this small hut is Edelun, and he also works as a mortician. Calix asks if they know Edelun well, and the stern lady tells Calix that everything she knows about Edelun is written in her report. Apparently, he found himself in the city years ago, and he has been engrossed in his experiments since then, but it is well known that he is a stubborn man who hardly ever goes out. Calix asks the lady if she has any recent information about Edelun's experiments, but the lady mentions that magicians hate it when their research is leaked outside. Urine is concerned, and she asks Calix if he is seriously going to Edelun's place. Calix is surprised by the question, and he asks her if he did anything wrong to her. Urine remains mute, and Calix can see that she is reluctant to speak ill of the man, which means she probably doesn't hate him. Urine mentions that she doesn't hate him, but being around him makes her feel like she is going to go broke. She urges Calix to be careful because no matter how tempting the offer is, he should make sure he doesn't fall for it. Calix acknowledges this, and Urine completes it by telling Calix not to touch the money that he is planning to invest in her. When Calix hears this, he figures out that there is still a story behind it that she is refusing to say. Just then, the stern lady drags Urine off, telling her that break time is over. Calix is left with how he wants to persuade Edelun, but he decides to just meet the man first. Later on, Calix and Kraut head to where the lady described. Just by looking at the house from the outside, they can see that it is the right place. They walk over to the door, and Kraut knocks on the door, asking if anyone is there. Edelun's voice echoes from the inside, telling them to come inside. With the confidence that Edelun uses in telling them to come in, Kraut realizes that the person they are about to meet is a very confident fellow who is not afraid of monsters and bandit hordes. Upon entering the house, Calix realizes that the aura is different even though he knows about him. Calix then offers his greetings to the old man, introducing himself. Edelun replies that he doesn't know much about world affairs, so even if he hears a name, there is no way he is going to know how great the person is. Calix humbly tells the old man that he is not from a famous family and doesn't even hold any impressive title, so there is nothing to know. Calix adds that even if he holds a prestigious title, it won't compare to someone like Edelun, who has reached the level of Archmage. Edelun smiles when he hears this because Calix has a sweet mouth. However, Edelun lets Calix know that he is busy and doesn't have the time to deal with him. He urges Calix to get to the point immediately or risk getting thrown out. Calix then tells the man that he has a request. Calix mentions his plan to conquer the dungeon close to the city, and for this, he needs Edelun's strength. Edelun asks him if he is talking about the Impelin mountain range dungeon, and Calix confirms this. Edelun briefly drops the spoon he is using in turning his concoction, and he finally turns around to look at Calix. He lets him know that it's been a while since he heard such a crazy brat. When Kraut hears this, he loses his cool, but he knows that he can't act rashly because Edelun is an Archmage who is on par with Russell. Calix figures out that recklessly attacking Edelun will put him in danger. Kraut can only wish that Calix would do something about the situation before he loses his cool. Calix then tells Edelun that he is ready to pay a large sum to hire him. Edelun lets Calix know that he doesn't care about money because this only has meaning if one survives. Edelun then tells Calix to stop talking trash and just head home if he values his life. Desperate, Calix screams out, telling Edelun that he is ready to provide whatever he needs for his recent research. This only pisses Edelun off even more, and he yells at Calix, asking if he is from the magic tower to investigate what he is researching. Kraut and Calix freeze in fear because the pressure in Edelun's voice is enough to cripple them. Without saying anything else, Edelun tells the two to get out. Later that day, Urine finds Calix, who is obviously frustrated. Urine is surprised, and she asks him if he got swindled out of the investment money. Calix lets Urine know that Edelun wasn't even interested in money. Urine is surprised to hear this because she was already expecting Edelun to use this to meddle in a bunch of things. Calix immediately uses the opportunity to ask Urine if there is anything that happened. Urine reveals that it is not something serious. She mentions that after Edelun settled in the city, she invested a little money, but Edelun defaulted on the money. Urine reveals this with tears in her eyes, and even Kraut is shocked that she got swindled. Calix then asks Urine if she has a contract with the old man, and she confirms this, saying she is not careless about things like this. To prove this, Urine brings out the written contract she has with the old man. Kraut is shocked when he realizes that Urine lost a huge amount of 30 gold, which is 6 years' worth of his salary. He asks Urine how she is acting so calm after losing such a huge sum, but Urine just remains silent, while thinking about her trash decisions. Urine screams at Kraut, telling him that she is not okay with her money being swindled because it's her hard-earned money. She finishes her statement by calling Kraut a broke and nosy old man, ultimately shattering whatever dignity he has left. Calix then tells Urine that he can take over the contract she has with Edelun, but Urine refuses, saying she is going to one day make Edelun work off every single coin that she lent him, and with interest. Calix tells Urine that she might be able to do this to an ordinary commoner, but it is not definite that she can pull that off against a Class 6 mage. When Urine hears this, she gets more disappointed because she realizes that there is no way she is getting her money back from a mage. Calix then tells Urine that she didn't lend the money because she actually invested it to share in the profits. Obviously, she took on the risk of loss too. However, if she were actually strong enough to demand repayment, it would be an entirely different story. Since Calyx is acting all high and mighty, Yurine is forced to remind him that he is also trash when it comes to combat because she has actually seen him train, and he is not that impressive. Calyx claps back, saying he is still a noble with his own lands, and he also has lots of money. Yurine still mocks him, saying he is just a year older, but he is acting like he is on top of the world. This gets to Calyx so much that he almost screams out his real age, but he manages to hold it in at the last second. Calyx can't believe that a kid is actually causing him to get worked up. Even though Yurine is a genius, she is still inexperienced, and her idea of being able to control a Class 6 mage with a simple contract displays how little she understands the world. Nonetheless, Calyx tells Yurine that a real merchant usually knows how to accept losses when an investment fails. In addition to this, a capable merchant would already know how to seize any opportunity to recover what they can. And since Yurine went through the trouble of drafting a contract, he is pretty sure that Yurine must have recorded what field Idolun was researching. Yurine is hesitant to answer this, and Calyx just urges her to forget about the whole thing, telling her that he is going to take the contract from her hands for 50 gold. Calyx teases her by reminding her that he has automatically helped her make a 67% profit, which is not quite bad. Yurine hesitantly agrees, but she demands to watch everything unfold up close, and Calyx agrees to this. After this, Yurine takes them to the room where all the material is kept. The stern lady, Harry, is walking through the hall when she notices that the door to the room is open. Harry enters the room to find Yurine showing Calyx and Kraut around. Yurine starts shaking because she knows what is coming for her next. Harry screams at her, reminding her that she already warned her about making deals behind her back. In Yurine's defense, she reminds Harry that she is always saying no to all the deals. Harry refrains from arguing with her and just drags her out of the room, telling her that her lesson for the day will be longer. After Yurine and Harry are gone with their embarrassing behavior, Calyx turns to Kraut and suggests that they get a move on. Moments after they start the research, Kraut is the first to fall asleep. Calyx soon figures out that convincing Idolun is going to take a lot, which is why it would be better if he goes to the dungeon first and asks him for help afterwards. Kraut is busy enjoying his sleep when Calyx screams to wake him, telling him that it is time for them to leave. Kraut asks Calyx where it is that they are going, and Calyx lets him know that they are heading out to hire mercenaries. As they walk to the mercenary mediation office, they attract a lot of mercenaries who keep their gaze on them. Upon entering the office, even the attendant is shocked to have received a visit from a high-ranking noble. With a smile on his face, Calyx tells the dude that he is there to hire mercenaries. The attendant is initially too stunned to speak as he wonders why a noble would be in such a trashy place. Since he can't handle the business, he tells them to wait a bit for him to return. Calyx wonders why he just went off that way, and Kraut lets him know that he probably left to call the person in charge. Moments later, the dude in charge shows up, and just by staring at him, Calyx could see that the old man is not an ordinary fellow. He then urges them to follow him as they walk to his office. Calyx asks him if it is true that mercenaries of class 4 or higher are rare. The dude replies that once a fighter reaches the skilled level, they can actually live as knights once they find the right rural area. This strikes Kraut sharply, leaving him to wonder if the old man is taking a jab at him. The old man then expresses his surprise that Calyx came by himself instead of choosing a representative. Calyx apologizes in case he startled the old man, telling him that sending a representative wouldn't have ensured a proper contract. The moment the old man hears this, he realizes that Calyx might be young, but he is actually cunning like a fox. Once they have settled down, the old man asks Calyx to explain the details of the contract. Calyx speaks up, telling the man that the danger level of the mission is ranked A, and the reward is 2.5 times the average weekly pay based on experience. He continues by saying the standard contract duration is 1 month. Renewals are in 2-week increments, which is up to a maximum of 3 months. In addition to this, 50% will be made up front. As if the deal isn't sweet enough, Calyx mentions that if an S-rank mercenary serves as the commander, they are going to have full authority over expedition formation. He reveals that the maximum combat personnel is 120, and the maximum support personnel is 80. When the old man hears this, he realizes that his assumption about Calyx was right. The old man realizes that he can't afford to underestimate Calyx just because he is a kid. The old man realizes that Calyx was able to hide the details of the request, but made sure he presented only the conditions with maximum clarity. In fact, the conditions are so perfectly balanced that he can't even complain. He knows it would look bad if he accepts so easily, but at the same time, it would be a shame if he outright refuses this. The old man finally speaks up, saying that getting a mercenary group that is willing to accept the conditions will take quite a bit of effort. He then asks Calyx if he is willing to disclose more about the details of the mission, and Calyx says he is willing to reveal the details, but this will mean a lower reward offer. Deep down, Calyx is confident that the old man doesn't have what it takes to best him when it comes to negotiation, even though he has built up years of negotiation experience. Even though the old man has enough experience in the bag, it is nothing compared to the thousands of times Calyx has done this in games. In Calyx's perspective, the dude is basically an amateur. Realizing that he has been backed into a corner, the old man tells Calyx that he is going to accept the conditions the way they are, because he has never met a noble like Calyx before. The two shake hands on this, and the old man urges Calyx to do all in his power to make sure that many mercenaries return alive. Calyx assures the old man that he is going to do his best. The old man then tells Calyx to tell him the inn where he is staying, so the mercenary captain taking the request can come look for him. The man tells Calyx that he is free to discuss the details of the mission with him. After leaving the building, Calyx lets off a huge sigh, and Kraut asks him what the problem is. Calyx reveals that he was scared that the man might reject the contract. Kraut lets him know that he showed an incredible skill when it comes to negotiation, and he asks him where he learned how to negotiate like that. Since Calyx can't say he copied the sales manager from his old company, he decides to run from the question. He chooses a distraction by suggesting that they grab a drink. Kraut reminds him that he is not of age yet, and even if they want a drink, he has to stick to juice. Meanwhile, they are being watched by a strange dude wearing a hood to cover his face. He is surprised that Calyx showed up at the office with his bodyguard, which is quite unusual. He then decides that he is going to look into the matter. To everyone's knowledge, Poznu is the only free city in the kingdom, which is unaffected by noble rule. Because of this, it is famous as a sanctuary for mercenaries. The moment one joins the city's mercenary corps, all their records vanish, whether they are criminals, escaped slaves, or even nobles from foreign lands. In exchange for this, any mercenary affiliated with Poznu is obligated to fight off the monster wave that spills out of the Impalan mountain range every year. Every autumn, the monsters flood in, and the monsters either get slaughtered by mercenaries or feast on corpses before retreating back into the depths of the mountains. However, the whole burden wasn't placed on the mercenaries from the very beginning. Basically, the first line of defense was a prisoner battalion composed entirely of criminals. And since their deaths meant no compensation had to be paid to their families, the city's current system was built on this foundation. In the end, they transformed into the Blackwing Mercenary Corps, and over time, they came to control both the city's entertainment district and its entire criminal underworld. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Blackwing Mercenary Corps, the godfather of the city's underworld, Valter, is seen entertaining the dude under the hood from earlier, and his name is Corvus. Valter is pissed to see Corvus, and he lets him know that he is quite brave to have shown his face in the building. Corvus reminds Valter that he should be the one taking his head if they are to consider what has happened in their past. However, Corvus tells Valter that he is now a Dark Knight and he has put all of these aside. Corvus tells Valter to keep a level head for once in his life. Valter can't believe that he just got insulted by the dude, but he can't do anything about it since Corvus has reached class 6. Valter acts calmly and asks Corvus what he wants from him. Corvus reveals that a group of nobles arrived in the city some days ago, and he asks Valter if he knows anything about this. Valter rudely replies that he doesn't, and Corvus mentions that Calyx just put out a request. Corvus wants Valter to find out everything about the contract and why Calyx came to the city. While he is busy barking out orders, Valter simply asks him about the payment. Corvus then assures Valter that he is going to pay him in advance for the initial intel, but anything aside from this depends on what he finds. Corvus urges Valter to be fast, because if he misses this gig, he will have missed out on a huge payday. Valter has no choice but to accept the deal, and he immediately tells his men to bring him everything they have on the mission. Moments later, they present Valter with the documents, and he is shocked when he realizes that Calyx put out an A-rank mission, leaving him to wonder if he is trying to start a war. As if this is not enough, Calyx even requested a force of around 200 men, and the mission is estimated to last for at least 3 months. Corvus checks it out and says it is not a mission for a war because Calyx hasn't declared a territorial dispute. In addition to this, Calyx's territory doesn't even share a border with an enemy nation. Valter calls Corvus's attention to the rank of the mission and mentions that dungeons are meant for small elite teams, not brute force. Valter is skeptical about the mission being monster hunting alone. Corvus then says Calyx would be at a loss if it were just monster hunting, and he doesn't think Calyx is that stupid. Valter agrees with Corvus and then declares that it would be good if they just erase Calyx and his men. It suddenly dawns on Valter that Corvus could have taken Calyx out, but he didn't. Valter asks him why he didn't, and Corvus replies that Calyx always has Kraut, who is a class 5 elite knight by his side. Valter doesn't think this is enough excuse because Corvus is a class 6 knight himself. Corvus then reveals that there will be traces left behind if he tries to take Calyx out rashly. Corvus adds that it will be a big problem if Calyx uses a return scroll, but Valter doesn't think Calyx would be able to get his hands on a return scroll because of how expensive they are. Tired of bringing up several excuses, Corvus tells Valter that he hasn't killed Corvus because he is patiently waiting for the perfect opportunity. Corvus then suggests that they assume that his target is the dungeon and just act accordingly. Corvus lets Valter know that there is no room to waste time. He adds that the moment Calyx enters the dungeon, he won't be able to use a return scroll, and this is when they are going to kill him. Valter figures out that it is his job to deal with the mercenaries that Calyx hired. Valter lets Corvus know that it is going to be a hassle if people find out about this, and he would like to get extra pay for this. Valter reminds Corvus that there are going to be at least 100 combat mercenaries, and even if they are just freelance mercenaries, their number can't be ignored, especially in a dungeon where there is no escape. Corvus then assures Valter that he is going to pay whatever the cost is because the person who hired him for the job has more than enough money to throw around. In the city, it is known that there are 3 main forces, which are the Blackwing Mercenaries, the Steel Shield Mercenaries, and the Red Wolf Mercenaries. Among the hundreds of mercenary groups all over, these 3 boast overwhelming strength, and this is because they were not formed like any other regular mercenary groups that just bonded together. When talking about the Blackwing Mercenaries, they were originally prisoners thrown into monster waves to act as bait or a shield. The Steel Shield Mercenaries, on the other hand, were their guards who suppressed the prisoners' uprising. Initially, the 2 groups were on the worst possible terms, but they managed to avoid direct conflict until that moment. This was because they were scared of an ambush from the Red Wolf Mercenaries. Because the 3 groups were evenly matched in strength, the city had managed to maintain a delicate balance of power, keeping the city somewhat peaceful. Since they are always monitoring each other, any sudden sign of battle preparations would always cause alarm. At the Steel Shield Mercenaries headquarters, the leader of the group gets a report that the Blackwing Mercenaries are secretly recalling their scattered forces back to the headquarters. The moment the captain gets this information, he tells his men to also prepare. Elsewhere, Yurine is seen screaming at Calyx, telling him that she would like to join him on the dungeon-conquering mission, since she is a hostage, which would make it ideal that he takes her wherever he goes. Calyx argues with the girl, reminding her that he hasn't even invested in her yet, so she should stop saying trash and just wait at home. Urine decides to psychologically mess with Calix, telling him that he will regret not taking her. When Calix hears this, he is left wondering why the girl is so confident, as if she knows that he is going to waver at some point. Tired of arguing with her, Calix tells Urine that she is free to come along if that is what she wants. However, he tells her that she is going to stop at the dungeon entrance. Urine ultimately agrees to this, and Calix wonders if Urine is seriously pleased with just staying outside the dungeon, or if she already knows that he will allow her to enter the dungeon once they reach the entrance. They are in the middle of this when Harry enters the room and she hears what they are talking about. Knowing just how stern she is, she tells Calix that it is reckless of him to take a young girl into a dangerous dungeon, even if she is a hostage. Calix tries to clean his hands of his accusation, telling Harry that Urine is not even a hostage yet, and she is also the one who insisted on coming along in the first place. Harry then mentions that Urine might be a princess, but in the end, she's still a child. She tells Calix that he is not supposed to indulge her in everything she asks because a responsible adult must set boundaries. Calix quickly reminds Harry that he himself is still a child. Harry is not ready to hear this, and she maintains her stance on opposing Urine from going to the dungeon. Harry drags Urine out of the room, and Calix can't believe that the woman is seriously taking everything out on him. Calix believes that Harry is still not comfortable around him because his first impression was really bad. He wonders if there is someone around who can be a good match for Harry. Even though she is obsessed with Urine, she is not bad looking. Calix believes that Harry would calm down if she found someone that she could rely on. Meanwhile, someone is spying on everything Calix is doing. Later on, a strange individual gets wind of Calix's plan to drag Urine to the dungeon, and coupled with this is misinformation that Harry would be joining them. The boys working for the dude are all pissed out when they hear this, and they threaten to go after Calix, but the dude just tells his informant to continue watching over Harry and Urine. One of his followers then asks him for his orders, and he replies that Harry might actually get dragged into the dungeon if they are not careful. The dude wonders what it is that Calix is thinking because dungeons are no child's play. His right-hand man mentions that the situation might actually be a good fortune for them because sooner or later Steel Shield and Blackwings are going to clash. The individual agrees with him, saying they should use the mission to distance themselves and observe. They can now return later, as if they had no idea what happened. At this point, it would be solely left to them to terminate or negotiate the victor. Later on, Calix receives a visit from Trias, who was sent by the mediator's office. Trias tells Calix that he is to direct all matters regarding the mercenary group to him. Calix is shocked when he sees the dude as if he had remembered something. Trias also brings out an S-rank credit guarantee that was issued by the mediator's office. Trias asks Calix if he would like him to handle the selection of combat personnel and servants. Calix stays mute for some minutes while thinking about the situation. He can't believe that his luck was so perfect that he found the right guy that quickly. When Trias is tired of the dead room, he asks Calix if there is anything wrong, but Calix tells him to proceed whatever way he sees fit. However, he lets him know that if he needs 10 people, he should bring 13 instead. Trias realizes that Calix wants to personally inspect them before making his selection. Trias then asks Calix if he is fine with this because the contract fees paid to the Unchosen Ones will still not be refunded. Calix assures Trias that he is fine with this, and Trias lets Calix know that he is going to make the necessary arrangements for this. Calix then gives Trias a note, telling him to procure the items listed on the note. Trias checks out the list, and Calix lets him know that he has compiled a list of essential supplies for dungeon exploration. Basically, each person should be responsible for obtaining one item from the list, which is why Trias is the only one who is allowed to know the full list. Trias assures Calix that he fully understands everything, and Calix asks him if he has any questions. Trias replies that he has just one question, and he asks Calix how he was able to find the salon. Trias wants to know if he has a favorite hostess in the salon, and when Calix hears this, he immediately figures out that Trias is familiar with Harry, whom he likes. Calix then replies to his question, saying he was asking around for a quiet place where he could avoid prying eyes. Fortunately for him, he found Urine, who led him to the salon. Calix mentions that he initially hesitated since it was a salon, but it turned out to be quiet and comfortable, so he just decided to continue renting it. Calix asks Trias why he asked the question, and with a relieved face, Trias replies that there is no reason why he asked. Deep down, Trias is pleased that Calix doesn't have any ulterior motives for Harry. Trias then asks Calix if he is considering hiring more mercenaries because, in his experience, there are only two types of A-rank danger missions: cannon fodder for an unwinnable battle or a dungeon expedition. When Calix hears the question, he decides to take a minute to answer. He wants Trias to know that he is not going to war, and at the same time, he doesn't want Trias to know anything about the dungeon he plans to explore. Calix is also surprised that Trias is telling him to hire more people, even though he doesn't even know anything about the dungeon's scale or rank. Calix then asks Trias if they are to watch out for the scavengers aiming for the loot and not the monsters. Trias replies that Calix must not underestimate the scavengers because the mission might cost a bit, but hiring extra hands is worth it. Trias tells Calix that if their forces are large in number, the scavengers will think twice before attacking them. However, Calix tells Trias that he has no intention of doing this, since their enemies won't be one of the great powers. When Trias hears this, he realizes that Calix has no intention of listening to him. He assumes that Calix is confident that mere mercenaries wouldn't dare harm a noble. Trias is worried that if he pushes further on this, Calix might just terminate their contract. Trias then decides that if things get dangerous, he will have no choice but to escape with Urine and Harry. Trias then tells Calix that he understands him, and he suggests that they go over the contract details. Trias mentions that the newly added requests state that they must gather 1.3 times the required personnel and even prepare the listed supplies. In addition, each person will only be assigned to one task for confidentiality purposes, and he asks Calix if he is good with this. Calix assures him that he is fine with this, and deep down, Calix is eager to see how everything will play out. 3 days after this, Calix and the hired mercenaries are seen on an open field near the outskirts of the city. Trias tells Calix that he gathered 260 people just as he requested. Calix is impressed by Trias's work even though he was screaming several warnings at him. Calix then swings into action and he starts pointing to those he doesn't want in the squad. Those who are evicted are shocked when Calix points to them because they obviously don't know what it is that they did. As this continues, Trias calls Calix to the side, telling him that those who are evicted are resistant. Trias is about to express his worry when Calix calls him to his senses, telling him that he should keep an eye on those who are putting up a fight. Calix tells Trias that not all of them, but most of them, are probably spies working under dual contracts. Trias is shocked to hear this, and he asks Calix how it is possible for him to know this. Calix explains that if it is true that they are mercenaries, they are supposed to be happy about being excluded from such a dangerous job. Calix reminds Trias that the advance payment alone is 50% of the reward, which means they are not on the losing side. However, if they have already taken money from another source and fail to join the mission, they would have to return the money, which is obviously why they are resisting. Trias realizes that Calix is actually spitting some level of sense, and Calix lets him know that this is not logic but the truth itself. Calix knows that he might not have eliminated all the spies, but he has overwhelmingly reduced the risk of leaked information. With this, Calix climbs his horse and tells the mercenaries that it is time to ride out. Urine then shows up, asking Calix if he liked her present. It turns out that Calix was able to find out that one of the great powers was after him, all thanks to Urine. Calix smiles and replies that her information was really helpful. Urine teases Calix, telling him that they are business partners, so she can't just watch and let the dude die in a dungeon. Apparently, it was all thanks to Urine reaching out personally that Calix was able to land such a huge shield in the form of Trias, who was lured in by Harry. Urine then asks Calix if he is fine, and Calix demands to know why she is asking. She reveals that the monsters in the Impalan mountain range are just as ferocious as the ones in the Goda Highlands. Calix casually replies that the dungeon they are heading to is so familiar to him, like his backyard. Urine is shocked when she hears this because Calix was born and raised in the Shikan territory. Calix nervously replies that he wanders around in his dream. Urine is confused by this, but Calix doesn't say anything else, since she can't understand it. Trias then asks Calix if he will still not tell them the final destination, even though the area is a tangled web of different monsters' territories. Trias says they can't just be marching straight through the dangerous area, and Calix assures him that he is aware of this. Trias then asks to send out scouts, but Calix still refuses. Trias turns to Kraut, urging him to say something. Kraut then replies that he trusts Calix, and if he is doing this, he must have a reason, so it would be good if he just follows his orders as well. Deep down, Trias is worried because he knows just how many mercenaries have died from noblemen's stubborn foolishness. He decides that if the losses become too great, he and his men will have no choice but to retreat. Trias finds it unfortunate for the outside mercenaries that he hired, but he has no choice but to keep his core members safe first. Moments later, Calix tells Kraut to climb onto a tree and scout the surroundings. Kraut does as told, and he mentions that there is a goblin village about 500 meters away. Kraut asks Calix what should be done about this, and Calix scolds him for asking, telling him that the obvious choice is to wipe them out. Kraut lets Calix know that the blood from this might attract larger monsters, but Calix tells him that it would be bad for his reputation if he can't wipe out a group of goblins without splashing blood everywhere. Kraut then assures Calix that he is going to do his best, but Trias, on the other hand, is left stunned because Calix was able to notice goblins 500 meters away without scouting. Trias assumes that it is a coincidence, and he hasn't finished this thought when Calix tells Kraut that there is an orc settlement 400 meters away from them. He even mentions how many huts there are, and he tells Kraut to wipe them all out without allowing a single one to escape. Trias almost suffers a brain freeze when he hears this, but he still doesn't want to believe that it is not a coincidence. However, Calix continues with the call-out, leaving Trias dying in his head because he can't seem to understand how Calix is doing this. Trias knows that this is nothing short of an impressive feat because the Impalan mountain range is as complex as a minefield, but they haven't encountered a single medium-sized or larger monster without even sending out scouts. They are basically advancing, while simply taking down small monsters with 0 casualties recorded. Trias has no choice but to admit that Calix possesses a terrifying ability. Kraut notices the shock on Trias' face and he pats him on the shoulder, reminding him that he already told him not to doubt Calix. Trias then tells Kraut that he doesn't want to doubt Calix, but he is staring at a scene that he can't easily accept. He asks Calix how it is that he does it, and Calix asks him if it is in his own rules to share trade secrets with strangers. Basically, Calix gained this experience from dying hundreds of times over 10 years, starting from when he was a beginner adventurer to finding paths like this. Trias knows fully well that Calix's ability to find only the path of weak monsters in a forest swarming with dangerous monsters is an ability money can't buy. Trias then asks Calix if they can at least record the path they have taken so far. Calix explains to him that since they came this far defeating small monsters, their territories would have been messed up, so recording the paths on the map is basically useless. Calix urges Trias to just focus on the task at hand, and Trias acknowledges the order. It turns out that there is actually another way, but Calix doesn't think he has any reason to teach them. Just then, it dawns on Calix that some people are after him, but he wonders if they are still following properly. At the Blackwings mercenary camp, they just finished fighting a monster horde, and Walter asks his scout if they are properly tracking Calix and his men. He is surprised that they haven't been able to catch up, even though they have the superior combat power in this situation. The guide then reveals that it appears that Calix's group has a really good guide because they are deliberately disrupting monsters' territories, and the Blackwings mercenaries are the ones paying for it. Valter is pissed at the guide, and he threatens to kill the poor dude, but he begs Valter to spare him, telling him that as long as they are chasing Calyx and his group, they will continue to suffer this way. Valter then turns to Corvus, asking him why he is not doing anything, and Corvus tells him to just treat him as if he were a ghost. Valter is confused by this, and Corvus lets him know that he is not ready to waste unnecessary stamina on small fry. Corvus reminds Valter that he is the trump card for when the time comes. In addition, Corvus suggests that they leave the tracking to the guys following them from behind. Valter is confused by this, and Corvus mentions that the Steel Shield mercenaries are following them at a distance. Valter is shocked to hear this, and he asks Corvus why he didn't say this earlier. Corvus casually replies that he has no reason to. Valter then tells Corvus that he might as well just go back home too, since Corvus is being uncooperative. Corvus then tells Valter to at least use his head a little. Valter asks Corvus what it is that he wants him to do, and Corvus tells Valter to let the guys chasing them go first. It is pretty simple that if they push the medium-sized monsters toward the Steel Shield mercenaries, they're going to have it a bit easier. Valter is skeptical if they are going to fall for this, and Corvus tells Valter that it is hard to track while keeping a distance. Corvus then asks the guide if he is right, and the guide realizes that Corvus is actually right because when it comes to individual combat power, the Steel Shield mercenaries are superior since they are former prison guards. However, when it comes to other skills like tracking, disguise, and infiltration, he is far superior. Valter then asks the guide if he can pull this off, and he replies that he is going to try. Later on at the Steel Shield mercenaries camp, the captain of the group notices that they are closing the distance, but the tracks are constant when they should be getting clearer. Suddenly, a bunch of trolls emerge from the forest and charge toward them. The group panics when they see the enemies rushing at them, and one of the trolls grabs one of the mercenaries. Seeing the horrific scene and realizing that his men are freaking out, the captain figures out that it is up to him to motivate his team. He screams at them, telling them that it is not their first time seeing a troll, so they should get a move on. With their captain leading the charge, the mercenaries follow through. A fierce battle ensues between the mercenaries and the trolls. Moments later, the captain realizes that they have already lost a few men just from one single attack. Nonetheless, the captain keeps pushing because he knows that they can defeat the monsters. After a long-fought battle, the captain kills the last troll by cutting its throat, and the Steel Shield mercenaries come out on top. The mercenaries start to celebrate the win, but the captain is not entirely happy because 10 people had to die just to defeat 3 trolls. Their guide then tells the captain that they have been deceived by the Blackwings mercenaries because this path isn't theirs. The guide believes that they have cleverly forged the group's tracks ahead of them. The captain is shocked when he realizes that there is another group aside from the Blackwings mercenaries. This gets the captain wondering if it is the Red Wolf mercenaries, but the guide says this is highly doubtful. The guide tells the captain that he just remembered that a certain noble commissioned a 200-man scale request some days ago. The guide believes that it is this noble and his group, and the captain screams at him for not saying this earlier. The guide apologizes, saying he never knew the request was related until that very moment. The guide tells his captain that the Blackwings obviously didn't enter the mountain to settle scores with them, and this is when the captain realizes that they misunderstood the whole situation. The guide confirms this, saying the Blackwings are most likely targeting Calyx's expedition group. The captain is surprised that the Blackwings mercenaries gathered all of their forces just to plunder Calyx's loot after they are done with the dungeon. The guide moves closer to the captain, telling him that this might suggest that the probability of obtaining something valuable is high. The guide then asks the captain if they should turn back, and the captain takes a moment to think about this. After taking his time, the captain tells his guide that they won't be turning back. He reveals that he wants the Blackwings to run out of patience and move ahead, while they wait in one spot. However, the guide wonders if the Blackwings would want to try and move ahead again, since they went out of their way to let them go first. The captain then reminds the guide that their objectives are different, and the guide finally understands where his boss is coming from. Later that night, the Blackwings mercenary scout notices that the Steel Shield mercenaries have refused to move from where they are. He returns to the camp and informs Valter and Corvus of this new development. When Corvus hears this, he laughs out loud, saying the Steel Shield must have caught on to their plan, which shows that they are smarter than they gave them credit for. Valter realizes that this is a big problem on their necks, and he suggests that they wipe out the Steel Shield mercenaries so that they can move on. Corvus rejects this idea, saying they are not going to have the firepower to contend against Calyx after the Steel Shield has already reduced their numbers. Corvus urges Valter not to forget the real objective, which is to capture Calyx alive or kill him. Corvus tells Valter that he has to avoid combat as much as he can until then. Valter then says it won't make much difference if they also lose their forces to medium-sized monsters. Corvus then smacks Valter on the head, asking him if his head is just there for decoration. Valter is about to crash out when Corvus reminds him that the Steel Shield doesn't know their true objective. Valter still doesn't understand, and he is about to retaliate when Corvus tells Valter that all they need to do is to make the Steel Shield mercenaries believe that their objective is to go find a tremendous treasure. Corvus tells Valter to propose a treasure until they find the said treasure. Valter doesn't believe that Corvus expects him to go talk to the Steel Shield idiots, and Corvus reminds him that their grudge is from the previous generation. He asks Valter if there is currently anyone among them who holds a direct grudge against the Steel Shield mercenaries, since their dispute was all about killing a few subordinates. Valter agrees with Corvus, saying he is right. Corvus lets Valter know that the Red Wolf is always getting the upper hand against them because they don't communicate. Later that night, Valter shows up at the Steel Shield mercenaries camp, holding a white flag to let them know that he is there on a peace mission. The guards quickly get into defensive positions, and the guide rushes to the tent to call the captain. The captain steps out to attend to Valter, and after a night-long conversation, the two finally call a truce. Once the truce is called, the Blackwings leave the camp. Meanwhile, Corvus is hiding in the nearby bush, and he is glad that the two groups are so foolish as to have called a truce. On the other hand, Calyx is resting in his tent while thinking about the mission. He realizes that they are almost at the dungeon, and he calls Kraut to tell him that they are going to be holding a summit meeting. Kraut is surprised that Calyx has been staring at the wall for hours but suddenly calls for a meeting. Kraut then leaves so he can call the top officials to report to the command tent. Moments later, Urine, Harry, and Trius show up. Calyx then informs them that they are going to be heading to the dungeon the next morning. However, he lets them know that this doesn't include all the forces because they intend to go on a forced march. They are surprised to hear this, and they ask Calyx how long it is going to take to reach the dungeon. Calyx reveals that it is going to be a day's walk if they lighten their equipment as much as possible. Trius asks him how many people he plans to take with him, and he reveals that he wants only 60 combatants. He is asked what he plans to do about the supplies, since they cannot take horses into the dungeon. Calyx replies that he is going to handle this with a subspace artifact. When Trius hears this, he realizes that a large subspace artifact, which is capable of storing supplies for 60 people, is rare. But it wouldn't be surprising if the heir of an earl's house has one. Trius then asks Calyx what he plans to do with the remaining forces, and he replies that they are going to send them. Calyx mentions that if they stay, they're going to get wiped out by the guys chasing them. Calyx says the mercenaries won't stress themselves to chase a group going down the mountain. When Trius hears this, he realizes that Calyx is planning to send Harry and Urine back here. Just then, Urine asks him about her own fate, and it turns out that Trius's assumption is right. Calyx tells Urine that playtime is over and she is going to join the return group. Urine tries to argue this, asking Calyx if he is also not baggage to the team, and Calyx reminds her that they need his intellectual capacity. Urine cannot argue even if she wants to, and all she can hope for is that Calyx doesn't die. The next morning at dawn, Calyx makes the order for them to move out, and the ladies, accompanied by the branch forces, turn to go down the foot of the mountain. Trius watches as they leave, and he prays that the ladies stay safe. Soon afterward, Valter notices that the distance between them and Calyx's group has suddenly increased. The guide figures out that 1/3 has gone up north, while the rest changed direction towards the foot of the mountain. The guide figures out that the footprints of those heading north are shallow, and all the wagon tracks are heading down the mountain. It basically shows that the main force lightened their gear and increased their speed. When Valter hears this, he tells his men that they are going to be chasing the enemy's main force, while they ignore those heading down the mountain. Even though he is certain, the guide tells Valter that there is still the possibility of a diversion. Valter then tells him that if they arrive at the dungeon entrance first, they are going to lie in wait, which will make it difficult for Calyx and his men to approach them. Because of how risky this is, Valter doesn't think Calyx and his men would make such a bad move. Valter then tells his men to go up north and increase their speed. 1 hour later, the steel mercenaries also figure out that Calyx's group has split into two. The captain asks the guide which way the Black Wings took, and the guide reveals that they went north. Since the Black Wings went north, the captain decides that they are going north too. Meanwhile, as Calyx and his men run through the woods, he figures out that most might be tired already because the ruins are different from the Goda Highlands. Apparently the ruins drain vitality whether human or monster. In the worst cases, it can even lead to death. Basically, the monsters trapped in the labyrinth become more ferocious with each generation, and after they die, they become undead. Moments later, they arrive at the entrance of the dungeon, and in no time, they run into goblins. They take down the monsters, and just then, the torch hanging on the wall comes on. Calyx then realizes that the story that dead monsters are being eaten by the dungeon to fuel it is quite true. Calyx then tells the group to fully prepare themselves because from that moment forward, monsters are going to appear in any direction. Once they are done arming themselves, Calyx brings out his sword, and suddenly a goblin appears out of nowhere. The goblin leaps toward Calyx, and Trius freaks out, urging Calyx to be careful. He is about to draw his sword when Kraut stops him and urges him to watch closely. Just as the goblin is about to reach Calyx, he whips out his shield to block the attack before kicking the goblin in the chest. Calyx then slowly removes his sword from the sheath with the confidence that he is going to win. The goblin then charges toward Calyx with its mace in hand, but Calyx simply cuts off its arm. With the goblin's dominant arm gone, it screams in pain, but Calyx is not about to stop there. He goes after the goblin and splits it in half with his sword. Calyx lets out a tiresome gasp after defeating the goblin, and Kraut commends him, saying his swordsmanship has improved. Calyx agrees with him, and he tells Kraut to sprinkle some holy water on the corpse so that it doesn't turn into an undead, and attack them while they are sleeping. Kraut assures him that he has this covered. Sometime later, Kraut asks Calyx if they are going in the right direction. Calyx asks him why he is worried about this, and Kraut mentions that it appears that they are going in circles, which leaves him to worry if Calyx is lost. Calyx asks Kraut what it is that he thinks, and Kraut replies that he is pretty sure that there is a reason behind it, but he just doesn't know what it is. Calyx leaves Kraut to keep racking his brain, and this tells him that the guys following them are probably thinking the same thing. Just as expected, the Black Wing mercenaries are already freaking out because even their guide doesn't know which way to go again, as it appears that they are going in circles. Valter doesn't want to blame the guide, and he thinks it is the dungeon itself, but the guide lets him know that he is confident in his tracking skill. He mentions that it is either Calyx and his group have noticed their presence and are trying to drag them into a trap, or they are searching for something. Valter gets curious when he hears that Calyx might be searching for something. Corvus, on the other hand, doesn't really care because all he wants is to fulfill his mission, which is to eliminate Calyx. Just then, Valter reminds everybody that Calyx went out of his way to pay over 200 people, which means there is every indication that he is convinced that he will get something more valuable than the money he spent. Curious, Calyx says he would like to find out what this is. Corvus then tells Valter that he is already becoming foolish, just like the Steel Shield guys. Valter cannot believe that Corvus is seriously indicating that they wait until Calyx comes out of the dungeon because he will be surrounded by lots of guards, and there's no way they are defeating all of them to get to Calyx. Valter is confident that they have to get to Calyx while the guards are distracted. Corvus cannot argue with Valter on this because he obviously needs his combat power to deal with Calyx's guards. Corvus tells Valter that he might regret his decision, but Valter disagrees, saying, on the contrary, that he believes that he has found a jackpot. Valter then reminds Corvus that whatever treasure they find belongs to him. At the same time, the Steel Shield mercenaries have started wondering why they are going in circles. The guide suggests that they wait at the entrance to attack when they finally come out, but the captain says this is not enough. The guide asks him why he believes that this is not enough, and the captain reminds him that they made a truce with the Blackwings. This means that if they lie in wait at the entrance, the Blackwing mercenaries will get suspicious, and the guide agrees with him. The captain then suggests that they keep watching the situation in the meantime. He says they are free to go outside to rest if things get tough and then enter again. The guide agrees with the captain and says he is pretty wise. The captain uses this to take a jab at him, telling him that his wisdom is what makes him the captain while he is stuck at being a lieutenant. This hits the dude really hard, but he takes it like a good mama's boy. 1 week later, they are still going in circles. And at this point, Valter is frustrated. He screams at his guide to close the distance between them and Calyx's group to just 30 minutes. The dude replies that if he does this, Calyx's group will detect their presence and know that they are approaching, since it is a distance where sounds can be heard. Valter tells the dude that he doesn't care, as he wants to catch Calyx and his men to put a sword to their necks. Meanwhile, Calyx has sensed this, and when Kraut asks him if anything is wrong, Calyx simply says no. 3 days after Valter's famous threat, he and his gang are still wandering around the dungeon with no lead. Valter is totally exhausted, leaving him to start questioning all of his life decisions. At some point, they run into the Steel Mercenaries, and this is when Valter's guide lets him know that they have lost track of Calyx's group. Valter doesn't want to believe his ears, and the guide mentions that he doesn't know where they lost the group, since their traces vanished before he could even get a lock on it. At this point, they have been going around for days. The guide falls on his knees, apologizing for the error, and this is when Corvus cuts in with the famous "I told you so" quote. Corvus then tells Valter that no matter what, from that moment forward, they are going to do things his way. Valter then tells Corvus that if he can't wait, he is free to find Calyx and attack him by himself. Valter lets Corvus know that he is at his limit, and when he finally lays his hands on Calyx, he is going to torture him till he spills what exactly it is that he is after. Since he still needs the team, Corvus has no choice but to cooperate. The guide then calls Valter's attention to the fact that 2 of their members are on the verge of dying because they can't use mana. He suggests that they return outside to regroup, but Valter calls them weaklings, reminding them that Calyx's group has not had one single dropout since the start. Valter threatens his men, telling them that anyone who faints won't have it easy. On the other hand, Calyx and his men are still navigating the dungeon. Trieste asks Calyx if he knows the Guardian residing in the dungeon, and Calyx says yes because there is no way he could have prepared without knowing. Trieste then tells Calyx that he didn't need to hire mercenaries because his own soldiers would have been enough if he truly knew about the dungeon's Guardian. Calyx then reminds Trieste that it's been 10 days since they entered the dungeon, and there has been no single person who has dropped out since then, even though they don't have a healer mage. He asks him if he has any idea why this is. Trieste looks around and realizes that even the soldiers who can't use mana seem to be fine, and this forces him to frantically ask Calyx how he was able to pull this off. Calyx replies that it was quite simple. He mentions that they only had to fight in 4 shifts to preserve stamina. While Team A is fighting the monsters, the others will be resting, and by the next battle, Team B will switch. The rotation continues, and in this way they have been able to scale through, which is why a large number of mercenaries are necessary. Trieste is blown away when he realizes that with this method, they don't even need a mage. Moments later, the team sees a blue light in the distance, and they soon find a lake in the middle of the dungeon. This is when Trieste asks Calyx what the dungeon's guardian is, and Calyx reveals that it is a primordial water spirit. The team is shocked when they hear this because a primordial water spirit is an extremely powerful existence even among water spirits. Trieste quickly figures out that the lake they are looking at is the spirit itself, and just touching it would shatter every bone in one's body. Calyx agrees, saying it's like being thrown onto the water's surface from high up in the sky. Trieste then mentions that a class 7 with their party would be needed against the water spirit, and Calyx replies that even the said team won't be able to defeat the water spirit. Trieste then asks Calyx if he has seen one before, but Calyx says no, but claims that he knows how to deal with the water spirit that they are about to engage. Calyx then points to a bunch of barrels in the distance and tells Kraut to scatter them. Kraut then orders the team to carry the barrels to the lakeside. They open barrels to see that they are filled with black oil. Calyx mentions that Shekroid monsters hate black oil, which is why he stored it in the subspace artifact beforehand. When Trieste hears this, he is surprised that Calyx is able to carry this many barrels inside his subspace. Moments later, Calyx asks Kraut to bring the Shekroid seeds. Apparently, the water attribute is weak to the wood attribute, but Calyx believes that if the power isn't balanced, it won't be a match. Trieste then asks Calyx how he plans to defeat a water spirit with seeds of a low-rank monster, and Calyx asks him why he thinks he plans to defeat the water spirit. Calyx can't believe that everything about them is always related to killing. Trieste is ultimately confused, and Calyx reveals that from that moment onward, it is their job to deceive the dungeon. Moments later, the seeds start to sprout, and Calyx reminds them that plants need water to grow. In no time, the seedlings start growing big thanks to the water around, and Calyx mentions that what they now need is sunlight. Calyx then tells the group to close their eyes, and Calyx uses the Zanlai magic scroll to produce a bright light for the Shekroids. In no time, the Shekroids start growing really big, shocking the entire team, except Calyx, since he already knows what to expect. Once the Shakeroids get big enough, Calyx tells the team that it should be enough for what they want to do. The rest of the team is totally blown away, and even Trias expresses his shock, saying he knew Shakeroids hated black oil, but he never knew they could be used this way. Calyx lets them know that if they hadn't scattered the black oil, they would have had their blood sucked dry and become zombies at this point. Trias then notices another strange phenomenon, which is the reduction in the lake's size. Trias can't believe that the Shakeroids have absorbed all the massive amounts of water. Moments later, the water spirit emerges, and even though it doesn't look that big, Kraut says it is cute because it isn't scary. Even Trias is not that impressed because the spirit is about the size of a child. However, Calyx tells them to get into defensive positions with the tower shields because the spirit is not to be messed with. He lets them know that the spirit might be small, but its combat power hasn't reduced. Apparently its stamina might have reduced because it got smaller, but he lets them know that its movements are still fast. Calyx hasn't finished saying this when the guardian spirit cooks up a water attack and hurls it at them. Kraut's shield blocks the attack, and even though the attack hits the shield, he still complains that it hurts. Calyx then tells him to drink the lowest grade potion and endure the pain. He lets him know that he was able to get off with just that simple hit because he is a class 5 knight, and he reinforced his body with mana. Just then, they notice that the Shakeroid is growing again, and even the guardian spirit senses that something is wrong. It unleashes another wave of attack at the team, but Calyx motivates them, urging them to stand strong. The spirit's last attack leaves a huge dent in their shields, but the team's focus is on the Shakeroids, which are getting bigger while absorbing the water. The guardian spirit watches in panic, while Calyx smiles because he knows the simple rule of how water harboring the power of a spirit makes plants grow rapidly. As if this is not enough, Shakeroids are also fast growers. The spirit starts getting surrounded by the monster plants, but it easily cuts down those that are close to her. But things don't look good for the spirit as the monster plants start absorbing every single splash of water that they can get, and those released from the spirit's body. Calyx then asks Trias if he is done with the assembly of the projectile weapon, and he says yes. He asks Trias if the gemstones are placed on the arrowheads, and Trias confirms this, revealing that they even embedded small emeralds just as he instructed. Trias then asks Calyx why he chose to use gemstones, since they are going to be placed on the sharp points, which will ultimately reduce the power. Calyx then reveals that it is basically impossible to deal damage with iron arrowheads, and it is also barely possible with emeralds that carry the wood attribute. Once Trias understands Calyx's choice, he lets him know that firing preparations are finally over. Calyx is glad to hear this, and he tells the team that it is time they end the whole battle. Calyx gets behind the weapon, and he takes aim at the Guardian, which has reduced to the size of a palm. Just when Calyx realizes that the spirit is struggling against the monster plants, he fires the weapon. The arrow pierces through the Guardian's body, and it screams out in pain. The monster plants get even stronger with this, leaving the team to watch in curiosity if they have won. Calyx then gets a notification on the screen, telling him that he failed to destroy the dungeon core, but he can still enter the dungeon reward room. They spot the door opening in the distance, and Calyx orders his men to quickly spread the black oil up to the door. Everyone acknowledges the order and quickly lays a path with the black oil, and after they are done, Kraut commends Calyx's plan, saying it was magnificent. Calyx agrees with him, but as they enter the reward room, Calyx is stunned by what he saw. The reward room is basically filled with weapons, jewels, and armor. Calyx then tells his men to classify the artifacts carefully. In one corner of the room, Calyx also notices that there are different books lying around. Calyx picks a book with a red cover to check it out, and the system informs him that he has acquired a skill book called Ferrum Infinitus. Calyx wonders what sort of book it is, and when he opens it, he finds sentences related to repeated slashing. Calyx reads into one of the sentences which says, even if the clouds dull his blade, its heart is eternally sharp. In addition, there is nothing the blade cannot cut. After reading the sentence, the skill tells him that he has unlocked a new skill, which is Ferrum Infinitus, and from that moment on, no one else can acquire the skill. Calyx reads the skill information, which is rated S rank. The system tells him that his talent limit increases every time he slashes an enemy with a bladed weapon or gets slashed too. This is a curse skill that was created by the great mercenary king Damon in his later years to overcome the limits set by their god. Basically, Ferrum Infinitus means infinite blade. This skill also expands the limit of talent by offering one's blood or the enemy's blood as a sacrifice. In fact, Damon was said to have used this skill to become a god. Calyx is glad to have found such an incredible skill because with this, he can raise his level without restriction. Calyx lets out a huge smile because he just found an ultimate skill that allows one to exceed human limits. Just then, Kraut shows up to tell him that the classification of the artifacts in the reward room is already complete. Calyx then walks over to check it, and while looking through them, he finds another book with a blue cover. This book is said to have been written by Morgan, and it contains a mana breathing technique. It is rated B rank, but whoever wants to learn it must not have learned any other mana breathing technique in the past. When Calyx sees this, he immediately figures out that the book is useless to him. His body has already learned the mana breathing technique that is passed down through the Sheikhan family for generations. However, Calyx has forgotten the training method, and only traces of it remain. He knows that to advance to class 4, he needs to practice a mana breathing technique fast, but he can't even ask Russell about it. While he is busy thinking about this, Kraut is behind him, wondering what it is that Calyx is thinking again. Kraut finally calls out his name, asking him what it is that they should do with the artifacts because everyone is waiting for his orders. Calyx then tells them that he is going to distribute the artifacts to everyone according to their characteristics. He tells them not to be envious of their peers' items even if they look good. He assures them that whatever attribute he gives them is what is best for them, and while he is saying this, everyone is left in complete surprise. Even Trias is shocked because he knows that no matter how much they contribute to clearing the dungeon, there is no obligation or need to give mercenaries anything other than the contracted reward. Trias is forced to walk up to Calyx to tell him how surprised they are. Calyx then tells him to check the contract properly because the request lasts until he returns safely. Trias agrees with him, but asks him if there is a reason for him to go out of his way to distribute artifacts to everyone on the team. Calyx then asks Trias why he thinks he dared to shoot a crossbow to touch the core earlier on. This is when it dawns on Trias that the dungeon has undergone a configuration. Calyx confirms this, saying the labyrinth structure must have changed in the worst way. In addition, 2 of the great powers entered the dungeon while they were still on a truce. It suddenly starts to dawn on Trias where Calyx is coming from because most of them would have become undead at this point. Trias then asks Calyx if he knows how many enemies entered the dungeon to chase them. Calyx casually replies that there is no need to know this, and Trias argues with him, saying those people are humans too. Calyx calls his argument laughable while asking him if a mercenary who kills people for money should be spouting such sentimental trash. Calyx reminds Trias that he merely gave a fair death to those who were after his life, and he believes that Trias should be happy. This is when Calyx finally lets the cat out of the bag to let Trias know that he is aware that he is the captain of the Red Wolf mercenaries. Trias is shocked when he hears this, and just as he reaches for his sword, Kraut has already placed a sword on his neck, telling him to refrain from moving. Trias's men whip out their swords, and Kraut dares them to make a move because he is going to cut off their captain's head if they do so. Trias is forced to ask Calyx how he noticed, but deep down Calyx cannot answer this because Trias doesn't know about the status window. Calyx then tells Trias that he is going to turn a blind eye to the fact that Trias accepted the request while falsifying his identity. He lets him know that the mission is not over because the mission just got even more dangerous. When Trias hears this, he assures Calyx that he is ready to cooperate because he has thought about it and realizes that making any rash move will end badly for him. Trias then tells his men to equip the artifacts that were given to them by Calyx, and they should try to master them as fast as they can to prevent the shedding of unnecessary blood. The mercenaries follow their captain's orders, and Calyx gives Trias Morgan's mana breathing technique book, telling him that he is going to know what the book entails when he sees it. Trias is shocked when he realizes that it is actually a mana breathing technique. Calyx asks him if he has learned any before, and he says no. Calyx then tells him to learn the one in the book because it is quite good. Trias then asks Calyx why he gave him the book. In his mind, Calyx knows that the reason he gave him the book is to help him reach class 5, where he can infuse mana into weapons. This book basically makes it possible for him. In Trias's mind, he can't believe that he just got an item that a mere mercenary won't even dream of getting. He looks totally dumbfounded, and Calyx mentions that Trias is staring at him as if he can understand his actions. Calyx assures Trias that he is only doing his best, and Trias expresses his shock that Calyx is still helping him even though he might betray him, since he already lied earlier. Calyx then reveals that this was the reason he prepared one more present. In Calyx's mind, he is already celebrating because he knows what Trias is going to become in 5 years. Apparently, Trias would go on to become Posnu's ruler in the future. He will also be known as a devoted husband to Harry, while he would go ahead to adopt Urine. Calyx is the only one who knows that Trias's value just skyrocketed, and since he will be the one ruling the city later on, Calyx figures out that it would be great if he maintains a good relationship with him. Calyx then tells Trias that the second present is to assist him in capturing Harry's heart, and this shocks Trias to his bones because he has no idea why Calyx would go to this extent. Unknown to him, Calyx is basically happy to do all of these because he practically owns Trias without him knowing it just yet. Earlier on, when the mercenaries heard the scream from the guardian spirit and everything started to shake, most believed that it was an earthquake, but Corvus was the only one who figured out that they were about to undergo a dungeon configuration. Suddenly the dungeon starts to move, and the walls crumble too. Panic ensues among the mercenaries, and those who are not fast enough get caught in the rubble. Walter watches as his men get trapped under the crumbling walls, leaving him to wonder what is going on. After everything settles down a bit, what is left of the steel mercenaries are seen catching their breath. The lieutenant asks the captain if he knows his way out, but the captain ignores the question while asking him how many rations they have left. The dude reveals that the ration they have can only last them for 3 days. When the captain hears this, he realizes that this is a problem because his guys will reach their limit in 2 days at best. But he can still go at least 2 weeks, since he is a class 5 warrior. The captain then concludes that he has no choice but to use his comrades as consumables, since they are doomed to die in the first place. Back in the reward room, Trias's men tease him because his face was utterly red when Calyx mentioned Harry, which obviously gave away the fact that he likes her. Even his men tell him that he doesn't need to hide it because they already knew this a long time ago. Trias tries to shut them down, while Calyx tells them that the most important thing is for them to get out of the dungeon, and they can talk about anything else afterward. Once everything is ready, Calyx tells them that it is time for them to escape the dungeon, and he reminds them to master the artifacts as they move forward. Suddenly, the torch goes off, but before they start to panic, Calyx urges them to chill out, telling them to activate the light magic tool. They all follow his order, and everyone is able to produce lightning for themselves. Calyx knows that the path would have changed completely, but he is still confident that there is a way out. After analyzing the situation, Calyx tells the men that it is time for them to move out. As they move through the dungeon lobby, Kraut talks about how quiet everything is, and Calyx reveals that everywhere is quiet because the monsters were wiped out. Apparently, when a dungeon configuration happens, the exit is blocked for about a week, and during this time, no new monsters can enter. However, this also includes mercenaries, which is pretty obvious. Trias then asks Calyx if he can estimate how many people survived, but he lets him know that most of them are probably dead. Moments later, they run into a horde of undead. Kraut calls out the order, telling the team to spread out in formation. Without fear, they engage the monsters, but Kraut soon notices that they are getting swarmed by the undead. This is when Calyx decides to give some of the mercenaries numbers for easy identification. After numbering them, he tells number 3 to deploy the shield artifact in a hemispherical shape and block the entrance. The dude is surprised and confused, but Kraut screams at him to follow what Calyx told him. The dude finally agrees, and Calyx tells Kraut to protect his eardrum so he can throw the explosion scroll in the distance. When Trias hears this, he assumes that Calyx has gone insane because using an explosion scroll in a narrow underground passage is considered the stupidest thing one can do. Trias believes that they are all done for at this point. Kraut ignores him and does as Calyx instructed, and he throws the scroll at the undead formation. Number 3 also puts up the shield as Calyx ordered. Just then, the explosion goes off, leaving a massive cloud of fire in the air, but it can't touch the group because of the shield. When everything finally settles down, they are all curious to know what happened to the undead. The first thing that hits them is a choking smell. And when the smoke clears out, what is left are roasted undead monsters lying around the lobby. Trias is shocked when he sees this because he has never seen a noble who makes precise judgments in critical situations like this before. In addition, he has a knight beside him, which makes Trias conclude that Calyx's ability is immeasurable. The mercenaries grab Trias, asking him to explain what just happened, but he lets them know that even he is completely lost. With the undead out of the picture, Calyx motivates the group, telling them that it is time to move out. 1 week later, the team is about to reach the entrance when they find the bodies of the 2 other mercenary groups lying on the wall, totally bloodied. They are still wondering what happened to them when Corvus appears on the scene, saying the 2 should have just obeyed him, but they didn't, which is why he had to kill them. Trias almost pees his pants when he realizes that Corvus just took down a class 5 strong warrior by himself. Calyx then asks Corvus why he didn't leave since the exit is already open. He wants to know if it is pride, and Corvus tells Calyx that he can call it that. Calyx mocks him, reminding him that he is a dark knight, so there shouldn't be anything called pride in his dictionary. Corvus agrees with him, but says the pride held by a strong person is that of law and justice. He believes Calyx doesn't understand this yet. Even though they greatly outnumber Corvus, Calyx still looks absolutely worried. After a brief stare down, Corvus makes his move, and with his great speed, he easily cuts down one of the mercenaries before they can even react. His partner is about to overreact to this when Trias stops him, telling him that he is going to get himself killed. Even Kraut could not help but admit that he was overwhelmed by Corvus's momentum. Calyx realizes that the team is already panicking, and he urges them to calm down because the first thing is for them to confirm Corvus's status. Calyx mentions that Corvus's clothes are torn and it appears that his stamina is already drained. With this analysis, Calyx tells the team to surround Corvus with teams of 3 or more and box him in so he can't escape. The team acknowledges Calyx's orders, but Corvus believes that they are just being proud. A dark purple light starts glowing around Corvus, and when Kraut sees this, he realizes that it is the aura of a class 6 warrior. Calyx then screams at number 2 to activate the slow artifact, and the dude does as told. Before Corvus knows it, he gets hit with the slow effect, which will suppress his movements to 1 rank lower. Calyx is relieved to see that Corvus has been demoted to the same class as Kraut, but Corvus still lunges at them, saying whatever they do is pretty useless. He aims his attack at one of the mercenaries, and the dude freezes in fear, but before he can cut him down, Kraut jumps in to protect the dude with his shield. Corvus's sword hits the shield so hard that it cuts off a portion of it. This shocks Kraut because it shows just how dangerous Corvus's attacks are. Calyx then screams at one of the numbers to reinforce Kraut's weapon. Using the artifact that blesses the weapon, Kraut's weapon is upgraded to class 6. Calyx then tells Kraut to go on the attack, urging him to keep attacking, and even if Corvus attacks him, he should just counterattack. Kraut acknowledges this, leaving Corvus to wonder if Calyx's plan is to wear him out until he runs out of mana. Since this is their plan, he decides that he is just going to finish the battle before then. Kraut goes after Corvus, and as their swords clash with each other, Corvus becomes worried because Kraut looks absolutely confident. Corvus realizes that he is not going to last against Kraut if he continues conserving his mana. He decides that he is going to reduce the openings even if it costs him an arm. Calyx also analyzes the situation and figures out that they might have escaped getting massacred, but they can't relax just yet. Calyx quickly figures out that Corvus would be looking to gain the psychological advantage, even if it costs him an arm. He knows that Corvus would still be able to take them on once his speed returns, and he immediately tells the numbers to prepare target magic and guide magic. Calyx knows that Corvus will be having second thoughts about losing an arm to a knight lower than himself, leaving him to wonder what the guy's going to do now. Kraut goes on the attack, and Calyx immediately tells the mercenaries to deploy the artifacts. The moment Corvus hears that they are preparing the target magic and guide bolt against him, he figures out that things have gotten really troublesome. Corvus is still thinking about this when a bolt flies toward him and almost impales him, but he manages to dodge the attack. Kraut uses this opportunity to go after him. Kraut almost cuts his head off, but Corvus blocks it with his short sword. While operating the crossbow, Calyx knows very well that Corvus's level is higher, but they still have the advantage, and if they continue pushing, they might win. Even though Corvus is on the defensive, Calyx continues firing the bolts at him, forcing Corvus's athletic talents to emerge. At this point, Corvus is totally stressed, wondering just how long they plan to keep firing the bolts at him. Suddenly, Corvus notices that Calyx has been the one calling the shots, and at this point, he has to do something about him. He decides to ignore Kraut and just go for Calyx instead. Corvus makes his move, and he leaps toward the group, and Kraut prepares himself to engage him. However, he blitzes past Kraut and cuts his shoulder before he even knows what is happening. With this, he bypasses Kraut's defenses and heads straight for Calyx. Kraut panics when he figures out that Corvus is going for Calyx, and he decides to grab his attention in whatever way he can. He tries to punch Corvus, but he misses, and before he can make another move, Corvus leaps onto the wall to propel himself toward Calyx. With this, Corvus is able to bypass all of the defenses, and he has Calyx straight in his sights. Calyx sees him coming, and he realizes that all humans are the same because they tend to make the best choices based on their situation, environment, and psychological state. He figures out that Corvus was pissed that he was being pushed back, and this dulled his judgment. Corvus's whole aim shifted from destroying the artifact to killing Calyx. Calyx already assumed that Corvus would make the same best judgment as him. It dawns on Calyx that he still has Alchem's bracelet on him, and as long as his head isn't cut off, the bracelet's effect will kick into action. With Corvus close to him, Calyx fires another bolt at him, forcing him to change his posture so he doesn't get impaled. Corvus realizes that the change in posture has messed with the amount of power he can put in his sword. Since Kraut and the others are coming at him from behind, he really doesn't have the time to fix his stance, which means he can't cut off Calyx's head. So he instead plunges his sword into him. Kraut and the others watch in horror as Corvus pushes all of his sword into Calyx's heart, ultimately turning Calyx's chest into a funnel. Kraut watches in dismay as the young lord he is supposed to protect coughs up blood in his presence. Corvus smiles mockingly at Calyx, telling him that he finally got him. Calyx remains silent while staring at the status window, which just informed him that Ferrum Infinitus has been activated and his death has been postponed for 72 hours. Calyx is relieved to hear this, and he figures out that it is his turn. He activates the Poinatellum skill, which ignores the opponent's defense to deal fixed damage and makes it totally unavoidable. Calyx believes that should take Corvus off the table, and before Corvus knows what is happening, he realizes that Calyx is moving, even though he just stabbed him in the heart. Suddenly, Corvus feels a sharp pain in his back, and this is Calyx pushing a dagger into his back. Corvus's brain goes into shock as he tries to understand what just happened to him. He knows that Calyx should be dead the instant he stabbed him in the heart. Calyx knows what is going on in his head, and he tells him that he doesn't need to understand what just happened since he is about to die. Corvus coughs up blood, and this is the last thing he does as he joins his ancestors in the afterlife. The status window confirms Corvus's death, and it also shows Calyx's injury. Because of his recent battle, his level jumps from 18 to 27, which is a forced advancement. Kraut screams at the top of his lungs, asking Calyx if he is fine. Trias talks about how Calyx should be dead because the sword pierced through his heart, and Calyx lets them know that he is still alive thanks to Alchem's bracelet. Trias is shocked to hear this, and since Kraut has no idea what this is, he asks Trias. Trias mentions that the bracelet has a life-prolonging effect, which means Calyx's life has been extended for 72 hours. But if he doesn't get treated in time, he is going to die. Kraut freaks out when he hears this, but Calyx urges the two to calm their nerves. He tells them to search Corvus's corpse because he is likely to have a return scroll. Trias looks through Corvus's body, and he finds the scroll. Calyx assures them that his survival probability just went up. Calyx tells them that it is hard for him to move, so Kraut should cut the sword. Kraut raises his sword and he maxes out his concentration level, temporarily increasing his ability. The mercenaries are shocked when they see light emanating from Kraut's sword, and Trias realizes that this can only mean Kraut is operating as a Class 6 knight. With precision, Kraut cuts the sword's handle, and Calyx tells him to cast freezing magic on the sword fragment lodged in his chest to stop the bleeding. Once he's done this, he also tells him to pour an intermediate level potion on the sword. While doing this, Calyx notices that Kraut's eyes are filled with water, and he urges him to get a grip. Calyx teases him, reminding him that he is going to be in a whole lot of trouble if his master dies under his watch. With Calyx's playful motivation, Kraut is able to apply the potions that Calyx told him to. After he is done with everything, Calyx assures them that he will make it unless he suddenly gets killed again. Kraut lets Calyx know that he is going to save him no matter what. Kraut plans to take Calyx to the High Priest, but Calyx reminds him that there is someone who rivals the High Priest's power. Calyx tells Kraut that they need to return to Posnu with the return scroll and go to Edelun. Kraut is shocked to hear this, and Calyx tells him that if Edelun demands a price for the treatment, he should tell him that he is going to pay with his body. Calyx assures Kraut that Edelun will carry on with the treatment if he hears this. Calyx also tells Kraut to leave whatever happens after to his future self, and after saying this, Calyx finally passes out from exhaustion while leaving everything in Kraut's hands.